Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. The story takes us to the capital of the Howard Empire, in 3589 BC, when tongues of flame engulfed the castle. A powerful explosion was heard. The inhabitants tried to escape the fire, while the story told us that after a nobleman kidnapped a newborn baby dragon Joseph, his rage fell upon the Howard Empire. The boy and the girl suddenly turned around at a loud scream. A huge dragon was standing on the roof of the building. The guys began to lose consciousness from horror. The monster began to cry red tears and ask how pathetic people dared to take Royce. Joseph began to concentrate energy in his throat and say that only the death of tens of thousands of nobodies can calm the soul of his baby. The monster began to burn the settlement, and the story told us that the dragon, having fallen into a rage, destroyed half of the Howard Empire. Such was the story. Crossing his arms, the main character told us that somehow he became that baby dragon. He remembered himself from his past life, lying on a hospital bed, and noted that in his past life he was a man who could die at any moment. A bright pink flash appeared in the protagonist's imagination, and he declared that it was great to be reborn as a dragon, which is a symbol of longevity. But the girl touched him. She asked with a smile on her face what Royce was thinking about. Examining the guy, she asked if he was thinking about something funny again, to which she received a negative answer. Looking at Bill, the protagonist asked if he was sure that the snow giant he was talking about was somewhere out there. Turning around, the man answered that it was so. A long time ago it was seen wandering around these places. Bill imagined a huge monster and thought that according to eyewitnesses, this monster should be avoided at all costs, since it is huge, like an entire mountain, and its body is made of stone. Bill smiled and said that the snow giant sleeps most of the time and has a gentle nature, which is why he rarely attacks first. The main thing is not to disturb him. The dumbfounded Royce covered the man's mouth and asked him not to tempt fate in vain. Turning around, the protagonist asked for forgiveness. The carriage wheel hit a stone. The boulder began to roll down the mountain. It rolled at great speed. The stone rolled towards the abyss. It crashed into a huge boulder that stood on the edge of the cliff. The boulder staggered from this. Royce shuddered when he saw the boulder stagger. The boulder rolled into the abyss. There was a powerful blow. Watching this, the protagonist turned to Bill. Turning around, the protagonist said that they had problems. The guys began to drive away from the giant. The dumbfounded Royce told us that the problem is that death often comes without warning. Even the plot of the comic book is trying to kill him. The monster threw a boulder at them. Bill was horrified by the stone flying at them. The protagonist stepped on his head. Royce created a magic seal in front of his hand and used slow down, after which he told us that he was not going to sit still and wait for his predetermined death. A light aura enveloped the stone. It suddenly fell to the ground. The guys rushed into battle. The protagonist began to hit Bill on the head and say that he had accelerated. Having created a pink barrier in front of himself, Royce declared that he would survive at all costs and fulfill his dream of a happy, carefree, and long life. Joseph appeared before the warriors. The guy frowned and screamed that Joseph should surrender. Today his revenge on the Howard Empire would end. The dragon looked at them with an enraged look and said that they still would not calm down. Looking at the warriors, the monster said that the destruction of half the empire for the death of his cub was too small a price. Joseph opened his mouth wide and screamed that he would tear them apart and then destroy the rest of the empire. The guys ran towards the dragon. The protagonist was reading the 7th chapter of the comic. He was staring at the monitor. His face was interested. The protagonist looked down at the guys who were fighting Joseph. His face was calm. We were shown the human nervous system and told that amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, is a disease in which motor nerve cells are affected, leading to paralysis and final death of the muscles of the entire body. The protagonist remembered sitting opposite the doctor and telling us that he was given such a death sentence at the age of 25. He had no family, no children, money that he had saved for a bright future. The guy remembered falling to his knees and noting that his young body in the prime of life, everything was destroyed by one disease. The exhausted protagonist lay in a hospital bed and said that 4 years had passed since he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. He was 29 years old. His body was completely emaciated. The protagonist continued to read the comic. Looking at the warrior, he noted that the only thing that saved him was a stupid comic. He continued to read it with an interested look. His cardiogram suddenly began to behave strangely. The protagonist paid attention to it. He began to close his eyes and came to the conclusion that this would be the end of it. The doctor ran to him. The protagonist began to lose consciousness and emphasized that he was sorry that he never managed to read the entire comic to the end. His pulse beat for the last time. The protagonist saw a bright flash in front of him. The guy watched him in surprise. He was delighted. Royce was taken aback when he saw himself in the mirror. His face was dumbfounded. He began to scream in horror. A loud scream was heard in the castle while the protagonist told us that he had become a dragon. His face was serious. Looking at his hands, Royce began to reason that at first he thought he was unconscious. He denied reality. The frightened protagonist stood in front of the mirror. A fiery aura hovered around him. Joyful Royce thought that he accepted reality because he was reborn as a dragon. The protagonist presented a fresco of a monster and told us that in countless novels and comics, dragons have never acted as weak creatures. It is a sin for someone who will be reborn as the strongest creature in the universe to complain. Moreover, Royce imagined various creatures and noted that the lifespan of dragons is about 10,000 years. Memories from a past life appeared in his imagination, and the protagonist noted that in his past life he had to work from a young age, and then he fell ill in the prime of his life. But in this life everything will be different. To be reborn as a dragon and almost gain immortality is the highest gift. The protagonist began to make strange sounds with a satisfied look. He grabbed his face and asked why these sounds kept coming out. Shaking his tail, the protagonist noted that such a small drawback could be endured, because he had become a dragon. The guy picked him up. Holding Royce in front of him, he asked him what he was so happy about. Smiling, the guy noted that it was time for the protagonist to go eat. There were candles on the table. They put a bib on the protagonist. His look was puzzled. Royce was examining a plate of jelly. Sitting opposite, the guy asked him to eat while it was fresh, because otherwise it would become tasteless. The dumbfounded protagonist thought that it was difficult for him to get used to the sight of such a culinary masterpiece. Touching the jelly with his paw, the protagonist came to the conclusion that one should not go to someone else's monastery with their own charter. If he became a dragon, then he would have to eat what dragons eat. Royce began to eat the jelly. Closing his eyes, he thought that it tasted like strawberry, and it was quite tasty. He stuck out his tongue and continued eating. He was suddenly taken aback. Looking at the guy, the protagonist asked him to stop staring. Royce's words hurt the guy when he called him father. The upset guy asked what kind of father he was to him. Raising a finger, he asked to be called dad. Displeased, Royce watched him. Looking at the stranger, the protagonist came to the conclusion that he was also a dragon. The protagonist looked up and thought that he did not even know his name. Looking at his father, Royce asked what his name was. The upset guy clarified whether he was only now becoming interested. The protagonist listened attentively that his dad's name was Joseph. Stunned, Royce asked again. The protagonist imagined an enraged dragon who screamed that he would destroy everyone. The protagonist was horrified. He looked at the chandelier. Frightened, Royce began to move away from Joseph. He pressed himself against the door. Running away from there, the protagonist cried out that he was full. The protagonist ran down the hallway. Looking down, Royce thought that this couldn't be happening. He opened the door. The protagonist entered the library. The protagonist began to sort through various books. He began to leaf through one of them. His face was serious. Royce opened the page with the Howard Empire and noted that this was the name of the empire from that mediocre comic book he was reading before he died. Raising his head, the protagonist came to the conclusion that he had not just been reborn, he had gotten inside the comic book. Taken aback, the protagonist noted that this meant that Joseph came to him and called out to Royce. Holding a plate of fruit, he asked if the protagonist was in pain. Turning around, Royce thought that his father was kind and gentle. He imagined an enraged dragon that destroyed kingdoms. He remembered the monster screaming that he would stain the entire continent with human blood to wrest the soul of his child, who lost his life because of their arrogance. Royce thought with a satisfied look that the newborn baby dragon Joseph died at the hands of a man, which is why he went crazy. The protagonist was suddenly taken aback. The dumbfounded protagonist asked if he had any older brothers or sisters, to which he received the answer that he was their first. Confused, Royce asked if they were planning on having more children. Joseph answered with a satisfied look that they did not. He and his mother decided to properly raise his one and only. The terrified protagonist thought that if he was an only child, then he was a dead newborn. Royce was horrified by the realization. He felt sick from this, and then thought that the comic begins with Joseph's child being killed, so he goes crazy and destroys the empire. Surprised, Joseph called out to his child. He picked him up while the protagonist thought that he was just a trigger for the story to begin, an evil dragon child that would disappear before the events began. Royce began to cry and noted that he had become a dragon destined to die. The protagonist opened the door to the room. He was lying on a mountain of gold. Royce closed his eyes and stated that in his past life, his time was also limited. Looking at the gold, the protagonist noted that he could not even spend all this money, since he would die again. It was unfair. Enraged, Royce began to breathe fire and screamed that he would not die for nothing. He reached for the book. The protagonist took it. The protagonist began to read the book. Holding the pen, Royce thought that the year Joseph would turn into a crazy dragon, he should remember this moment. The protagonist imagined the pages of the comic book and thought that if he could only remember the year when this would happen, he would know exactly the time when he would die. Imagining the page of the comic book, Royce noted that it was 3589 of their era. His face was delighted. The protagonist began to write something. Looking at the notes, The protagonist thought that it was now 3099. He would die between 498 and 99 years of life. Disappointed, Royce came to the conclusion that this was only a year before adulthood. Slamming his hand on the notebook, he declared that no one would die. Grinning, the protagonist came to the conclusion that he would make sure to survive for 500 years. Royce, looking mad, emphasized the fact that he would destroy this stupid comic. There was noise in the room. The protagonist was greedily eating jelly. Joseph was surprised by this. Sighing, Royce asked for more. The happy guy answered him positively. Putting the plate on the table, Joseph said that they had a lot of food. The bug was flying around the room. It flew up to Royce. The bug was sitting on the protagonist's spoon. Dumbfounded, Joseph called out to him loudly. He waved his hand and knocked the spoon out of the protagonist's hands. Joseph examined the bug. Sighing, he said that a disaster almost happened. Holding the insect in his hand, the guy said that he was working on creating similar creatures. However, they are not dangerous for dragons. But Royce is still small. These bugs can harm him. These insects are poisonous. The terrified protagonist asked again. Joseph stood in front of him and said that the main thing is not to eat them. Royce was dumbfounded, and he didn't know he should have given it more importance. The protagonist was walking down the hallway. He was reading a book with a satisfied expression. The knight's eyes began to glow brightly. He swung his axe at the dragon. Royce was suddenly surprised. He saw the axe flying at him. The protagonist began to scream in horror. Joseph pushed him away. He stopped the axe with his bare hand. His eyes began to glow. A dark aura emanated from Joseph. There was a huge explosion. He looked at his son and asked if he was okay. Looking at his hand, Joseph said that he was sure he had set them up so that they would not harm him. After which Royce thought that in such a short period of time, he almost died twice. A few days later, the protagonist went outside and told us that his doubts had been replaced by conviction. The joyful protagonist cried out that the air was cool. He saw a huge mountain. Joseph pointed at it and said that it was the left fang of the earth. Looking at the mountain, the guy continued to tell that it was one of the two great mountains that towered at both ends of the continent. This place is famous for being home to many mysterious races. The delighted protagonist thought that the mountain was much larger than Everest. It was so incredible to see in real life what he had only seen in a picture. The protagonist noticed a blue butterfly. Royce began to catch up with it. The sky above the protagonist darkened. The clouds began to thicken. Lightning struck Royce. Smoke began to come from him. Joseph ran to his aid. Lightning struck the protagonist again. The protagonist began to tremble. The sky began to sparkle again. The third discharge hit Royce, who came to the conclusion that according to the plot of the comic, he must die no matter what. Joseph held his child and cried bitterly. The protagonist woke up in the bedroom. He was shaking with fear and said that he almost died. The protagonist remembered how he was struck by lightning 3 times. Wiping tears from his face, Royce declared that he was not mistaken and the plot of the comic was going to kill him. Taken aback, the protagonist wondered why this was happening so early. He imagined warriors fighting a dragon and emphasized the fact that there were almost 500 years left until his death. Moreover, he was going to die at the hands of people. The intrigued protagonist wondered if this was happening because he decided not to die. Stamping his paws on the floor, the protagonist loudly asked if they wanted to tell him that the story of the comic would only begin after his death. Holding his head, Royce concluded that if he survived, it meant that his father would not turn into a mad dragon. He sat silently on the bed. The protagonist began to walk away from there. Royce was serious and declared that now was not the time to relax. He had to do something. The protagonist ran down the hallway, arguing that he needed to get rid of the death scythe hanging over him by any means necessary. After knocking down the door, Royce called his father. Enthusiastic, Joseph turned around. The protagonist asked if they had any equipment for protection, while his father stroked his head. The guy said with a serious expression that they had one item, but it was too early for Royce to use it. Joseph presented the blade and noted that in order to use artifacts, he needed the appropriate power, which could be acquired through intensive training. Smiling, Joseph said that the protagonist was still a child. He would grow up a little and they could start. In a few hundred years it would be just right. Inspired, Royce cried out that he wanted to start studying now. The puzzled guy asked again. Joseph backed away, saying that it was too early for him. Joyful, the protagonist asked if it was forbidden to study the power of wielding artifacts at his age. Looking away, the guy said that it was customary to study after hibernation. He looked at the protagonist's pitiful eyes. Sighing, Joseph said that he would teach him. A joyful Royce cried out that in that case, they would start right away. Stretching out his hand, the boy said that before that, they needed to go somewhere. Joseph extended his finger. Smiling, the boy told him that a child born of a dragon must visit the elders to learn his true nature. A puzzled Royce listened to him attentively. The protagonist ran down the street to his father. The protagonist threw himself into his arms. Raising his head, he asked how they would go to the elders. Joseph was enveloped in a dark aura and asked what Royce thought. He emphasized the fact that they would fly with a satisfied look. The protagonist covered his face from the energy flows. His gaze fell on a clot of dark mana. Dumbfounded, Royce came to the conclusion that he was about to see a dragon. A huge dragon appeared before him. The protagonist was delighted. Joseph placed his paw in front of Royce and asked him to climb up to him. The protagonist sat in his father's paw. They flew up into the sky. Gusts of wind enveloped the dragon. Royce was scared. Joseph flapped his huge wings. Holding onto his claw, the protagonist asked how high they needed to fly. Turning around, his father replied that they were still too low. Joseph flew above the clouds. Looking down, Royce wondered if they were heading straight into space. The protagonist was surprised to hear that they were almost there. Joseph was heading to an island floating in the sky. The protagonist was shocked by what he saw. Turning around, the dragon told him that this was their sacred land, the city of Silver Flower. They flew up to the island. Joseph landed in front of the castle. Standing in front of the gate, Royce said that he seemed much larger up close. Joseph returned to his human form and called the protagonist to follow. They entered the room. The dragon looked at them and greeted them, and the plot introduced us to Sandra, the Dragon Lord, one of the 13 elders. Joseph bowed and introduced himself. Barothus turned his attention to Joseph's son and said that, unlike Pamuz, his grandson seemed smart and polite. Joseph extended his hand and said that they had not seen their father for a long time. Smiling, Pamuz asked if it was true that 623 years had passed since he came to introduce his wife Valentina. Joseph calmly told them that Royce was born only a month ago. Even now they were too early. Pamuz turned away. His gaze fell on the protagonist. The protagonist was surprised. They looked at each other. Royce, delighted, clarified if this was his grandfather. Pamuz was confused by what he heard. Joyful Pamuz exclaimed that the protagonist was very handsome. Watching this, the elders began to discuss that Pamuz was very happy with his first grandson, because he dreamed of him so much. Sandra stood in front of them and asked if they had come too early to learn Royce's true nature, to which Joseph replied that he thought so too, but his son asked him to teach him. Enthusiastic Pamuz shouted that his grandson was interested in learning from an early age. Annoyed, Sandra asked Royce to come to the center. Stretching out his hand, Joseph asked him not to worry, because he just needed to sit quietly. Sitting in the center, the protagonist looked at the dragons surrounding him. His face was scared. Sandra said with a serious look that they would begin. The dragons stretched out their paws, enveloped in energy. The mana in their hands glowed brightly. Royce watched the energy flows. He was surprised by this. Sandra looked at the protagonist and asked him to close his eyes, and close the eyes that would be with him for the rest of his life. The protagonist closed his eyes. He imagined various spheres and called his friend to him. A glow began to emanate from him. Looking at his hand, Sandra was surprised. Dumbfounded, Joseph cried out that this was not a natural phenomenon. Time. Clenching his hands into fists, the guy thought that a non-natural phenomenon is usually stronger than natural ones. His son is a genius. Pamuz looked at his hand and was surprised. He began to laugh and said that this was to be expected from his grandson. He has 2 attributes. He cannot believe that someone with 2 attributes at once appeared in their clan. This has not happened for a long time. The energy in Barota's hand also began to spark. Dumbfounded, Sandra asked if Royce had 3 attributes at once. The elders introduced the dragons and told that Kaidos, the first king, and Rottweiler, the most terrible dragon that was swallowed by a demon, these 2 are the only ones in history who possess the triple attribute. Looking at the protagonist, they said that from this moment on, a new story would be written. Energy flashed in the hands of the 4th dragon. Streams of mana hovered around the protagonist. Joseph covered his face from the bright light. Royce, delighted, began to scream as the spheres appeared around him. He hugged them. The protagonist looked up. The elders were staring at him. The frightened protagonist asked what happened. Joseph was horrified. Royce was sitting at the table. The protagonist imagined the spheres and thought that time, space, strength, reason were 4 unnatural attributes, a talent that made even great dragons speechless. He remembered how the elders looked at him while he reasoned that these were abilities that would help completely change the plot of the comic. With such skills, he would be able to fool history alone. Confused, Royce wondered if this was why the plot was trying to kill him. Sighing, the protagonist asked what good it was to have such incredible powers if he could die at any moment. Royce's face was dumbfounded. Placing his hands on the table, the protagonist noted that not all was lost. His powers had brought him to a crisis, but they had also given him opportunities. Flipping through various books, the protagonist reasoned that honing his skills would greatly increase his chances of survival, especially since he was not the real Royce from the comics. Holding books on sacred power and martial arts standards in front of him, the protagonist noted that he still had memories from his past life, and he knew what crises were coming, so he was going to make the most of it and survive. A mage appeared in his imagination, causing Royce to think that where magic creation and attributes were closely linked together, it was sacred power. He introduced the warrior and added that there were also martial arts that allowed him to work with both the body and attributes at the same time, and then wondered what would be better to start learning for survival. Smiling, the protagonist asked if he should take up both books at once without thinking. The enthusiastic protagonist said that he was a dragon blessed with mana, the only one with 4 attributes. With a little effort he could do it. Opening the books, Royce cried out that he would start right away. He suddenly turned around. Joseph brought him a tray of food. The protagonist began to drool. Looking at the food, the protagonist thought that these magical foods contained a large amount of energy, due to which a mere mortal could explode if he ate them without thinking. Royce imagined a dragon and thought that they had an organ called the dragon's heart, which allowed them to convert attributes into mana. While eating all the food, the protagonist came to the conclusion that the more he ate, the sooner he would become big. Joseph watched him. Sighing, the boy said that he was tired. The protagonist was fast asleep. A dark sphere appeared above him. The energy began to transform. It began to turn into a fork. The transformation was complete. The fork began to fall. It hit the floor. The dark energy began to fly away from there. The room was dark. Sunlight enveloped the castle. Waking up, Royce asked how he fell asleep, noting that he remembered eating. The protagonist heard a voice from behind the door calling him to eat. Getting out of bed, the protagonist replied that he was coming. He suddenly tripped. Royce fell to the floor. In front of his face was a fork stuck in the floor. The dumbfounded protagonist said that he almost died. A string was tied to his tail. His rabbit was torn. As Royce left the room, he said that he was the only one he could talk to, and that he would have to ask his father to fix it. Sitting across from him, Joseph assumed that the protagonist was upset because the rabbit had broken. Smiling, he said that his father would fix it, so the protagonist shouldn't worry. Royce suddenly woke up. The protagonist, confused, asked when he had gotten there. Looking at the toy, the protagonist asked when they had managed to mend the rabbit. As Royce left the room, he said that something strange was going on. Joseph, taken aback, asked if he was sick. The protagonist, looking thoughtful, answered that he wasn't, but that he seemed to have started having memory lapses, and that he was falling asleep but didn't remember doing it. Joseph, confused, listened to him. Closing his eyes, he assumed that the time was coming, that he wasn't sick, but was just getting ready for hibernation. The guy introduced the dragons and told him that dragons go through 2 hibernation cycles to grow, and if he had been feeling very sleepy lately, it meant he was approaching the first cycle. Sitting at the table, the protagonist asked how long he would sleep. Royce was shocked to hear that he would sleep for about 100 years. The protagonist imagined hands reaching out to him while he slept and asked if he knew that he would sleep for 100 years. Holding his head, the protagonist thought that this was a direct path to the grave. Running from the kitchen, Royce cried out that this would not do. He tied a bandage on his head. The protagonist, enveloped in fiery mana, opened his diary. The protagonist presented his daily routine and emphasized that he needed a plan to stay awake as long as possible. Firstly, no food. A full stomach makes him sleepy. Secondly, no baths. They make him relax and want to sleep. Thirdly, he needs to try not to move, so as not to simply lose energy. Fourthly, he shouldn't approach the bed, it makes him want to wish on it. Frowning, Royce said that he would go down to find a way not to sleep at all. The exhausted protagonist walked down the hallway. He began to look around. Joseph ran up to him screaming that he needed food. The guy started poking a spoon in Royce's face and asking him to eat at least 1 spoonful. The protagonist ran away from him. Entering the room, the protagonist said that he almost swallowed the food. Reading a book, Royce said that he should not relax until he finds a way not to sleep. The protagonist read all the ways to stay awake. His vision darkened. Hitting himself in the face, the protagonist screamed that he shouldn't do that. The exhausted Royce continued to say that he shouldn't sleep. He hit himself in the face again. His vision blurred. The frightened protagonist began to scream. Smiling, Joseph asked how he slept. The confused protagonist replied that he did not sleep, but simply dozed off for a minute. Sitting in front of him, the guy congratulated him. Royce opened his mouth in surprise when Joseph congratulated him on his 100th birthday. The plot takes us back 100 years, when the guy entered Royce's room and called him. Holding a bowl in his hands, he said that he brought a snack. The protagonist was sleeping on the floor. Smiling, Joseph thought that his son had hibernated while reading a book. He put his son on the bed. Standing over him, Joseph noted that it would be good if the protagonist ate some magical foods before going to bed. The upset guy reasoned that nothing could be done if Royce had already fallen asleep, although he could be woken up. Stroking the protagonist's head, the guy noted that they would see each other soon. Joseph was sitting at the table. He was suddenly taken aback. Opening the door, the guy asked what the sound was. Royce was lying on the ground, under the destroyed bed. Examining his son, Joseph asked if he was injured. Examining the room, the guy thought that there were no signs of forced entry. Examining the legs of the bed, the guy wondered if it turned out that they just broke, although they were made of solid wood. Joseph picked Royce up from the floor. The ceiling began to collapse. While the protagonist's father was thinking that over the past decades, many inexplicable things had happened to him, he had a feeling that someone was trying to kill the protagonist. A floor lamp with candles fell and set Royce's bed on fire. The protagonist was sleeping soundly at that moment. Creating a sphere around himself, Joseph thought that he had no idea why such things were happening around him, but he needed to create all sorts of protective barriers around him. Blood began to flow from the guy's nose, while he reasoned that his lifespan would be shortened, but it did not matter at all. Looking at the sky, Joseph thought that he had not slept a wink for 60 years, guarding Royce's sleep, and that his son had been in danger more than 4,000 times. Standing on the cliff, the protagonist wondered if someone was really trying to kill him, but he did not know who could do such a thing. Looking around the settlement, the protagonist emphasized the fact that only some races knew about the existence of dragons. He did not understand who would dare to ignore his existence, trying to harm his child. Frowning, Joseph thought that only other dragons could do such a thing, but newborns were highly respected. The corridor was dark. Suddenly, a powerful magical explosion was heard. A dark aura surrounded the guy. His face was furious. A crowd of knights stood in front of him. Joseph watched them. The warriors rushed at him. The guy stretched out his hand. A powerful stream of mana flew past them. Darkness enveloped the room. The warriors did not see anything. They were suddenly killed. A powerful series of attacks hit them. Joseph clenched his fist. In front of him lay a mountain of armor. Standing in front of Pamuz, the boy listened to how it was inevitable. Geniuses often had to face the difficulties of fate. This was not the only test he would have to go through. Joseph was scared. Frowning in despair, Pamuz noted that this was just like what happened to the first Dragon King. Standing in the middle of the room, Joseph came to the conclusion that Royce's talent was so powerful that fate itself wanted to take his boy. Clenching his hand into a fist, he declared that this would not happen. The furious boy came to the conclusion that he would protect him. We were brought back to the present, when the protagonist woke up. He was standing in front of a mirror. Royce was looking at himself with a thoughtful look. Looking up, the protagonist asked if he had grown. The furious protagonist clarified that he had only grown that much in 100 years. A shaking Royce said that he felt like he was just taking a nap during class and he couldn't believe that 100 years had passed. He suddenly stopped and realized that he had survived. The protagonist remembered something trying to kill him. Looking up, Royce wondered if he was safe while he was sleeping. He looked thoughtful. Spreading his arms, the protagonist stated that the only thing that mattered was that he survived. Joseph came to the door and said that it was time for lunch and he should go down to eat. There were dark spots under the guy's eyes, after which the protagonist asked why he looked so exhausted and if he was sick. Royce remembered running away from him and noted that he had caused him trouble. Inspired, the protagonist declared that from now on he would be an exemplary and obedient child. Turning around, Joseph heard his son's voice asking him to wait for him. Royce ran after him and said that he was very hungry. Walking down the hallway, the protagonist asked his father to get some sleep. The protagonist stood under a tree. Sunlight enveloped the treetops. Royce swung his wooden sword. He swung it. The boy raised dust around him. The protagonist looked at his blade. Beads of sweat were running down his face. He stopped when he heard someone calling him. Royce turned around at the voice. Someone addresses Royce. The boy turned around when he was called sir. Someone hands him his towel. The blonde notices that it was finally brought. The fairy frees herself from the towel and sighs. Clarice looks at him and says that she sees that he has already gotten used to his human form, and continues that this is to be expected from the descendant of the great dragon clan. Royce looks at her with displeasure, to which she asks him what is wrong. The boy frowns, saying that 100 years have passed, and asks her to stop calling him sir. The girl crosses her fingers and retorts that he is her master. She clenches her fists and says that for her, as a fairy of starlight, it is a great honor to serve the great dragon. Royce smiles and asks again about the honor, because he remembers how she told him the same thing the very first time. The voiceover says that some time has passed since the end of hibernation. He is sitting in the guise of a dragon reading a book. Royce turns around at something. There is a large box with a gift in the room. Royce looks around saying that he heard something. A strange sound comes from the gift. The fairy flies out of the box screaming that it was incredibly cramped there. Royce got scared and raised his paws. He hit the girl with his tail. Clarissa flew into the wall. The dragon turned in horror at the creature from the box. Royce frowns and asks her what kind of huge fly she is. The guy pokes her with a stick in bewilderment. Clarissa stands up dizzily while he asks what it is. Clarissa asks him again, displeased. She shakes herself off after the unpleasant transportation. The fairy smiles sharply, saying that she is very happy to meet the dragon hatchling and that she is a starlight fairy named Clarissa and that it is a great honor for her to serve him and bring him joy. Royce stands with his wand and stares at it. Clarissa hangs on the wand and awkwardly asks him to release her. Royce sits up and says, perplexed, that let's say that she is a starlight fairy, but what does she mean by bringing him joy? Clarissa pulls the fabric and asks him to freeze in anticipation. She pulls the fabric back. The fairy shows him the wardrobe, saying that for the holy and powerful dragon baby, the fairy clan proudly presents the Starlight Fairy Dress-Up playset, which has 23 different outfits. And since fairies have no gender, there are both male and female versions, as well as special outfits for demons and celestials, and a special limited edition set. She stands under the light and continues that the best part of the set is this. Clarice raises her hand and says that it is her, as she belongs to the Starlight Fairy clan and also has a flawless figure that will make any outfit look stunning. Royce looks at it in horror, thinking that it is a pervert's set. The dragon awkwardly asks if he is suggesting that she be played with as a toy. Clarice raises her finger and replies that it is to be expected from a descendant of the great and powerful dragon clan. Something pulls her while she continues that he understood everything on the first try. Royce turns everything upside down with cries of discontent. The guy looks displeased while remembering that he asked his father then what kind of gifts these were, to which he received in response that such a toy ranks first in requests for newborns. However, this does not concern him, that in this world it is normal to play with live fairies or in war, but for him it is all creepy and he tried to send the fairy back. Clarissa refuses through tears and asks him to leave her, because she can do anything, even clean or do laundry. Royce looks with disgust as she asks him not to kick her out. He listened to her and learned that it turns out that being a dragon's friend is a great honor, and a guaranteed career growth for her as a fairy, and that the first king of the fairies once united all the clans and was a child's toy of the first king of the dragons. He also recalled that Clarith never stopped whining and that's why he kept her as his subordinate. Fairy looks at him and asks what he was thinking about, while he thinks that at 800 years old she knows much more than him and moreover, she turned out to be more than useful to him. He looks at her and replies that nothing like that and that he has stretched his body and is therefore ready to start studying, to which she says that she understands him and asks to wait a minute. Fairy puts her hand into the portal, while Royce explains that she has the attribute of space and can store things in subspaces, because now she is a kind of mobile chest of drawers for him. Fairy takes out a large book from there. Clarith puts her hand on the book saying that today he will study the separation and manifestation of mana advanced course, to which the guy thanks her. She takes out various objects, while Royce understands that subspaces are a very convenient thing. The guy looks at the set table with satisfaction and continues that he needs to learn this himself as soon as possible. The guy sits at the table and reads. He looks at the lightning in the sky. The guy puts the book down and says that it was quiet for a few days, and now it has started again. The thunder has broken out even stronger. The lightning is getting ready to strike a specific place. Clarice calls out to Royce. The guy stretches out his hands to the lightning with satisfaction. He clenches his fist. Royce smirks. The blonde looks at the sky with satisfaction and says that in his life he has been struck by lightning 100 times, no less, but now everything is different. Clarice notices the attribute of reason on him. Royce remembers that, taking advantage of the fact that more powerful forces flow towards weaker ones, he was going to absorb the lightning with an attribute stone, turning it into a mid-level attribute stone. Royce looks at the stone with satisfaction and says that since he has pumped up the attribute of reason enough, it is time for the next one. The blonde looks around for another one. The guy looks at the sky. An energy barrier protects him from lightning. The fairy is shocked to recognize the spatial reality distortion field used. She continues to explain what an advanced spatial reality distortion field is, since its speed is almost equal to the first level. Clarissa smiles and says that even for such a blessed dragon, this is a huge improvement. The blonde happily continues that being a subordinate of this great being, she can become the most important fairy in history. Royce thinks contentedly that starting to study spaces was a good idea, since now he will be able to block some assassination attempts with the spatial distortion field. Against the background of various symbols, he continues that the attribute of space will soon reach the first level. His strength and time are already at the third. His mind is still at the fifth. The guy looks at him and thinks that he focused on the attribute of space in order to survive, so it affected his other attributes, and it will take him much longer than he thought. Royce clenches his fist and says that nevertheless, he already sees a ray of hope and he will never give up. Royce turns around and is about to continue. He looks at the mountains and asks the fairy to get the next book, to which she agrees. There is a chandelier hanging in the room. Royce asks someone where he needs to go. Joseph looks down sadly and answers that he needs to go to the Silver Flower, because this month the elder ends his duties. Royce asks again about his grandfather, to which he corrects him, because he is still an elder and calling him grandfather is impolite. The blonde continues to eat, saying that all his grandfather's friends are also grandfathers, to which he gives in. Royce looks at a piece of meat and clarifies whether the grandfather's departure is connected with his father's trip to the Silver Flower. Joseph awkwardly scratches the top of his head and answers that he received an invitation to take the elder's place in his place. Royce gives him a thumbs up and congratulates him on his promotion, to which he says that it is true that his father is a good man. The blue dragon smiles as the boy thinks that he is not the only one who grows and improves over the years, and his father has been at the highest level for a long time and has finally reached level 0 of the darkness attribute. He imagines his father saying that it is incredibly difficult for a Darkon to reach level 0, and his father managed to do it in his 4,000 years. Royce looks at him contentedly and continues that he could have claimed the role of the final boss with such success. The boy introduces the dragon and explains that according to the story, Joseph is a dragon who went berserk and destroyed an entire continent with only 2 attributes of level 0, darkness and demonism, and it was also said that Joseph, covered in completely black spots, was the real second coming of the devil. Roy sighs, because he understands that this will not happen, since he has spent the last 150 years trying to prevent such an outcome. Joseph awkwardly wants to ask a question. The blonde looks displeased and insists. The dragon replies that he thinks he will not be able to return home for some time. The brunette stood up and said that usually a parent who raises a child cannot claim the role of an elder, and no female has ever handled his role better than him. But before the transfer of the post took much longer, only he managed to reduce this period to 10 years. Royce covers his face with his hands and asks again about 10 years. Joseph tries to correct the situation. The blonde smiled and answered that everything is fine and that time will fly by. The father is perplexed, but he explains that it seemed to him that it would take much more time, but he will survive only 10 years. The guy closes one eye and continues that in any case, he has just started studying martial arts, so everything will definitely be fine with him. Joseph hugs his knees resentfully. Royce looks at him perplexedly, asking if he is upset because he is not crying because of his departure. The brunette asks through tears what he is talking about and if he still wants to eat. He sadly leaves, saying that he will get some snacks. Royce lowers his eyelids and replies that he should not be so upset, because he is not a child anymore. The dragon is standing near his estate. Joseph in his dragon form says that the food is in the refrigerator, and he should not skip meals for the sake of training, and that the potions and medicines for emergencies are in the 3rd drawer in his room. Royce starts to get angry, saying that he understands everything and that he can go on his way, because he has been telling him the same thing for an hour. Joseph looks at him sadly, while he continues that he is not a child and will be able to take care of himself for about 10 years, while he insists that he is still a child. The dragon holds out something and says that it is a natural object called a communication stone. The guy took one in his hand, while he continues that they were originally paired objects, and therefore he can talk to the one who has the second stone, even if he is very far away from him. Royce is happy that it is rare and expensive. The boy smiles and asks if he will be able to contact his father. Joseph stands there, confused. He makes a serious face and says that if he thinks about it, the signal will not reach there. Royce exhales and thinks that his father seems smart, but sometimes his brain clearly fails him. The boy turns away and says that, as they say, if there is no news, then the news is good, and therefore his father should not worry and go to the Silver Flower. The dragon prepares to take off, saying that it is time for him to go and that if he needs anything, he can find it in his pantry. He flies away and continues that he can use his office and do not forget to eat. Joseph almost flew away and asks him not to go far from home. Royce smiles and calls his father a fool. However, he remembers the footage of how he saved him from countless dangers for hundreds of years, and he cannot let his efforts go to waste. Royce smiles and says that in any case, he is now alone for a while. The blonde happily goes to the estate, because it all belongs to him now. Royce sits in front of the book, displeased, and realizes that this is exactly what he thought. Clarissa cries and asks him to help her. Some creatures laugh, because they found her. She tries to break free and asks them not to come closer. They caught her. 2 silhouettes laugh while the fairy calls out to her master for salvation. Royce takes her. He asks them displeasedly what they are doing here. 2 creatures look at him. The twins run to him. They say something about what his father told them. Royce shows his finger and asks them to speak one by one. Julie clenched her fists and says that his father went to the city of Silver Star and left them with him. Kevin continues happily, saying that he added that he would return in 10 years and that they look like him. The guy listens with displeasure to the fact that they thought he would be bored and that's why they came to play, and the second one says that this is exactly how it is, because they never get bored, but he might be the only one who is really sad. The blonde asks them to leave, to which they scold him for not doing this. They continue while Royce explains that the 2 troublemakers are twin dragons, and that this happens about once every 10,000 years, and that they live on a nearby peak. He remembers how his father introduced him to them a long time ago when he was worried about not growing. Royce thinks that they seemed cute with their silver hair and chubby cheeks back then, until he played with them a couple of times. Royce realizes with displeasure that since then they have been visiting them often and have not stopped bothering him, and he thought that he would finally be able to be alone and study properly. The blonde holds his head and wonders why his father did this to him. The twins grumpily say that they came to him because they thought he was bored. Kevin stands with the sword and adds that he even brought toys to play with. Royce looks at the sword in surprise. He took it from his twin. The boy looks at the weapon and wonders what it is. Royce asks them where they found it. The children are thoughtful. They think about the staff. Julie shows a couple more. To which the brother replies that they found it in their father's storeroom, and she adds that she also brought this from her father's storeroom. Royce clarifies whether they at least asked permission. The twins stand awkwardly while the boy realizes that it was stolen. Royce examines the sword, inside of which is a space attribute stone, and its attribute damage is much greater than his. The boy peers into the stone. He realizes that it is a magical pattern. Royce examines the sword and says that it looks like it has some kind of function and asks Clarice what she thinks about this, to which she receives in response that the pattern is broken and therefore it has lost its functionality. She spread her arms out to the side and continues that she doesn't know for sure because the magic is very high level, but usually such swords have a spell of subspace warehouse for travelers. She peers at the pattern and continues that given the complexity of the pattern, the local subspace will most likely be huge. Royce smiles and clarifies if this is true, because in that case. The guy picks up the sword and says that he wants to check what's inside. He is mercantile happy that the sword from the dragon's treasury is probably in his subspace, a huge number of things, and they all now belong to him. The plot moves to a few hours later. All three are desperate. The twins say that this is very boring and are waiting for it to end. Royce says that everything is ready and they suddenly perk up. Royce is glad that he fixed it, to which the children urge him to begin. The guy looks at the sword and asks them to calm down, because first he needs to pour in attribute damage. He uses his attribute on the sword. The blonde looks at what is happening and notices that the attribute absorbs a lot and asks what incredible thing it can give him. A cloud of black energy flies out in front of him. It spins near the ceiling. Royce covered his face with his hands and asks what is happening, because this is definitely not subspace. A huge clot spread throughout the room. Royce peers at what is happening. There is a huge flash in front of them. The whole hall is painted purple. The plot takes us to an ice cave. Some purple something opens there. The children find themselves there. Royce opens his eyes and does not understand what is happening. He looks down, and his eyes fall out. The children fall down from a great height. They hit their heads hard. The fairy asks if they are okay, to which Kevin says that he hurt his ass. Royce asks where they are. They see only ice around. The guy realizes that they are in a cave. He looks at the sword in horror. It emits sparks. Everyone is stunned that the attribute stone was broken. Kevin is crying because Royce broke his sword. The blonde looks at him awkwardly and asks again because he did not break the sword itself, only its attribute stone. The child starts screaming out loud. The blonde asks Julie who used the sword. She thought about it, and replies that she heard that their great-grandmother used it, to which he clarifies whether she had the attribute of space. Julie sadly says that she does not know. Royce frowns and thinks that the situation is unpleasant. They need to find out about its purpose in order to understand how to proceed. Clarice calls him because there is something here. She shows her where to go. He shows her the sword. The guy raises an eyebrow and says that it was not a subspace treasury, but spatial teleportation magic that connects two places, to which he says that it looks like he is right. The blonde scratches his head and realizes that he is in trouble, because his mind was clouded by thoughts of treasures, and he should have remained calm and careful. The boy wants to leave, and the kids ask where he is going. The boy exhales and thinks that he needs to figure out where they are to get home. The twins run after him, asking him to wait for them. The group is walking through an ice cave. The girls' shoes. They look ahead and realize that they have reached a dead end. Royce uses the space attribute because he thinks that they need to break through. He hits the wall with the ball. The ice wall turns purple. Royce turns away from the shards. The kids cover their faces. The twins ask what it is and why it is cold. Royce lies in the hole, while they wonder where he is. The blonde is surprised by something, while the others try to ask him questions. Clarissa asks him what happened. They look ahead and realize that it is the right fawn of the earth. Kevin asks what the right fawn of the earth is, and his sister corrects him that it is the left one, and he is an idiot. Clarissa sadly notes that he is right, that it is the right fawn, which is located on the easternmost part of the winter continent, and this means a lot. Royce swears in horror. The mountain is very huge. The voiceover tells about the world, which is called Evan. Against the background of the map, he continues that the world consists of 4 continents lined up in a row, and on each of the corresponding ones the same climate all year round. About the spring continent, he says that the weather there is mild. On the summer one there is a tropical climate with a scorching sun, on the autumn one with a cool climate, and a lot of sunlight there is a generous harvest, and finally about the winter continent he says that the climate here is harsh, and it constantly snows and a strong wind blows. He mentions Joseph's lair, because it is located on the spring continent, on one of the peaks of the Green Mountain Range. Royce says that they are on the opposite side, on the winter continent, next to the right fawn, on the easternmost edge. The guy falls into despair. The dragon version starts crying out loud. He holds his head and thinks he understands that one of the cliches of comics about reincarnating into a dragon is running away from home, but this is too much. Royce cringes and continues that he never even thought about running away to the outside world, where danger is at every turn, especially considering that his life is constantly on the verge of death. The blonde looks ahead and realizes that if his father is Joseph, he imagines his furious father and understands what will happen if his father finds out that he is missing and turns into a crazy dragon. The guy reaches into his pocket, because he realizes that he has a stone for communication. The blonde looks at the stone. Royce got down on all fours, because he realized that the signal will not reach space. He asks his fairy if she thinks that they will be able to cross the sea of evil, or not. Clarice frowns and says that it is impossible. She explains that this place is one of the most dangerous and terrible, and it connects the spring and winter continents. But it is still a place where even adult dragons do not want to go, since it is teeming with all sorts of monsters. Clarice raises her hand and continues that even if they became the owners of the 4 attributes, in its current state, crossing the sea would be an impossible task. Royce exhales and says that he agrees, but asks just in case. He asks her how long it will take them to get to the left fang across the continent, to which she replies that she cannot say for sure, and that it would take about 10 years to walk. Royce thinks that if they hurry, they will be able to get home before their father returns. The guy turns to the children. He clenches his fist and says that he and they are in mortal danger. Royce points and continues that this is the right fang, which is on the edge of the winter continent, and to get home they need to walk for 10 years. Julie asks why they don't fly there. Royce asks if they want him to die in flight. He frowns and says that they won't be able to fly anyway, so they'll walk like normal people and get there in 10 years. Kevin raises his hand and asks what will happen if they don't make it in 10 years. Royce raises his finger and says that if their fathers return home and don't find them there. The children are wary and ask again. The blonde man threatens them that they'll burn down the entire continent looking for them. The children look at him like he's a fool. Julie asks what's so scary about that, to which Royce remembers that they are not people. The blonde tries to fix the situation by saying that they will be very angry with them. He adds that they might be banned from having treats and games for 100 years, to which they become scared. Royce looks at them and realizes that treats and games are more important to them than the fate of the continent. The blonde clenches his fist and continues that in any case, they need to return home before their fathers return home, and from now on he is in charge and calls on them to listen to him. The twins are indignant and both say that they want to be in charge. Royce fixes his hair and says that someone smart should become the commander, and those who think they are smarter than him should raise their hand. To which they angrily note that he is smaller than them, and even younger. Royce replies that they are small and that he is taller, and that they are only a month apart. The blonde raised his hands and continues that he also said it first, so he will be the commander. Clarissa watches from the side. She sighs and says that the road promises to be long. They walk along the mountain ridge. Royce stands satisfied, because he is now the leader, and the fairy is his assistant, and the children are just for fun. The blonde puts his hand on his hip and says that all the preparations have been made and they can move out, to which the subordinates agree. The guy looks into the cloud. He takes the attribute, saying that he has already thought about why it is so suspiciously quiet. The twins happily ask if he is going to get struck by lightning again, because they also want to be struck by lightning. Royce pushes them away and thinks that these two have the attribute of reason and a lightning strike will do them good. Royce gives in and asks them to stop clinging to him. They stand near the mountain, while he says that the clouds are too thick this time. The children prepare for a lightning strike. All 3 close their eyes. The children froze in confusion. Royce is confused, because he saw the attribute shining during a thunderstorm. He turns around at the strange sound. He is stunned by what he sees. The guy realizes that there is an avalanche behind them. Royce asks if this is a joke and picks up the children to run away. The blonde tries to save them, and they are happy about the large amount of snow. Royce tries to bring them to their senses, because they need to stop fooling around, because they need to save themselves. The children look at the avalanche. Royce is frozen in horror. Clarissa calls out to the guy. Royce glows purple. He uses the ability to split. The children fly along with the avalanche. They all spin in all directions. The children are happy with this outcome. They land at the foot of the mountains. Snow was falling under the spruce trees. Royce breaks out of the snowdrift. The guy discontentedly notes that he thought he would definitely die this time. The twins happily say that it was fun and asks to do it again. Royce is angry. Each gets a slap on the back of the head. He gives them a fist and asks when they will finally grow up. The blonde guy looks at the mountain and asks how far they have rolled. The guy looks around, because they fell because of an avalanche and everything around is covered in snow. Royce wonders where they are. Julie draws his attention to herself and says that this is a pool of snow. Kevin is getting ready to dive. Julie looks at her brother in admiration. She wants to dive too. The girl jumps. All that is visible of her is her hands in the snowdrift. Royce holds his head. He puts his hands on his hips and asks them to finish, because they have a long way to go. No one is visible in the snowdrift. Royce is angry and asks them to get out, because they need to stop fooling around. He steps in the snow, telling them to do it immediately. The guy falls through. He grabs Clarice. Royce asks her to fly, to which she says that even if she flies, nothing will come of it. They fall into a cave. Royce screams in horror. The blonde realizes he has to stop. The boy holds the ferry and rolls. There is still a lot of rolling ahead. Clarissa asks him to look ahead. There is a small path ahead, only emptiness around, and the path itself leads to a cliff. He flies and picks up speed. The boy turns over and wonders what to do. Royce looks down, stunned. The twins say that he finally came down and are holding him. They landed him on the ground. The twins say that it was a lot of fun. Royce says that he is starting to respect them. He gets up and notices one thing. The blonde looks at the icy walls and asks where they are. Clarissa looks around and says that this place does not look like a natural cave. It seems to her that someone created this place artificially. Royce crosses his arms over his chest and says that she is right. He looks at the crystal and thinks that he can tell for sure that this is his first time here, but he has definitely seen this place before. Clarice asks what they are going to do, to which he replies that they should realize that they can go in the opposite direction from the exit, so they should go now. The kids run and say that they should go this way, because they think the exit is on the other side, while Royce is angry that he just told them to go there slowly. Royce asks why they are ignoring what their commander is telling them. The guy asks why they stopped. Julie calls him over. She points at someone and asks what they are. Royce covers the light with his hand and asks what she is talking about. There is a dark tunnel ahead. There are knights in armor standing there. One of them opened his mouth. His eye is glowing. Royce opened his mouth in horror. The children stopped in fear. A knight with gray hair walks towards them at the head. The guy asks who they are. Clarice hides behind him and notices that there are a lot of them. A crowd of knights is approaching. One of them takes a step. He stomps loudly. The knights look angrily. Kevin points and notes that they look like people, to which his sister corrects him that people's eyes are not red. Royce realizes who is in front of them. He looks at him and says that he is an ice general. The guy remembers that before the start of the main plot, the world knew King Valencia and he saved everyone from great danger, and even after his death, he was never able to find peace because of them. These are the legendary ice warriors. He looked around and realized that the place where these creatures were rumored to appear is the tomb of the hero king. Royce realizes that they fell straight into his tomb and asks if this is an accident or fate. He realized that this is the tomb of the hero king, and this means that the item he read about in the comics is here. Clarice calls out to him. The ice warriors attack them while she states this fact. Royce turns to the children. He smirks and asks the dragons to get rid of them. The twins happily run, agreeing, because they will finally be able to fight. Kevin attacks from above. He prepares to strike with a turn. The guy shouts that he is the first. He strikes, but his blow is blocked. The enemy's sword cracks. The child cuts the knight in 2 counts. A glow comes from his mask. The warrior exploded, leaving behind only snow. Julie was upset, because her brother acted unfairly, because she was the first to notice him. The girl turns around. The ice warriors fall from her blade one by one. She stands contentedly against the backdrop of the explosion. Royce is surprised, because after all, these two are quite strong. The guy watches from the side and concludes that they know how to do more than just fool around, and with such skills they will be able to fight on par with second-level warriors. Royce looks at the crowd of warriors and continues that there is nothing wrong with using the twins as weapons. He smiles and thinks that on the contrary, this will help speed up the process. Royce uses time magic, the ability to slow down. He chains the warriors. One froze. His weapon is locked in his chains. Kevin asks why they suddenly slowed down, to which Julie replies that it looks like Royce casts slow magic on their weapons. Kevin clarifies if this is true, and in that case he is ready to continue. The children go on the attack with the goal of clearing everything there. The warrior looks at his weapon in surprise. Julie cuts it contentedly. The girl happily turns around. Kevin does not lag behind her in clearing. All that is visible around are the explosions of the warriors. Kevin happily notes that they all explode one after another. The twins playfully go at one warrior. He makes a displeased sound. The children finish him off, saying that he is the last one. The ice warrior is dying. He explodes. The twins look at what is left of them. Kevin sadly asks if it is over already. Julie agrees that it is a shame that it is over. Royce looks contentedly and praises them. He smirks. The guy asks if they want to have some more fun. The twins look interested. Someone pours tea. Royce drinks from a mug. Clarice holds the teapot while he says the tea tastes great. The fairy smiles and thanks him. She is wary. Off to the side, the twins continue killing. Kevin says it's great. Julie attacks someone and repeats her brother's attack. Royce points and says that arrows are flying at Kevin from the right side. He should be ready for that. Kevin deflects the blow. The blonde asks Julie to be careful with the left sword. He shouts that a stone ball is rolling towards them. The children break through it without any problems. The twins stand in the background of the destruction and report that everything is over and nothing is moving anymore. Clarissa looks in surprise and thinks that they were able to overcome so many traps and destroy all the enemies, and notes that dragons are dragons despite their young age. Royce gets up from the table with satisfaction and says that they are finished here too. Clarissa puts things away in the subspace and asks what kind of place this is. Royce replies that this is the tomb of the Hero King. The fairy opened her mouth in shock and asks if he is talking about the very tomb of the Hero King, who is King Valencia. The blonde smiles and gives her a positive answer, because this is the place where he is buried. The voiceover against the background of the army of ice warriors says that the tomb is a kind of dungeon with numerous traps and local warriors who guard the peace of their king to this day, and having overcome all this, the entity can get into the very heart of the tomb, to the place where all sorts of treasures are stored and, moreover, at the very beginning of the plot. The tomb was the goal of the protagonist and his team to improve their skills. Royce notes that this place is very good for pumping up beginners. They look ahead while he continues that he is sure that this place has not been cleared by anyone yet. The blonde rubs his hands and says that, in other words, all the treasures of the tomb belong to him. Royce turns around and notes that they are almost there and asks the children if they are ready, to which they agree. The blonde urges them to go forward in this case. A huge ice spike sticks out of the ceiling. Someone is walking on the ice. The children are delighted with the local views. Clarissa is also amazed at how huge the cave is. Julie points forward and says that there is something there, and Kevin adds that there is something huge and ugly. Pink Eyes replies that he knows it and can see it perfectly well himself. Ahead of them are bearded silhouettes, which Royce says are the final boss of the dungeon, the 10 ice generals. The guy thinks that everything is like in the comics, and in this case he knows what to do. He looks at the doors and continues that by going through that door they will be able to stumble upon the treasury. The blonde turns to the twins. They are already thirsty for the blood of these generals. Royce smiles and thinks that they are so good, and even enemies that are much bigger than themselves are not scary to them at all. Against the background of the dragon, he continues that dragons are creatures that are destined to ascend to the pinnacle of glory from the moment of their first flight, and on that very day, 2 babies bare their fangs and claws looking at lower creatures. Royce asks them if he has already told them about this. Julie turns around and says she's having fun, and Kevin says Royce is the best. The blonde is getting ready to use his magic and suggests they finish here. The kids attack the generals. One of them screams and prepares to counterattack. The twins kill him. The creature decomposes into snow with a scream. The blonde is ready to direct a cloud of energy at it. He squeezes it in his hand with a command to explode. The general looks up. The creature explodes. The twins argue whose general this is, to which the second twin says that all the others belong to him, while Royce uses slowdown and the strengthening of this very slowdown. Clarice awkwardly laughs and notes that this is just incredible. Kevin puts his hand on his head and says that it was great, and Julie says that she will sleep very soundly tonight. Royce happily suggests that they check what reward they have earned. The children are standing near the entrance to the treasury. The girl asks him to open it quickly. Kevin also asks her to open it. Royce happily takes the door handles and says that he agrees to open it. Light seeps in from within. Royce looks inside, puzzled. There are mountains of gold inside. The blonde man, his eyes shining, shouts that there is more treasure here than in his father's vault. Royce prepares to dive into the coins. The girls look at the shiny things. Clarissa calls Royce to look at something. The blonde man goes somewhere and does not hear her. The guy looks ahead. He recognizes someone. He looks at the king and recognizes Valencia in him. The king is frozen forever. The fairy also recognizes this man. She looks at him. Clarissa says that so much time has passed, but there is still a feeling that he is still alive. Royce looks down. He reads the inscriptions and realizes something. The blonde man recognizes the ancient language of the winter continent in the writing. The blonde man continues to stand there and remembers that in the very beginning, light and darkness were born, and later they were called good and evil. Against the background of the star, he continues that light and darkness mixed to form chaos, and in this chaos a boundary between good and evil arose. This boundary was called the earth on which earthly creatures were born. Against the background of a man in armor, he continues that the saints and demons did not stop arguing about which of them was ultimately more important, and each of them dreamed of dominion over the others. And in the conflict between good and evil, all earthly creatures suffered. He looks at the image of the flame and says that in the end, the earthly creatures could not stand it, and grabbed their swords against good and evil, and at their head stood the dragons as the leading creatures, followed by people and other races. And after a long struggle, the earthly creatures won and scattered across the continents of the 4 seasons, and over time, everyone began to forget about the followers of darkness and light, as well as the dragons who continued to watch over the world. Against the background of the king, he continues that he, like Valencia himself, warns them that as soon as the dragons that maintain balance on Earth return to their natural state, good and evil will reappear in the world. In the end, he adds that he, as a representative of the last generation that witnessed the war of good and evil, wants to leave everything he has to his dear people and also this message. Royce is stunned by the thought of the war of good and evil and asks if there was such a thing in the comic. The blonde gets angry because the author is an incredible freak and asks why everything becomes even more complicated each time. The blonde looks away and realizes that this is not the main thing now. The guy sees the book and says that it is the main thing now, because this book about martial arts was written by the hero King Valencia himself. The guy reasons that Valencia is the only person who was able to reach level 0, and it would not be an exaggeration to say that this book is the work and labor of his entire life, because it helped the main character of the comic become a powerful representative of the human race. Royce holds it in his hands and understands that with this book you can easily forget about all the treasures that are here. The guy looks away with displeasure. He sees mountains of gold and says that he still feels sorry to leave it all here and he will take some for himself. Royce touches the coins. He hums something against the background of the king. Valencia looks menacingly from the glacier. The ice cracks. The blonde turns around at the sound. Royce is stunned by the crack. Valencia frees herself. The guy covers his face with his hands from the fragments of the king's coffin. Royce says in horror that this can't be. The king hits the ground with his sword. He leans on the sword. Royce wonders if the hero king has come back to life. Valencia looks menacingly ahead. Royce frowns and does not know what to do. The guy stands right in front of him and thinks that this was not in the plot. The king points to the floor. The king's eyes light up red and says that this thing does not belong to him. The twins are scared and ask what it is and what is going on. Royce looks at him seriously and says that it is the hero king Valencia. Julie asks again if he is the same one. The blonde replies that it is, and in life he was a level 0 warrior, so they are not his rivals, to which the children ask again how a person can be a level 0 warrior. He turns around and says that this is exactly why they need to reincarnate as dragons. The children look at the king in horror. Valencia calls them greedy creatures and adds that the only fate for such is death. The king swings his sword. Blue energy hits his sword. Royce looks in horror and realizes that he needs to run. His legs are shaking and he realizes that his body does not obey him. He wonders if this is the effect of his power. The blonde awkwardly turns around. Julie is shaking with fear. Kevin covered his head with his hands. Royce clenches his teeth and asks what kind of nonsense this is. The little dragon gets angry and notes that he trained hard not to just die in a godforsaken place. The guy gathers 2 types of energy around himself. Royce prepares to attack. The king strikes him back. The blonde counterattacks and says that he wants to live. The king blocks his magic. Royce smiles and asks himself whether he succeeded or not. The next blow flies at his face. It pierces him right through. Clarissa flies away at the last moment. The entire floor is broken. The fairy looks on in fear. The king has broken through a huge trench. Clarissa realizes that her master is dead. Her scream is heard throughout the cave. A huge beam rushes towards the hero. He opened his eyes in amazement and thought that he was a corpse. A loud sound was heard. The protagonist covered his face and screamed. Suddenly, he exclaimed in bewilderment. Royce's eyes widened and he asked what he was still alive. The fairy closed her eyes and said how glad she was that he was alive, to which the hero replied that yes, he was fine. He looked down and wondered why he had survived. Suddenly, the protagonist's eyes widened in amazement. The man was holding a weapon in his hands, and he could hear what was happening. The girl held her hand up and told him to look there. A crack appeared on the wall. Royce's eyes widened in amazement, and he thought that he had managed to split the cave floor with one blow of his sword. He turned his head and added that it was true. The man closed his eyes and thought that he was a man. He grabbed the weapon tightly. Suddenly, the knight swung his sword and he thought that he had changed the direction of the blow at the last moment. The man grabbed his hand. The sword fell to the floor. The man lowered his head. Looking straight ahead, he thought that the young dragon was saving. Frowning, the hero asked what saved them, why. Stretching his hand forward, the knight said that they should leave and be careful. The protagonist looked at him in confusion and asked what he had just said. The stone fell to the ground. Looking at it, the fairy shouted that they should leave, this place would soon collapse. Turning his head, Royce objected. Suddenly, the man in front of him evaporated. He exclaimed in confusion. The hero looked at the crystals in amazement. They began to fall on the people, it seemed that they would die. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thought that now was not the time for this. Suddenly, he transformed into a dragon. Frowning, Royce shouted for them to transform immediately. The dragons rushed forward, and he added that they should follow him. The fairy opened her eyes in amazement. The hero rushed towards the huge crystal. Frowning, he exclaimed. Suddenly, the protagonist used the slash skill. The crystal was torn apart. The hero flew between them. Royce flew up quickly. Looking straight ahead, he shouted. The dragons were approaching the exit. The view of the tundra opened up. Gray smoke appeared. Suddenly, a blow flew across the ground. The dragons fell to the ground. Looking straight ahead, the hero said that they almost died. The man swung his sword. A thought appeared that what was that? The hero king tried to kill them. The swordsman grabbed his hand. It was said that, but then suddenly changed his mind. They almost became his neighbors in the grave. Looking down, the hero thought that what was the matter? Did the hero king not wake up to get rid of them, since they invaded the tomb? The man looked straight ahead. A thought appeared that, and also, before disappearing, he spoke to them. Closing his eyes, the protagonist thought that in any case, the main thing is that they survived. Looking at the book, he added that he had also gotten what he wanted. Clarissa held out her hand to the side and said that she thought the twins had it hard. The dragons lowered their heads and said that it had been so scary. Sighing, the hero said that first they needed to go down and find a place to rest. A view of the tundra opened up. Falling to the ground, the protagonist said that it was so nice. Suddenly, he looked at her in bewilderment. Sitting on the ground, the twins were crying. Getting up, Royce thought that he himself was scared, and for the guys it was even more traumatic. The hero held out the object in his hands. Frowning, he said that it was enough to cry and let them eat this. It would help replenish their mana. They began to eat. Closing his eyes, the protagonist thought that his mana was also almost at zero. He had never strained himself so much since his reincarnation. Lying on the ground, he said that they would rest. The twins looked at him. Lying on the ground, they fell asleep. Grinning, the fairy wished them good night. A view of the tundra opened up. Morning had come outside. People were running forward quickly. Smiling, the guy said about the snow, to which the girl replied that there was so much of it. Looking at them, the hero heard that he should not expect mercy, to which he said that since yesterday they had seen nothing but snow, weren't they tired of it yet? Closing her eyes, Clarissa replied that it was good that they were in a good mood. It was hard to stay cheerful after what they had been through. Grinning, the protagonist replied that she was right. They were dragons after all. Turning his head to the side, he added that they had descended quite decently, but had still not come across a single house, let alone a village. Stretching his hand to the side, Royce asked that, by the way, there are no monsters on the winter continent. They have not met a single one of them during all this time, to which the fairy replied that on the contrary, there are many more monsters on the winter continent than on any other. The monster attacked a man. It was heard that, moreover, because of the harsh climate there is a shortage of food. They say that hungry monsters often attack people. The continent appeared. It was heard that then why did not they come across any of them? To which the fairy replied that because of it. Kevin threw a snowball. It was said that there are 3 dragons with the most powerful energy. No monster would dare to approach them. Closing his eyes, the hero said that that's it, then there is no point in hiding and hiding. He looked in surprise, hearing that he should look there. Stretching his hand to the side, the guy said that there is smoke. Smiling, Julie replied that great, let's go quickly. The protagonist looked at her in confusion and asked again. They were looking at the burned village. Putting her hands to her face, the fairy said that apparently the village was attacked. Looking at the hero, she asked what they would do. Royce looked down and replied that there was a chance that there were survivors. They would go and check. People were lying on the ground. The hero was walking in the middle of the village. The monster was unconscious. It was heard that the village was under attack by monsters. Clarissa stretched out her hand to the side, turning to him, to which he asked that she had found something. Closing her eyes, the fairy replied that no, she thought there were no survivors. Walking forward, Kevin said that there was no one here either, to which Julie added that she wanted to eat. Throwing them food, the hero said that they were great, let them eat one at a time, and then move on. Suddenly, he looked to the side in confusion. The squad was moving forward. Kevin looked at him in amazement. The girls shuddered in surprise. The protagonist was dragging them along. They quickly ran behind the building. Sitting on the ground, the girl asked why they were hiding, and the guy added that there was a scary man there again. Frowning, Royce replied that no, those people were not scary. What was scary was the increased likelihood of death. Julie asked again, her eyes wide, and Kevin added what that meant, to which the hero said that they were close. The knights moved forward. A thought appeared that he was asking for them to pass by. The man looked away, hearing that he would allow him to report. Looking straight ahead, the guy said that there was no doubt that monsters had attacked the village. Unfortunately, there were no survivors. Looking at him, the man replied that he understood. He would personally report everything to the Grand Duke. Looking at the carriage, he turned, to which the Duke replied that he would personally inspect everything. The carriage doors suddenly opened. Kyle got out of it. Turning around, he asked if she was sure she wanted to go with him, saying that in her condition it would be better to stay in the carriage. Lowering her head, the girl replied that she was the wife of a great duke. The people on her husband's lands had died. She should at least honor their memory and console the souls of the dead. Closing his eyes, the Duke said as he wished. The girl got out of the carriage. Kate looked to the side. A burned village appeared. A mother and child lay on the ground. Closing her eyes, the girl exclaimed. Lowering her head, Kate said that she was fine, to which Kyle replied that he knew it would be better for her to stay in the carriage. Turning her head, she asked that he wanted her to feel awkward. The man sighed and said that they had been together for 10 years. but he had never managed to break her stubbornness. Grinning, the wife replied that the one whose love for his partner is stronger always loses. Looking at the man, she asked what he said, that there were no survivors, to which the knight replied that to his great regret, it was so. Looking straight ahead, he added that at this time of year the monsters usually behaved quietly. But yesterday they began to rage for some unknown reason. Looking down, the man said that it was a feeling. The creature was lying on the ground. The thought arose that the monsters were running from something. Lowering his head, the Duke said that it was his fault if he had not attracted all the guys from the village to military training, to which Kate replied that it was not so, he was not guilty of anything. The hero looked in amazement and thought, wait a minute, was the village really destroyed because of them? Turning his head, he added that damn, his conscience would bite him. The people looked away in amazement. The guy yawned loudly. Holding a weapon in his hands, the man shouted that whoever was there should come out immediately. Royce clutched his head and thought, how much more trouble can they cause? The knight raised his weapon in front of him and shouted, come on. Sitting behind the building, the hero heard that he should come out or else he would be in trouble. Frowning, the protagonist wondered what to do. They wouldn't last that long. The man's eyes lit up and he said that he had warned them. Everything that would happen next was on his conscience. Suddenly he swung his weapon. The building was hit. It began to collapse. Royce covered his eyes and exclaimed. The fairy spun in the air. She flew to the side. People were standing in the smoke. The man looked at her in surprise and said that it was the same. Looking at him, the hero heard that it was children. Putting her hand to her face, Kate said that it turned out that there were survivors after all. Smiling, the protagonist thought that this was definitely a chance. He closed his eyes and began to sob. The twins looked at him in bewilderment. Turning around, Royce told them to cry immediately. They looked at him in amazement. Suddenly they began to cry. Stretching her arms forward, Kate said that the poor things. Hugging her, the children screamed that it was scary. Frowning, the hero thought that these brats were doing better than him. Maybe their usual idiotic behavior was just an act. The man looked at him and asked if they were the only ones who survived. The protagonist closed his eyes and answered that they were. The Duke frowned and said that they had a hard time. He turned around in surprise when he heard the address. Looking straight ahead, the girl asked if they could take the children with them to the estate. The man sighed and asked if they had a choice. Stretching his hand out to the side, he shouted that they were returning to the castle and that he should prepare everything. The hero looked at him in confusion and asked what they were going to take with them. Suddenly, he was dragged into the carriage. The carriage drove forward. The fairy watched them. She opened her eyes in amazement and turned around. A fountain appeared. The protagonist was bathing in the water. Frowning, he wondered how this had happened. He thought they would just pass by if they played on his pity. By the way, the twins played very believably. The Duke looked at the girl. A thought came to him that he did not know that these people would be so good. It seems he was wrong. Looking to the side, Royce thought that, but everything turned out better than he thought. The children began to splash water. The water flew right into the hero's face. Stretching his hand forward, Kevin laughed, and the girl said how funny he was. Grinning, the hero thought that he was glad that they did not worry about anything. He looked to the side, hearing that how beautiful. The maids grinned and said that he should look at their snow-white skin, and indeed, they are so cute, they like to bathe, to which the protagonist thought that it was so noisy. Water poured from the statue. It was heard that, well, they will go get dressed and eat. A view of the room opened up. Kate looked to the side in surprise, hearing that they brought children. The protagonist turned his head, hearing that they were simply unrecognizable. The girl stretched out her hands and said that they were probably hungry. Let them sit down and eat. Rushing forward, the children shouted for food. Kate grinned as she watched them. Frowning, Royce thought how quickly they were adapting. Holding the food in his hands, he added that they would have to leave soon. However, he hoped that Clarissa would not lose her way and would be here soon. He wondered where she was now. The view of the tundra opened up. The fairy flew forward rapidly. Frowning, she thought that she was sure the carriage had gone in this direction. She needed to return to Mr. Royce. The birds attacked her. The thought occurred to her that if these snowfields had not gotten in her way, she would not have lost the trail of the master. Looking straight ahead, Clarissa thought that they should wait for her. Rushing forward, she added that she would be here soon. The view of the room opened up. The hero walked down a dark corridor. He looked away, hearing that the children could not stay with them forever. The protagonist looked into the room, hearing that she knew, but standing by the fireplace, Kate said that when she looked at them, she began to hear Rinna's voice, to which the man replied that he understood her feelings. Kyle looked down and said that but these children had nothing to do with their dead child, so it was time to let Rinna go. Closing her eyes, the girl screamed that how could he tell a mother to forget her own child. Looking away, the protagonist thought that apparently, they had recently lost a child, which is why they treated them so well. Suddenly, the girl grabbed her husband's hand. Looking at him, Kate screamed that they would become adoptive parents for those children. Royce looked in amazement, hearing this. The hero was sitting at the table. He closed his eyes and thought about how only a few days had passed, and they already wanted to become their parents. The man looked to the side. It was said that the Grand Duke Kyle was one of the 4 rulers of the Winter Continent, and also a member of the royal family. The protagonist looked straight ahead. A thought arose that being the adopted son of the Grand Duke meant instantly becoming a key figure in the country. Frowning, he thought that the Grand Duke's wife must have had a hard time. The pain of losing a child makes her make bad decisions. It was better for them to get out of here before they cause more trouble. Kate looked at her husband. A thought arose that he even felt sad from what he saw. Looking at the window, the hero thought that if Clarissa were here, they could discuss everything with her. Suddenly, he exclaimed in amazement. The fairy hit the window. Rushing forward, she exclaimed. Smiling, the protagonist asked what and where she had been for so long, to which the fairy apologized. Holding her in his arms, Royce said that next time he should always have her by his side, to which she responded approvingly. Kevin smiled and said that it was Clarissa, to which Julie added that she had returned. The fairy stretched her arms forward and exclaimed. A view of the room opened up. Wiping her eyes from tears, Clarissa said that finally, they were all gathered, it was time to continue on their way. Frowning, the hero replied that speaking of which, he thought they should stay here for a while. The fairy looked at him in confusion and asked why they couldn't just leave. Turning his head, the protagonist replied that well, they were nice to them. Moreover, the Grand Duke and his wife had recently lost a child. It would be rude to disappear like that. Clarissa looked at him in surprise, hearing this. Royce closed her eyes and said that they were not in a hurry, and they would be able to gather more information about the Winter Continent. A thought occurred to her that she had not thought that the cold-blooded Royce was vulnerable to such things. The fairy grinned and thought that she wanted to protect him more now. She closed her eyes and said that if he was worried about these people, how did he like this thought? Looking at her, the hero asked what kind of thing. Standing on the table, Clarissa said that dragons always value relationships with other creatures. The Grand Duke and his wife were the first people they met, right? To which they answered that yes, that was true. Smiling, the fairy said that they needed to be given a gift. Since they had lost a child, they needed to be helped to have one. The protagonist closed his eyes and asked what she was talking about. It was not that easy to have children. He opened his eyes in amazement and said, just a minute, and then thought that they didn't have to wait until they had a baby. The main thing was for the Duchess to get pregnant, and then they could disappear with peace of mind. Royce raised his finger and said that was a great idea, to which the fairy replied that it was so sweet. Looking straight ahead, he added that well, it was time to try on the stork image. Kate was sitting on the balcony. She looked away in surprise. Suddenly, the girl turned around, hearing the appeal. The children smiled and said that she could play with them. Closing her eyes, the girl said that they seemed bored, asked if they wanted cookies, to which they responded approvingly. Standing around the corner, the hero grinned. Frowning, he said that he relied on them. People were walking along the corridor. It was heard that they should take care of this. Looking away, the Duke said about the schedule. The protagonist smiled, standing in front of him. They froze in front of each other. Looking down, Kyle asked what happened, where his friends were. Looking at him, Royce replied that no, they were with the lady. Standing in front of him, the man asked that he was not afraid of him, to which the hero replied that he was not. Looking straight ahead, the Duke thought that usually children were afraid of him, so they did not come closer. What an unusual baby. The protagonist grinned. The thought appeared that he was so similar to. The man grinned and exclaimed. He took the hero in his arms. Smiling, the Duke said that then they would play, to which Royce replied that it was great. Walking forward, Kyle said that he would show him his office, to which the hero said that it was good. The man opened his eyes in surprise and said that so much time had passed since he saw a sincere smile on his face, to which the guard replied that he should not say. The hero closed his eyes. It was heard that this baby was like a treasure. The protagonist frowned. They were sitting at the table. It was heard that well what? Looking straight ahead, Royce asked that the mission was successful. Putting his hand to his head, Kevin said yes, and Julie added that she and the Grand Duke's wife drank tea and ate cookies. In general, they had a good time. Looking away, the hero asked what about her. Holding the paper in her hands, the fairy replied that the Grand Duke Kyle wakes up at 5 in the morning and starts his working day, has lunch at 12, then finishes his work, and trains after dinner. Standing in front of the hero, she added that the average time to go to bed is 11 o'clock at night. The average number of contacts with the Duchess during the day is about 5. This report is finished, to which the protagonist replied that it is good, very good. Looking at him, the girl turned, to which Royce replied that he should call him Commander. Stretching her arms out to the sides, she said that they do everything he says, however, for what purpose? To which Kevin added that exactly, what does the birth of a child have to do with the fact that they play with the wife of the Grand Duke? Closing his eyes, the hero said that they are still not children. The thought arose that he is younger than them. Frowning, the protagonist replied that they should listen here. The Grand Duke and his wife were still grieving over the loss of their child, so the relationship between them had become a little sour and awkward. The girl smirked. It was heard that seeing such cute children like them would improve the bond between them. The Duke looked at the hero. It was said that the grief from the loss of the child would subside, and they would gradually begin to feel comfortable around each other. Smiling, Royce said that after that, history would begin to be created at night. Stretching her arms out to the sides, Julie asked that why they would create history at night. It is better created at night, to which the hero replied that this is an expression children do not need to know. Smirking, he thought that well, and now. The protagonist threw the book on the table. Looking at it, he said that it was time to begin. The fairy looked at her in amazement, and asked that the recipes for using elixirs. What is this? Holding the book in his hands, Royce replied that he once studied ways to increase the effectiveness of elixirs, found this book from his father, and took it for himself. He was standing near the cauldron. It was heard that his father caught him experimenting with all sorts of elixirs. After his punishment, he keeps the office under lock and key. Smiling, the hero thought that he studied all this in order to survive, and he could use the knowledge in this way. It was said about an elixir for couples who have discord in their relationships. Reading about the elixir, the protagonist said that he found it. The doors of the cabinet opened. Entering it, Royce said that if anyone was looking for it, they should say that they did not know where it was, to which they responded approvingly. A glow appeared in front of the hero. With his eyes wide open, he used the expansion skill. The hero stretched out his hand in front of him. Standing in the room, he said that he thought this space would be enough. Putting his hand to his face, the protagonist said that they would begin making the elixir. A view of the kitchen opened up. The object stood on the table. The bucket rose slightly. Looking around, the fairy asked that no one was there. She was holding the elixir in her hands. Looking at the potion, Clarissa thought that she should listen carefully. Sitting in front of her, the hero said that he should sprinkle these potions on tomorrow's food for the Grand Duke and his wife. Looking straight ahead, he added that he should remember only the products that they would eat. Looking at the food, Clarissa asked what of this the Grand Duke and his wife would eat. She thought about it and froze. Suddenly, the fairy spilled the potion, saying that to hell, it would cover everything here. She moved to another room. Holding the elixir in her hands, the fairy said that they would probably bake bread, sprinkle it on the grain. She poured the elixir into the water. A glow appeared from it. A pink sphere appeared. Clarissa extended her hand to the side and used the spread skill. Particles fell onto the flour. Smiling, the fairy said that everything was ready. Rushing into another room, she said that she needed to report quickly. A view of the corridor opened up. The hero looked out from behind the corner. Looking at the room, he thought that this room was the spouse's bedroom. If Clarissa did everything that was needed, then the elixir that she added to the food should begin to work. The protagonist looked in amazement, hearing that this was how, seriously. Grinning, the maid said that the guy suddenly confessed his feelings to her, to which the girl replied that it was crazy. Walking forward, she added that that is why tonight, to which she replied that she was jealous. The protagonist hid behind the wall. He closed his eyes and said that he almost got caught. Royce looked into the room. The Duke was standing near the couch. The man closed his eyes and cleared his throat. He looked away. Kate looked away. The girl smirked and thought that it was strange that she had been so nervous all day. Suddenly, she looked up in surprise. The Duke was standing next to her. Looking down, Kyle said that she looked so beautiful today. Kate looked at him in amazement and turned to him. They were holding hands. The hero smirked and said that it was a divine night. Walking forward, Kevin asked him what he was doing here, and Julie added what was divine there, to which he exclaimed. The twins widened their eyes and said that he should tell them what was there. Frowning, the protagonist replied that children didn't need to know such things, to which they screamed that it hurt. Royce looked away and thought that everything that needed to be done had been done. A view of the castle opened up. Looking up, Kate said that it had been a long time since the weather had been so beautiful. She looked at the maids in amazement. Looking straight ahead, the girl asked what all the fuss was about this morning, to which they replied that it was because. She abruptly opened the doors. Looking to the side, the maid turned, to which Kate asked what had happened, where the children had disappeared. Closing her eyes, she replied that she had come this morning, but the children were not there, they were still looking for them. Holding the letter in her hands, the girl said that there was a letter. Suddenly, Kate snatched it from her hand. She looked at him in amazement, and asked how that was possible. Looking at the letter, the girl read that they were probably very surprised by their departure. The letter said that, however, where there is a meeting, there is also a parting. They are leaving, since their paths were initially predetermined. The hero looked away. The thought arose that they were sincerely grateful to them for their generosity, and hoped that they would be able to overcome the grief associated with the loss of their child. The forest appeared. It was said that he was sure that their relationship with the Grand Duke would only get better. The protagonist closed his eyes. The thought arose that they would also give the new life as much love as they gave them. The children walked forward. Closing her eyes, Kate said that this child knew about everything. She made a mistake. Because of greed, she burdened the poor children. Looking at the letter, she asked, by the way, what kind of new life? What could it mean? A view of the kingdom opened up. A few days later, a room appeared. It was heard that this was incredible. Looking at the girl, The priest shouted that a new life was being born inside his wife's body. Looking at him, Kate asked again. The Duke took her hands and turned. She looked at him. A letter appeared. Suddenly the girl exclaimed in surprise. Looking at her husband, she said that it was written there, to which Kyle replied that the children knew they would have a child. Closing her eyes, Kate said that they were clearly sent to them by God. Stretching her hand to the side, the man shouted that they could not help but celebrate such an event. Let them open the warehouses and distribute bread to all the residents. The doors to the warehouse opened. The man was baking bread. The guy was distributing food to the residents. A glow appeared around the bread. A settlement appeared. It was said that year the duchy would have the highest birth rate in history. Kate held the child in her arms. The thought arose that the gift given to the Grand Duke and his wife, as well as a small mistake by the fairy, would create a butterfly effect, but it was still a long way off. The children walked through the forest. The thought arose that at this very time Royce's journey continued. Raising his hands up, the guy said that he liked their journey so much, to which Julie added that they would definitely get out like this more often. Looking at them, the hero replied that their journey would last at least another 10 years. Jumping up, Kevin shouted that they would extend it to 100 years, to which the girl replied that they definitely would, and the fairy said that he should hold on. Putting his hand to his face, the protagonist thought that they had been delayed in the duchy. Looking at the path, he added that if they continued to encounter unexpected situations, their journey would drag on. The continent appeared, and the thought arose that in order to shorten the travel time, he needed information on how to do this. But right now there was no way to shorten the path. Smiling, the girl asked that there would be no monsters. Looking at the hero, Kevin said that he could tame anyone. Closing his eyes, the protagonist replied that there were 3 dragons roaming the area, spreading a smell. No monster would come near them. Sniffing the clothes, Kevin asked what the smell was. They stink, to which Julie replied that she smelled of nothing. The man held an axe in his hands, and it was heard that what about the robbers? The robbers will not appear. The tundra appeared. They were told that they were in the middle of an open area, and everything around was just snow. Even if there were bandits here, where would they come from? Smiling, the hero asked, what, from under the ground or something? Suddenly, the bandits fell to the ground. Stretching his weapon forward, the guy shouted that they should stop, let them give them everything they had. Kevin looked in amazement, and said that this was a real miracle, to which Julie replied that the bandits appeared right out of the ground. Royce opened his eyes wide and thought that it was real. The guy looked down in bewilderment. Having hit the bandit, he said that they were children. Gritting his teeth, the young man said that they had been stuck in the snow all day, and they were just snot-nosed kids, and what should they do now? Holding the weapon in his hands, the guy replied that judging by their clothes, they were from a rich family. You can ask for a ransom for them. Putting his hand to his face, the young man thought. He held out his hand and said that was great. It was better than going home empty-handed. Why were they standing there? Let them grab them. The boys looked at him in amazement when they heard that he should stop. Smiling, the hero asked if they thought it was strange. Looking at him, the robber asked what exactly. The tundra appeared. It was said that 3 children were all alone in the middle of nowhere. In their place, he would have thought about it. Turning his head, the boy asked what he meant, that there were adults nearby, to which the protagonist replied that no, there was no one, and he added that then what was he talking about? Royce closed his eyes and said that he simply suggested that they think before they do anything. Standing behind him, the fairy asked what they would do, to which the hero asked again, what did she think? Sticking out his tongue, the protagonist said that they probably had a lot of loot. He would take every last coin. Smiling, Kevin suggested playing, to which Julie replied that yes, they would go to the place where these men lived. Looking away, Royce asked what they were talking about. Putting his hand to his face, he thought that this was not a bad idea. If he was going to rob them, he should start with the lair. Stretching his hand forward, the guy asked that they stand for a long time, let them grab them. Suddenly he looked in amazement. The hero raised his hands up. Looking straight ahead, he said that they surrendered, they could take them. The bandits froze in bewilderment. Frowning, the protagonist added that the main thing is that they not hit. They walked forward. Kevin smiled, looking away. The bandits silently looked at him. Looking at the guy, he asked that but they did not seem strange to him, to which the young man asked again what he was talking about. The hero extended his hand forward. It seemed that these children were too calm, acting as if they were just out for a walk. Looking to the side, the young man asked what and what of it, would they exchange them for ransom, or sell them? Smiling, the guy said that they were there. A huge entrance appeared. The children exclaimed in admiration. Putting his hand to the wall, the protagonist thought that he had only seen such exquisite decoration in his father's estate. Was this really a den of robbers? Closing his eyes, the bandit asked that it was cool. Yes, their boss had created all this himself, to which Royce asked what the boss was, and who he was. Raising his finger up, he said that their boss. Suddenly the guy hit him. Gritting his teeth, he asked what the hell he was talking about with these brats. What if he spilled the beans later? To which the bandit replied that he was asking for forgiveness. Throwing it aside, the young man said that he should go and throw them into the dungeon, to which he responded approvingly. The cage suddenly closed. The hero was sitting in the dungeon. The children silently looked ahead. Looking to the side, the protagonist said that he could go out. Clarissa crawled out from under the hero's collar. Putting his hand on his hip, Royce said that he should comb everything around in search of something worthwhile, to which she responded approvingly. The fairy abruptly rushed forward. Sitting on the ground, Kevin asked why they couldn't go out, to which Julie added that it was so boring here. Looking to the side, the hero replied that they should sit still until Clarissa returned. They would arrange an excursion later. Smiling broadly, he thought that the lair of robbers, there was probably a lot of valuable stuff hidden here. He was in anticipation. The robber stood near the cauldron. He hit the metal. The stone fell to the floor. Looking straight ahead, the man heard them return. Bill looked at them. Standing in front of the guy, he said that it was good, they were great, and then asked how the catch was. Closing his eyes, the young man replied that it was not so good. The monsters had been raging lately, so there was no one around. Smiling, he added that it was not so bad. They came across 3 children on the way, apparently, the offspring of a wealthy family. They could ask for a ransom for them or even sell them. The man laughed loudly and replied that it was great. Walking forward, Bill said that it was not the time to just stand here. He would go and personally see those thanks to whom they would get rich, to which the guy responded approvingly. The children were sitting on the floor. The hero looked ahead in surprise. Looking straight ahead, the young man said that these were the children, to which Bill said that they really looked like children from a family with money. The protagonist looked at him in amazement and thought that he was strong. Flames appeared around the man. A thought arose that with such strength he must be at least level 3. This big guy is definitely a robber. The man looked at him and thought. Eyes appeared behind the hero. Bill exclaimed in amazement. Royce looked at him in bewilderment. Smiling, he thought that it couldn't be. The robber raised his hand, hearing the address, to which he asked what he was talking to him. Stretching his hand forward, the hero asked what he saw here another big guy. Smiling, he asked what his name was. Closing his eyes, the guy shouted that at least he knew who he was talking to, and the man said his name. Looking at him, the young man asked what was wrong with him. Putting his hand to his face, the robber said that he himself did not know, he must have gotten sick, to which the young man asked how he could get sick. Smiling broadly, the hero thought that was great. Turning around, the man said that he should look after them, he would go and rest, to which the guy responded approvingly. Bill froze, hearing that he was already leaving. Waving his hand, the protagonist said goodbye. Smiling, he said that he would see you later. Rushing after the man, the guy said that he should wait for him. The fairy flew into the room. Looking at the hero, she said that she had returned, to which Royce asked how everything went. Closing her eyes, Clarissa answered that the storerooms were empty. There was no treasure. It even seemed to her that these bandits would soon die of hunger. Looking to the side, the hero said that they were poor, they had to get into such a mess. Lowering his head, he added that although people were also a valuable resource. Looking at him, the fairy asked what he was talking about, to which the protagonist replied that it didn't matter, she had done a good job. Royce closed his eyes and said that he would be gone for a while to look after the boys, to which the fairy asked what she was doing, and she couldn't be with him. Turning around, the hero replied that no, if she wasn't there, those two would do some mischief as soon as they woke up, he would be back soon. Looking at him, the fairy responded approvingly. The protagonist took hold of the bars. Suddenly, he slid them apart. Royce took a step forward. Smiling, he said that it was time to visit the big guy. The doors slammed shut. Sitting on the couch, the man said how nice. Frowning, Bill thought that by the way, who was he? He had never felt anything like this in his life. The hero's eyes lit up. The thought appeared that there was a feeling as if there was a monster in front of him that he couldn't defeat. A chill ran through his whole body. The robber was sitting on the couch. He closed his eyes and thought that no, it couldn't be that the brat had fooled him. Lowering his head, the man said that his senses were probably dulled by sitting idle for so long. Smiling, the hero asked what he was thinking about. He waved and said hello. The protagonist closed his eyes when he heard how he left, to which he replied that he just went out. The man looked at him in amazement. The bandit grabbed his weapon. Swinging it, he shouted at him not to come near him. Taking a step forward, Royce said that he had a pretty good room. Bill frowned and replied that he didn't know how he got out, but he would close his eyes to escaping if he came back right away. Turning around, the hero asked what if he didn't come back. Looking at him, the man shouted that in that case he would have to use force. The protagonist stretched his arms out to the sides and said, "Wow, Royce doesn't want to go back to jail, let him beat him up." The man swung his weapon and shouted that he was a bastard. Suddenly he looked at him in amazement, and thought that he was too tense and swung too hard. The hero looked at him and thought, but it was too late, this boy was to blame himself. Suddenly the bandit froze. Gritting his teeth, he asked what was the matter, why his hands had stopped obeying him. Smiling, the protagonist asked again, what was wrong, wasn't he going to hit him? The man looked at him furiously. hearing that he was certainly healthy, but clearly lacking in intelligence. He swung his hammer sharply. The hero grinned, looking straight ahead. Bill shouted loudly, swinging his weapon. The hammer fell to the ground. The protagonist yawned, standing in front of him. Smiling, he asked if that was all. Frowning, the man asked what and who he was. Looking at him, Royce asked again. The bandit winced, hearing that he thought he already knew the answer to this question, to which he asked what he meant. The hero looked away in amazement, hearing the address. Closing her eyes, the fairy shouted that the twins were going crazy from boredom. She was unable to stop them. The man looked in surprise and asked what the fairy. She stood in front of him. Putting her hand to her face, Clarissa thought. Flying around him, she said that how strange, to which the bandit asked again. Looking straight ahead, the fairy said that she was sure that he smelled like a dwarf, but his size was more like an orc. Looking at her, the hero replied that he was a dwarf, perhaps even born from a mixture of human and dwarf blood, to which Clarissa asked how he could be a dwarf with such a body. Stretching his hands forward, the protagonist said that he did not know, in any case, his very existence was amazing. He looked away, hearing how he knew that he was a half-breed dwarf. Smirking, Royce asked that didn't he say that he knew perfectly well who he was. Come on, let him rack his brains. The man silently looked forward. Suddenly, his eyes widened in surprise and he shouted that it couldn't be. The hammer hit the ingot. The guy stood behind the blacksmith. Lowering his head, the blacksmith said that they, dwarves, have one peculiarity. Looking at him, the boy heard that if he met the creature, a chill and a shiver would run down his spine, and his body and mind would begin to obey it. The man took the ingot with tongs. Looking to the side, he said that he should run without looking back. Frowning, the boy asked what he was talking about. Lowering the ingot into the water, the blacksmith said that he was only half a dwarf, and perhaps this was his advantage. Looking down, the blacksmith said that, however, as long as his blood flowed through his veins, he would most likely not be able to escape the fate of a dwarf. In general, if he felt something like that, he should run away. The boy looked at him in amazement, and asked what if he could not run away. Looking straight ahead, the father answered that in that case. Turning around, he shouted that damn it, then he would have to do what he was told. Putting his hands on the young man's shoulders, the man said that he should just remember that the best solution when meeting such a creature is to run away, since he is half human, then not completely stupid. The young man, looking at him, asked what kind of creatures are these. Looking to the side, the father replied that they have keen hearing, so they always hear everything. You should not open your mouth without need. Frowning, he added that the creatures he told him about are. Looking straight, Bill said that it cannot be. The hero grinned, hearing that a dragon. Winking, he answered that it is right on target. Smiling, the protagonist thought that his intuition was right, although he doubted because of the size of this big guy. The man watched the dwarves. It was said that at first glance at him he felt a resemblance to those dwarves that his father used to work in the mansion. The hero looked at his father. A thought occurred to him that since dwarves were representatives of an intelligent race, he wondered if it was normal for them to work for his father for free. Closing his eyes, the man replied that he shouldn't worry. They had wronged them, so generation after generation they made amends. The man looked at him with fear. It was said that this was called blood bonds. Earlier his father had told him that the dwarves had almost destroyed the entire dragon race. That was all. Standing in front of the man, the hero thought that his conscience was tormenting him a little, but due to the fault of the dwarves, the dragon race could have been wiped off the face of the earth. Bill clenched his teeth and shouted that he shouldn't come near. A thought occurred that therefore there was no reason to worry. Putting his hand to his face, the protagonist asked what was going on. They, the dwarves, have fear of their race and their blood, right? The man began to cry, hearing that well, from now on he becomes his lackey. The fairy closed her eyes and said that calling him a flunky was a bit much. Bill was on his knees. He started to cry. Royce grinned and said that everything would be fine. His fate had already been decided. So how old was Bill? To which he replied that he was 50. Sticking out his tongue, the hero said that he was still very young, that he was already 250 years old. Frowning, Bill said that if you take into account the dragon's age, he was a baby, to which the protagonist replied that he was actually a gallant and noble dragon. The man widened his eyes and asked again, to which Royce replied that he was. Grinning, he added that he would tell it like it is. Raising his finger up, the hero said that he should work for him for 10 years. Bill looked at him in amazement and asked what 10 years, to which the protagonist replied that there was a chance that they would be able to finish earlier. In any case, after that he would be completely free. Looking down, the man asked what his job would be. Holding his hand out, Royce replied that he would have to do whatever he said to get them home for the sake of world peace. Looking straight ahead, Bill asked what world peace had to do with them. Holding his hand out to the side, the hero said that he knew what they were, right? To which the man replied that they were dragons, children. Raising his eyebrows, the protagonist added that yes, they were children, but hadn't he heard the story? The man plunged his sword into the dragon, and it was heard that a warrior had killed a baby dragon, after which the baby's father became angry and, harnessed by his rage, flames appeared in front of the dragon. It was said that he had destroyed an entire kingdom. Looking down, the man asked if that was a true story. Closing his eyes, Royce replied that any creature would become enraged if its children were harmed. He thought that with dragons it was different. Looking straight ahead, he added that more than that. Bill looked surprised to hear that their parents were level 0. Imagine what would happen if they were hurt. Flames appeared around the planet. It was said that the world would be completely destroyed by a force of unprecedented proportions. Crossing his arms, the hero asked he began to understand, to which the dwarf replied that yes, but why did he choose him to achieve his goal? The protagonist looked at him. Looking away, he thought that why. At first glance he seemed like someone who would unconditionally follow his orders. Raising his finger up, Royce said that because he was the chosen one, to which the man asked again. The dwarf's arms appeared. It was heard that he had such strong and broad shoulders. The thought arose that it would be possible to use him as a living shield. Bill clenched his fist. It was said that he had the courageous spirit of a real warrior. The thought arose that with him they would not be bothered by all sorts of small bugs. The man's beard appeared. It was heard that he saw unwavering will and devotion in his gaze. The thought arose that because of blood ties, he would definitely not betray him. The dwarf looked in amazement, hearing that someone like him was not worthy of being chosen by the dragon himself, and the hero thought that he would make an excellent servant. Lowering his head, the protagonist said that by the way, this was the chance of a lifetime, to which the man asked again. Raising 3 fingers up, Royce said that he should think about it, not 1, but 3 dragon cubs, if he delivered them home safe and sound. The fairy looked in amazement, hearing that he thought their parents would just let him go. The man's eyes lit up when he heard that he would be very generously rewarded for his deed, to which he replied that he was right. Standing in front of him, the hero asked what, so now he understands how great it is to be chosen, to which the dwarf responded approvingly. Smiling, the protagonist asked what would go with them then, to which Bill replied yes. He lowered his head, hearing that for sure, no regrets, to which the man replied no regrets. Royce smiled widely. Suddenly, the man looked at him in amazement. His eyes widened, he asked what it was. Grinning, the hero asked what and what he thought. Now he was shackled. Looking at him, Bill replied that he did not understand. Chains appeared around the man. It was heard that these were what are called blood bonds. A promise made to the dragon must be fulfilled. The protagonist closed his eyes, hearing that if he did not fulfill it, what would happen then? To which he replied that he did not think that nothing terrible would happen. Looking to the side, he added that probably. A dungeon appeared. Sitting on the floor, Bill said he couldn't believe he got himself into this. Looking away, Royce said stop whining, just do what he says and there won't be any problems. Looking at him, the dwarf asked him for sure he was telling the truth, to which the hero yelled that yes, if he didn't believe him, he should find another dwarf and asked him if he was telling the truth or not. The protagonist extended his hand to the side and said that from now on he was their 6th, that is, their temporary guardian, to which the dwarf greeted him and introduced himself. Looking at him, the twins shouted that he was a healthy dwarf. It was the first time they saw such a big one. Looking at him, Royce asked, by the way, why was he so tall? Even if he was half a dwarf, it was impossible for him to be that tall, to which the man replied that it was true. In his youth he was shorter than his peers, then he was about 20 years old. He ate some strange berries, after which he was sick for 10 days. The hero looked in amazement, hearing that after these days he woke up in the morning, noticing that he had become taller and stronger. Looking at him, he asked that he remembered what those berries looked like, to which the dwarf replied that well, they looked unusual. The protagonist froze in amazement when he heard that they looked like bones. He turned around abruptly. Royce began to read about berries. Showing the book to the man, he asked what it was, to which he replied that yes, the berries he ate looked exactly like that. The hero's eyes lit up and he thought that that was it. Putting his hands on his hips, the protagonist added that with these berries he could become taller than these 2 brats who always made fun of him, although there was a small difference in height between them. Walking forward, the dwarf said that well, then he would go tell the guys that he was leaving, to which Royce told him to stand. Lowering his head, the hero said that returning home was postponed, now they had a more important goal. Clenching his fist, he added that it was a plant. Grinning, Julie asked what a plant was, and what it was, to which the protagonist thought that it was his, he would never tell them. Looking at them, the dwarf said that by the way, there is one problem, to which Royce asked what the problem was. Raising his eyebrows, the man replied that a group of snow orcs had settled in the place where the bush was, making it difficult to access the plant. Looking at him, the hero asked what and so what. His task was to show the place where the berries grow. Smiling, he added that he would figure out the rest himself, to which the man thought it was scary. A slope from the mountain appeared. The protagonist took a step forward. They looked at the canyon. A settlement appeared. It was heard that it was there, yes, a lair of snow orcs. The orcs were sitting outside, and the dwarf said that when they first settled here, there were not so many of them, but now their number is in the hundreds. Looking down, Royce asked what and where exactly the berries were. Looking to the side, he added where the plant was, to which Bill replied that if his memory serves him right, the orcs were standing near the tent. Something was heard right in the center of the orc village. Stretching his hand forward, the hero shouted that the orcs could have already destroyed the plant, to which the man replied that he should not worry, it was not on the surface, but in a cave. Smiling, he added that he himself had stumbled upon that place completely by accident. Stupid orcs would definitely not find it, to which the protagonist replied that okay. Looking to the side, he turned to the twins, to which they responded. Descending, Royce shouted that they would begin. Wide-eyed, the man shouted that they should wait. Snow orcs were much stronger than normal. Besides, they did not even have a plan. Looking at him, the fairy replied that he should not worry. Sighing, she said that even though they were children, they should not be underestimated. They were moving towards the village, heard that he should look carefully. He would understand why dragons are considered the most powerful creatures on Earth, and why they are feared. The orcs turned around in amazement. The children ran forward quickly. The monsters cried out in fear. The children jumped up. They began to strike at the creatures. Looking straight ahead, the orc shouted. Smiling, Julie said that they should come here. Rushing forward, the children shouted that where are they going? Let them return, to which the fairy said that he saw real dragons. Looking to the side, the dwarf said that he did not doubt the strength of the dragons. But the snow orcs were not timid. He did not think that they would run away so easily. Smiling, Clarissa said that the orcs were like mice that saw snakes. The snake opened its mouth. It was said that no matter how cruel the snow orcs were, the mere sight of a creature with incredible strength caused them fear. Orcs living only by instincts would never defeat powerful dragons. The man looked at him in surprise and said that that's it. The dragon's eyes lit up. A thought appeared that when meeting the dragon's gaze, the will leaves the body and only animal fear, dragon horror remains. Closing her eyes, the fairy said that yes, people call it that, but these dragons are still very young, however, after their second hibernation. The dwarf opened his eyes wide, hearing that just one look could destroy one or even two snow orcs. Running forward, the guy turned to him. Looking at the dwarf, Clarissa asked what he wanted. Raising his eyebrows, the young man asked if he was okay. He heard strange sounds that echoed throughout the canyon. He exclaimed in amazement, looking at the village. Turning his head, the boy asked that the snow orc village was razed to the ground. What did this mean? The man extended his hand forward. The children were fighting. It was heard that they did it. A glow appeared around the hero's hands. He sharply extended his hand forward. Grinning, Kevin used the lightning whirlwind skill. Many blows flew at the orcs. Looking down, the boy asked that the children they captured, they destroyed the snow orcs. Smiling, he added that he already knew about everything. Clenching his fist, the young man said that he noticed everything at first glance. The dwarf looked away, hearing that he understood that although they were young, they were full of strength, to which he replied that well, yes. Raising her hand, the fairy said that he should repeat after him, of course. Bill closed his eyes and said that of course, to which the boy replied that birds of a feather flock together. Looking at the man, Clarissa said that he asked them to deal with the snow orcs, to which he repeated the phrase. Smiling, the robber said that he was simply incredible, by the way, and what kind of monsters are they? Stretching his hand forward, Bill shouted that who did he dare call a pathetic monster? Having hit him, the fairy replied that he shouldn't have said that, to which he apologized. The boy looked at him in bewilderment, to which the dwarf replied that in any case, these children were not the kind to be treated with disdain, let him take good care of them. Looking down, the robber asked again. The orc raised his head and shouted. The hero stood in front of him. Suddenly, the monster waved his hand. He looked ahead in confusion. The protagonist smiled and asked what he had finished. Looking to the side, he said that it was his turn now. Suddenly, Royce struck the orc. The creature flew to the side. It hit the wall. The monster fell to the ground. Looking at it, the hero said that it was too easy. Looking straight ahead, the boy asked that they were the ones who needed to be taken care of. Blood splashed onto the snow. The monster fell in front of the children. Kevin and Julie sat down in the snow and talked about how they had finally finished and how hard it had been. The protagonist stood in front of them when he praised them and said that he was going somewhere and that they would stay there for a while and rest. Then they agreed with him. Someone was standing on the edge of the cliff. The protagonist looked displeased when he wondered why he hadn't run with them and was standing there. The boy was in front of Bill. The bearded man looked at the boy next to him and told him to stay there, explaining that he had to go down. Then the boy asked if he wanted to go with him. They were standing in front of each other when Bill asked if he was serious, to which the boy replied that he would rather stay there. Then he was called names. The red-haired man was behind Royce when he asked if he had been called. The blonde boy had his back to him when he asked where, then he was asked again. The angry protagonist looked at Bill when he asked where the plant was. There was a pile of boulders in front of them. There was a space between the snow and the stone. When someone suggested that it was there, then he was agreed with. The man got down on all fours in front of the boy when he explained that if he went through there, he would immediately come to the cave. Bill looked down attentively. The protagonist looked ahead with distaste when he added that it was strange, because last time he could easily crawl through there. The red-haired man looked at Royce, who asked him to stay there, and then asked if he really said that the cave would appear immediately, to which he was told in the affirmative. The boy was in a dark tunnel. The protagonist turned his head to the side. A light appeared ahead, then he assumed that this was it. The protagonist looked ahead in admiration. A snow-white tree was shown, when he exclaimed that he found it. The fruits of the plant were shown up close. Royce's eyes sparkled when he spoke of his plant and how it was what would give him growth. Suddenly, the young man straightened up, looking ahead. The fruits were above his palm when he wondered why they were so small, realizing that they were much smaller than what the book described. The protagonist stood in front of the tree when he said that the fruits were very young, and that it would take about 200 years for them to grow to the right size. The protagonist looked at the plant sadly when he added that eating them now would have no effect, and then wondered what to do. The boy appeared in front of Bill, who said that he had returned and asked if he had found what he wanted. Royce's eyes were closed when he answered in the affirmative, adding that as he had said, the bush was there, but the berries were very small. The bearded man followed him when he asked what he would do, to which the protagonist replied that he had no choice and that he would wait until the berries grew to the right size. The protagonist had his back turned when he was asked if someone would steal the berries if he left them there. Royce glared back when he asked again. The blonde smiled creepily when he added that they could try. A glowing barrier was shown. Something was written on a wooden sign. The sign was shown up close when it was told that entering the cave was forbidden. Bill walked next to the boy, who reminded him that he does have subordinates, and that they use them. Then he asked him again and asked why he needed them. The red-haired man showed the protagonist his palms when he asked if he was against it, to which he was told that the master can use anyone and however he wants. The protagonist looked away, thinking that he had used holy power to set up traps, but it would not be enough, and that he needed someone to watch over this place. A large gate was shown. Royce crossed his arms. In front of him was a crowd of people. The men looked uninterested. Bill stood behind the boy, who asked if there was not a single smart one among his boys. The protagonist smiled as he decided that he would spare nothing for his future growth, and then said that he would no longer have to settle for short-term attributes. The two boys looked at each other as one asked why they were gathered there, to which he was told that they did not know, and that there was probably a war coming. The boy in the blindfold looked ahead as he wondered what these monsters were up to. The men looked in one direction as they were greeted, calling them the esteemed Blood Axe Bandits. The protagonist looked forward, smirking, as he explained that he had called them there to deliver important news. The men looked shocked as they were told that the Blood Axe clan would be disbanding as of today. Royce put a finger to his ear as he was asked who had given him the authority to do so. Mark looked at the man, asking his boss what was going on and if he was agreeing to it. The twins appeared behind the boy as he addressed them, telling them to begin. Kevin raised his club as they accepted the order. The boys began to cover themselves with their hands, asking what was going on and asking them not to come any closer. The red-haired boy was hit on the head. His comrades were attacked as well. The protagonist watched the battle, praising the twins and telling them that they were doing the right thing and that they needed to be taught some sense. Bill was shown in profile as he mentally apologized to the boys. A silhouette of a bird was seen in the sky. A gate was shown. The bandits were lying in the snow, begging for mercy and saying that they thought they were going to die. The protagonist patted Kevin on the head when he said that they had done well. Royce looked at the beaten bandits when he asked them if they saw the sad reality that they could not stand up to two children, thinking that it was not worth mentioning that they were dragons. Mark looked forward when they were told that there was no reason to worry. The protagonist looked forward with a smile when he promised that he would definitely make them better. Snow-capped mountains were visible behind the forest. A squirrel was sitting on a branch. Its fluffy tail was shown. The little animal started jumping from branch to branch when someone exclaimed that they were putting too much strength into their legs. The protagonist's mouth dropped open when he asked if their eyes were just for show and why they weren't dodging. The bandits were in front of the boy when they responded that it was too fast and asked for mercy. Royce looked straight ahead when he called them weaklings and announced a 10-minute rest. Mark was sitting next to his comrade who said that he thought he saw light at the end of the tunnel and that maybe he should pretend to be unconscious. Then he agreed with him, adding that he wouldn't hit anyone lying down. The red-haired boy was shown in profile when he was asked what would happen if he ran away. Then he turned to Arthur and asked if he didn't know that those who tried to run away were forced to train at night. The brunette opened his mouth wide and exclaimed that they were not warriors, and then asked why they needed all this. Mark stood next to him when he said that he was very loud, so he was still far from fainting. The red-haired youth looked forward hopefully when he admitted that he did not fill his head with such things, so the days passed faster. Arthur cried, clenching his fists when he answered that he did not understand, and that they were beaten every day, but instead of just dying, the next day the body was completely fine. The fair-haired youth smiled, realizing that everything was going according to plan, when someone cursed. The protagonist poured something into the cauldron when he thought about adding potions to their dinner that restore strength, so in the morning they feel cheerful. The bandit stood in front of him when the protagonist added that during training he uses holy power, affecting their minds and motivation. Human silhouettes were shown when it was explained that Royce was teaching the boys from his father's martial arts books, and that they would get better every day. There were books in the cabinets when it was explained that the tomes were from a dragon's library and that it was a waste of time to pass on knowledge to such foolish creatures. The protagonist looked at the book, thinking that he had no choice since they had to become stronger in a short time. The protagonist was shown in profile when he asked if they even realized how lucky they were. Bill stood in front of the boy when he addressed him, when he was asked if he had done everything that was asked of him. The bearded man opened his mouth wide when he answered in the affirmative, adding that he had done everything. Royce looked at him with a smile when he asked if it was true, then exclaimed that it was great, and that he could go start preparing for now while he would go with the others, when he agreed. The blonde grinned creepily, looking ahead as he said that lions throw their cubs off the cliff to make them stronger. A sad Bill looked at the gentleman, wondering what he was planning. Snowy mountains were shown. The guys looked in different directions. The brunette looked at Arthur and asked why they were gathered again, to which he replied that he did not know, and that they also gave him some strange bags. The bandits looked back when they were told to get out of the way. There was a wooden catapult on the snow. It was shown close up. Bill put his hand to his forehead. Mark was standing behind him when he asked the boss what the catapult was for, assuming that they were going to attack someone. The red-haired guys turned around when someone asked for their attention. The protagonist looked ahead attentively when he said that they were probably wondering why they were there, but instead of explaining, they would show them everything. Julie was behind the protagonist when he called her assistant. The girl ran to the catapult. She climbed into the wooden recess. The two boys looked shocked, saying that this couldn't be happening. Roy stood behind Julie when he ordered the assistant to get ready, then she replied that she was ready. The blonde boy pointed his finger in front of him. The wooden catapult began its work. The girl smiled widely. Mark and Arthur opened their mouths, screaming that this was crazy. Sweat appeared on Bill's face when he realized what the master meant by the words about throwing them off the cliff. The boys watched the man hanging in the air. Sweat appeared on their skin when they realized that she was about to crash. A green parachute appeared. The boys looked ahead in surprise. The protagonist smiled, looking forward as he exclaimed that it was great and that the catapult and parachute were a great combination, and then asked if they had seen everything, warning that they would need to do the same. The men with the backpack stood in front of the boy, who asked what was wrong with them, assuming they hadn't gotten the point, adding that they would be shown it again. The protagonist looked at Kevin, asking the second mate to step forward, which he agreed to. The blonde was in the air, his legs bent, laughing loudly. Royce watched the parachutist, thinking that they were light, but they had flown further than he expected. The protagonist looked pleased, thinking that it had turned out pretty well, and that the elixirs had been useful. The frightened boys stood near him, when the protagonist said that it was easy, because they would just have to fly and then fall into the snow. Then they asked him again. Arthur looked ahead, trembling. He began to run away from his comrades, begging for mercy and screaming that he was too young to die. Roy snapped his fingers, displeased. A honeycomb barrier appeared. The boy hit it and fell backwards. He fell in front of his comrades. The protagonist stood in front of them as he said that he understood that they were scared and that they should gather up some courage and then everything would work out. Mark opened his mouth wide as he exclaimed that they should get an opinion from someone who was not as crazy as the other two. Bill stood behind the gentleman, who repeated, saying that everything would work out. The protagonist smiled, turning his head to the side as he asked how they felt about the fact that one of them would set an example for them. The red-haired man opened his palms and began to cry, wondering why he was looking at him. The bandit boss folded his arm in front of himself. He stood in front of Royce, who asked if he could do it, to which he replied that he was afraid of heights. There was a crowd behind the protagonist as he told the boys that their boss was afraid of heights and that they should help him climb the catapult, which they agreed with. The boys appeared in front of Bill, thinking that it was all his fault and why they were the only ones suffering, and also that technically he was the one who dragged the catapult up there. The red-haired man elbowed the boy when he called them bastards and told them to let him go, then they told him that it was all his fault. Mark pointed at Bill, saying that he was guilty. They dragged the boss towards the catapult, while he begged them to let him go. The bearded man opened his mouth wide and screamed loudly. The blonde man watched his flight, thinking that he was worried that he wouldn't fly because of his large body mass, but it turned out pretty good. The protagonist turned around, looking back, when he asked if they were happy and who was next. Tears flowed from the people's eyes as they realized that they had to do this too, and thought about how they missed their mothers. A cliff was shown. Clouds floated across the blue sky. The protagonist sat at a table 4 weeks later. Royce looked down thoughtfully, wondering if this would be enough. There was a book on the table as he thought about how no matter how good this martial arts tome was, it was only a temporary measure, and that if someone really strong appeared, his berries would be stolen. The boy picked up the book, deciding that in order to be prepared for anything, he needed to use higher-level martial arts. There was a circle on the cover as he realized that he only had the Hero King's martial arts tome with him now. The protagonist touched his head while looking at the book as he realized that the information in it was so complex that he could not understand anything. The protagonist sat with his back to the ground as he thought about how he hadn't had time to study it, and where he would get a simpler book, and then wondered what to do. The twins appeared behind the gentleman, asking what he was doing and what he was thinking about. Kevin looked ahead when he realized it was martial arts, assuming he was studying and that it was boring. The boys looked at each other when Royce asked the children if they had ever seen martial arts, to which they replied that of course they had and that their father's library was full of them. The protagonist smiled contentedly when he asked if they had studied anything. Julie held her hand out when she exclaimed that she had studied 5 books, then her brother announced that he had studied 10 volumes. They looked at each other, gritting their teeth, and started to argue. Then the protagonist thought that even though these two were acting stupid, they were still dragons. The blonde man looked away, thinking that among the things they studied, there were probably martial arts that would be useful. Royce stood in front of the twins when he said that instead of arguing, they should just write down the martial arts they studied and that they could prove their case. Then the girl asked why, and her brother said that he was lazy. The smiling blonde man held 2 feathers when he wondered if they weren't arguing about who studied more, then suggested a bet to see who knew more martial arts. The brother and sister opened their mouths wide, shouting that they agreed and who would win. The protagonist was watching the children sitting at the table when he thought that, as expected, he needed to speak to them in their language. A burning candle was shown. It became half as big. The protagonist looked away when someone announced that they were done. The siblings were holding stacks of papers when the girl exclaimed that she was the first to finish, then Kevin countered by saying that he was the first. The children were in front of Royce, who asked if they had written everything so quickly, to which they replied in the affirmative. The blonde man was holding parchments in his hands when he thought about how many sheets they had used and how suspicious it was, suggesting that they might have written all sorts of nonsense. The protagonist looked at the paper in surprise. His back was to the twins. The boy's hand touched the stack of papers. Sweat broke out on the protagonist's face when he realized that these were about 11 books of perfectly written martial arts information. Kevin and Julie looked at each other when they asked who won. They started fighting in front of Royce, arguing about who won and who wrote more. The blonde boy looked forward seriously when he said that they were tied, then he was asked what that meant. Julie looked down in disappointment when they were told that she wrote more information than her brother. Kevin grimaced when they were told that he had written out the information in more detail. The children were in front of the protagonist, who concluded that that was why they were tied, then they replied that it was boring. The protagonist looked at Clarissa, who said that she had done everything he asked and that Bill was almost done too, then she was asked if that was true, adding that it was just in time. Royce looked forward with satisfaction, thinking that now he had materials on higher-level martial arts, and that it was time to start packing. Above the boulder, there was a blue sky 2 weeks later. Someone opened their mouth wide and ordered them to stand at attention. The muscular guys stood straight. Mark looked forward as he told them to salute him. The protagonist stood in front of a crowd of boys. The protagonist crossed his arms over his chest. Arthur looked serious. The guy in the green cape looked up. A smile appeared on Royce's face as he exclaimed that he was very pleased with the work they had done, and then praised them for holding out for 6 weeks of intense training. The warriors stood in line as they shouted back. The young master stood on top of the boulder, as he suggested that they must have been wondering why he made them do this hellish training. The boy opened his mouth slightly, starting to talk about what the reason was. A bright flash appeared in front of the people. The shocked warriors looked forward, asking what it was. The guy in the green hood pointed up. A warrior in snow-white armor appeared and addressed the men. Sweat broke out on Mark's face as he asked what it was. The warrior's face was covered by a helmet as he announced that they had been chosen by him, the god Kalos. The stranger stood tall before the boys. The bandits looked to one side in amazement as they asked him again. Mark looked at his comrade, who asked if they had really been chosen. Kalos held the hilt of his blade as it was explained that this legendary being was an ancient warrior god who fought demons that wreaked havoc on the world. The tall deity was fighting the undead as it was said that demon corpses were piled up around him. The men continued to look up as it was explained that when such a powerful being appeared before the bandits, they froze in horror and fear. The god armor was shown as it was revealed that Royce was inside it at that very moment. The boy had a magic circle in front of him as he thought about how to control it all. The white helmet was shown up close as the protagonist thought about how it was an illusion of Kalos created by refracting and reflecting light using spatial imaging and how everything was going well so far. A glow appeared in front of the blonde as he cursed. Kevin and Julie looked forward as they were informed about a hole in the side as they told the master not to worry, assuring him that they would fix the hole. The boy held his hand out in front of him. A dark spot appeared on Kalos' body. Sweat appeared on the protagonist's face as he praised the twins. Royce bent his arms in front of him as he realized that he now needed to expand the space and use the attribute of power. He and Kalos' mouths dropped open as the boy declared that everything was correct and that they were the chosen ones. The god warrior was shown half-turned as he commanded them to prepare for the disasters that would befall the land in the distant future, warning that they would be the light that illuminated the coming darkness and the sword that destroyed evil. The bandits looked ahead in admiration. The protagonist looked ahead with a smirk as he thought that this would be enough and that now he needed to ingrain this mental mantra into their heads. Kalos held his hand out in front of him, using the imprint skill. Mark folded his hands, looking ahead. The god warrior was in front of a cheering crowd, who were calling for them to do so in his name. Clarice looked ahead intently as she was commanded to begin, to which she agreed. In front of the fairy was a sprout. She poured the contents of the test tube onto him, thinking about the elixir that Mr. Royce had specially created, and what would happen if they poured it all at once. The roots began to grow. A huge tree appeared in front of Clarissa, and she was amazed at the effect. The green crown was illuminated by the sun. The bandits looked surprised as they shouted that it had become gigantic, and that it was a miracle. The tree was visible behind Kalos, as he explained that it was a sign and a symbol of a promise to them. The warrior god pointed to a rock as he added that in return they must show him their loyalty. The bandits turned their heads to the side. The protagonist looked forward with determination as he addressed Bill. The red-haired man looked away as he replied that he understood. The bearded bandit crossed his arms in front of him. He struck the rock with his weapon. Cracks appeared on the stone's surface. There was a blue sky above the mountain. An entrance to a cave appeared. Kalos' helmet was shown, announcing that if they passed the Cave of Trials, they would receive his blessings and gifts. The bandits raised their hands, shouting his name. The protagonist was shown in profile as he thought about how he left the books on martial arts written by the twins there, as well as his tomes of sacred power. He presented a sharp weapon as he added that Bill had set up all sorts of traps in the cave that would be difficult to pass, since he could not just give up the books. Kalos held a sword in his hand as he addressed the chosen warriors, telling them that he would return again if they could save the tree. The snow-white helmet was shown up close as God asked them to trust him and wait. The blue sky was above the warriors. The guy in the green hood looked up as someone said that he understood. Mark clenched his fists as he exclaimed that they were chosen, and that all the difficulties they had overcome were a test. Arthur and his comrades raised their hands in the air, shouting that he was right, and that they were special, and that long live Kalos. Roy stood with his arms crossed, listening to their shouts. The boy closed his eyes, smiling as he thought about how wonderful it was to end the mission. He bowed to the applauding twins, who said that it was great fun, and asked the master to do more, and he thanked them. Bill looked tired. He looked at the crowd of his boys, thinking that they truly believed that they were the chosen ones. The sun's rays illuminated the tree's crown as he thought about how it, and the entire area around it would be considered sacred, and how they would risk their lives to protect what they believed in. Bill turned his back as he began to feel sorry for the boys who had unknowingly become guard dogs. The red-haired man's face began to sweat as he realized that if they were guard dogs protecting the house, then he was the dog that would be walked on a leash. The protagonist looked at the bandit who was talking about his dignity and asked what he was doing there, reminding them that it was time to move. Bill walked towards the boy, saying that he was on his way. He walked behind the children, who were asking the master where they were going now and suggesting that he find something interesting. White clouds were flying across the sky. A structure in the middle of space called the Silver Flower was shown. The dark-haired man was standing near the window. Joseph extended his hand forward as he thought about wondering if Royce was eating well. The brunette closed his eyes as he realized that no matter how important the elder's position was, he should not leave his son alone. The man imagined a dragon sticking out its tongue as he wondered where his father had disappeared to at such an important moment. It would be good if he could keep an eye on Royce. The long-haired elder stood by the window. Joseph looked ahead confidently. There was a bookcase in front of him as he thought about how he had a lot of work to do. If he did something ahead of time, he could sneak away for the day. A man appeared behind him and asked him where he was going in such a hurry. The blonde boy's mouth fell open as he wondered if he was going to abandon his sacred duty and run away. Joseph turned around to look at him. Royce's father straightened his uniform as he wondered what he was talking about and what he was doing there. Carlos winked at him as it was explained that he was Julie and Kevin's father and had a level 0 intelligence attribute. The blonde man closed his eyes and asked himself what he was doing and then replied that he was watching him. Joseph looked away worriedly as he wondered if he had nothing better to do and then asked not to be disturbed and to leave. Carlos put his hands behind his head as he stood in front of him and was asked if he was going to leave. The blonde man looked ahead carefully. A magic sphere was shown. Joseph was standing next to the twins' father, who replied that he thought he was bored and that was why he came to entertain him. Then the brunette said that it seemed like he was the only one bored there. Carlos looked at the magic sphere. A child's face appeared in it, and the man assumed that he was worried about Royce. Joseph looked away guiltily. The twins' father looked at the brunette as he said that he understood that he wanted to leave and meet his son. Carlos smiled and closed his eyes as he replied that he did not know what he was talking about. The blonde man looked away when he said that one would think he didn't know about the ban on unauthorized escape, and then asked what would happen if he was caught. Joseph looked at the magic sphere when he said that of course the elders would notice if he left this place, and then asked what would happen if he was caught. The men looked at each other when Carlos called him a fool, wondering if he was that worried, and then asked if he wasn't worried about his children. The twins' father pointed to his face when he assumed he was talking about Kevin and Julie, and then said he wasn't worried at all, and then asked why. The children hugged the protagonist when Carlos asked if he knew how much they loved Royce, explaining that they said they would come to him whenever they got bored. The smiling man was in front of the brunette when he added that the protagonist was not really that smart, but he was sure that he would take care of his children better than him. Then Joseph said that it was not something to brag about. Carlos looked away when he told his comrade that he was overprotective of his son, and that, moreover, he was not an ordinary newborn. The protagonist opened his palm when the father of the twins added that he was not only blessed with 4 attributes, but also had a unique way of thinking, and that Royce was one of the strongest dragons, summing up that, moreover, there was no better parent in the world than Joseph. The brunette was in front of Carlos, who exclaimed that he was blessed, to which he was told that he was right. The father of the twins hugged his comrade when he advised him to stop worrying about Royce and think about himself, because soon he would not have the freedom that his son had. Carlos closed his eyes, bending his finger back as he added that he didn't have to worry about his kids bothering Royce and that he had warned them not to bother him too much. The blonde man slapped his friend on the back when he said that the twins had inherited his personality, both of them, and their father laughed, asking if he thought so too. Carlos touched his chin as he said that they were always up to mischief and that he had told them that if they did something wrong, they should ask Royce to fix it for them instead of trying to fix it themselves. Joseph looked at the man, angry, asking if it was true that if his kids caused trouble, Royce would help them fix it. Carlos looked ahead with a smile as he asked about his ideal plan for raising his 2 children. There was an explosion in the tower when Joseph cursed and said that he was going to open his skull and see what was going on in his head. Then he was told to calm down. Space was shown. Stars were twinkling in the distance. There was a blue sky above the snowy mountains when Royce and his team were mentioned at the same time. The protagonist looked unhappy when he told them to stop calling him. The twins looked at the protagonist pitifully when they explained that then he would not pay attention to them. Then the boy agreed with them, asking only to stop shouting. Carlos's children hugged the young master, who told them to leave him alone. Royce's soul left his body when they answered that they did not want to and that they liked him. Then the protagonist asked himself what he did so bad in his past life, and why he was being punished like this. The protagonist looked away angrily when someone addressed him. The horse opened its mouth wide. The red-haired man sat in the driver's seat. Bill looked away with a smile as he informed him that he had prepared the carriage as requested. Royce touched the horse's muzzle as he replied that it was excellent, and that it would make traveling easier. The bearded man watched the gentleman as he asked him where the nearest port to the west was, and he repeated his words. A map was shown as Bill replied that it was Lufthansa and that ships were regularly leaving from there to the autumn continent. The protagonist glanced at the animal as he inquired how long it would take to get there. The red-haired man opened his mouth and replied that it would take about half a year, but due to the frequent snowfalls that would hinder them, it would take a year or even a little longer. Sweat broke out on the protagonist's face as he thought about how much longer it would take than he had expected and that due to unforeseen circumstances, the time frame could be extended. Bill touched his hair and said he didn't even know when asked if there was a faster way to get there. A horse-drawn carriage was shown as he explained that it was the fastest way to travel on the winter continent, and that there was no faster way, unfortunately. Royce was shown in profile as he thought about how they would be stuck there for another year, and then cursed. The boy looked towards Bill, who spoke to him, and the young gentleman asked what was going on. The red-haired man looked down sadly as he asked if he had any way to contact another dragon. The protagonist looked at him sideways, and he added that of course he had probably already thought of that. Bill closed his eyes, smiling as he said that if he had any dragons he knew on the winter continent, they could have asked them to take him. The protagonist looked surprised as he realized he was right. The dark silhouette of a lizard was shown as Royce thought that they must be there, and why not ask someone to help them. The back of a boy was shown. The bearded man looked down and asked again, saying that he did not understand when he was told that there was one problem. Bill, sitting behind the horse, looked at the gentleman, who admitted that he did not know any dragons. The protagonist turned to the fairy, asking her if she knew any. Clarissa looked ahead carefully as she answered that, unfortunately, she did not know any other dragons. The twins stood nearby as they revealed that they did not know anyone either. Then the protagonist said that he did not expect anything else from them. Royce looked down, tilting his head as he thought that if they could find one, then their time to return home would be significantly reduced. There was snow at the foot of the mountains when the gentleman realized that the only question was where to look for them. The protagonist stood in front of the red-haired man, whom he asked if he knew any stories about dragons. Bill touched his beard when he replied that he knew a little, but there was a city on the road to the west, and that information about dragons could be found there. The protagonist smiled, looking ahead when he exclaimed that this was excellent, and that then they would not waste time and would leave now. The cart moved through the snow when the boys went ahead, in search of dragons. The setting sun illuminated the forest. The red-haired man was behind the horse. Bill turned around, looking at the gentleman when he said that the day was already drawing to an end, and the city was still far away, and that he thought it would be better to make a camp. Then the gentleman agreed with him. Clouds floated over the mountain ranges. A fire was shown. The boys were sitting around it. Meat was in the smoke. Kevin and Julie looked at the food with delight, exclaiming that it looked delicious. The children sat in front of the red-haired man when they asked him when it would be ready, then they were asked to wait a little longer. Bill sprinkled salt on the food. The twins' mouths opened wide when they were informed that they could now eat it. The red-haired man turned to the protagonist, offering him to try it too. The protagonist looked closely at the meat. Royce sat in front of Bill when he exclaimed that it was not bad, and that the marinade was very tasty. Then Bill thanked him. The bearded man looked at the boy and answered in the affirmative when he asked if he could continue the story, reminding him that he had said that a dragon had once been seen on Mount Cash Tower. Bill's mouth dropped open, looking ahead, when he told them that in the town they were passing there lived a hunter who said that about 20 years ago a monster had been killed in his village, which was mistaken for a dragon. A bone hit his face. An angry Royce pointed at the man when he asked him again and exclaimed that he did not hear respect in his words, and then asked if dragons were his friends, to which he replied that it was not so. The young master stepped on his foot when he asked if he should show him what a real monster was, to which he apologized. The protagonist put his hand forward when he exclaimed that he noticed that he had gotten completely out of hand and that he should speak properly. Bill's eyes were closed when he agreed with him, saying that the hunter had told him that 20 years ago a noble creature similar to the dragon master had been seen in his village. A huge lizard was shown when he added that it was as big as a house and its cries were deafeningly loud, and that the whole village shook in terror. The protagonist looked ahead as he replied that it sounded weak and even implausible, and that, furthermore, there was no new information about the dragon in the story. The man was sitting by the fire as he added that a nobleman from a neighboring estate had sent a large party to investigate, and had even hired a mercenary who specialized in large magical creatures, and was then asked about the outcome. Sweat appeared on Bill's face as he replied that the party had never been heard from again. Weapons were lying in the snow as it was told that they were all presumed to have been destroyed. The red-haired man looked ahead seriously as he explained that there had been other cases of people disappearing on Mount Cash Tower, and that few people had been there since then. The protagonist looked thoughtful as he considered the fact that a large party sent to investigate had gone missing. A smirk appeared on the boy's face as he decided that this was very interesting. Stars were shining above the ridges as he thought about how the mountain where the supposed dragon lived was on the way and that given the information he had received, there was probably something there. A black lizard was shown as the protagonist thought about how he thought it wasn't a dragon but some other very powerful monster that could handle a huge army, and whether it was worth the risk. Royce looked back intently. Bill looked at the young master, asking what was wrong, to which he replied that something was heading their way. The red-haired man was holding a gun when he assumed it was a monster. The boy countered by saying it was a man and that he was alone. Bill turned his head to the side when he asked to be left with it, exclaiming that he would deal with it. There was darkness in front of the red-haired man when he inquired about who it was, telling him to show himself immediately. The trunks of the fir trees were shown. The protagonist and Bill looked in the same direction when someone told them not to be so tense. A man in a cloak appeared. A bearded man and a boy stood in front of him. The blond man looked ahead with a smile when he introduced himself, saying that he was glad to meet them and that he was passing by and noticed the light from the fire. The protagonist looked ahead in disbelief when he thought about how familiar the name was and that he had heard it somewhere before. Jacob stood in front of Bill when he apologized and asked if he could warm up a bit. Then Bill apologized, refusing and explaining that they had children there. The blonde looked at the twins when he replied that he understood and that they should be more careful with strangers. Jacob put his hand behind his head, adding that it was already quite late and that he would leave then. The red-haired man stood behind Royce when he told the gentleman that he had sent him away, and then asked if he was a good boy. Then the boy repeated the stranger's name in his mind. The protagonist looked forward in shock. The protagonist pointed to the side when he told Bill to bring him back, then he asked why. The bearded man ran away from the young gentleman, who ordered him to act immediately. Then he replied that he was on his way. Royce was shown in profile when he thought that if this was the last name he remembered, then this guy needed to be caught immediately. The girl and the white beast were shown as the boy thought about Chloe being a genius druid who summoned the Berserker Revenant, and that she was one of the warriors who would defeat his father in the future, and that the girl's last name was the same. Deciding that if this boy was really her ancestor, he couldn't let him go. The blonde stood next to Bill, who said that they thought he was a good person so he could join, and the boy thanked him. The protagonist looked at Jacob, who asked what was wrong, assuming that his face was dirty. The protagonist's mouth dropped open as he said that he must be very strong to travel to a place like this alone. The blonde closed his eyes as he laughed and asked him again, and then asked who said he was alone. The children looked ahead in confusion as they wondered what the hell was going on, Then Royce asked what he was talking about. Jacob touched his chin as he asked if they were interested. Energy waves began to emanate from the boy. The protagonist looked ahead in surprise as he realized that it was the attribute of the mind, which felt a little weak, but it was definitely the mana of this attribute. Bill looked to the side, asking what was going on. The bearded man opened his mouth wide. A huge bird appeared as he exclaimed that it was the six-winged blade. The animal's claws touched the snow. The winged creature was in front of the children. The bird opened its beak wide. The red-haired man grabbed his weapon. Someone touched his shoulder. Jacob stood behind Bill as he said that everything was fine. The bird's head was shown as the boy explained that it was the creature he summoned and that its name was Minky. Then he was asked again. The red-haired man looked ahead with a frown as he said that it was a six-winged blade, and that it was said that the adults could compete with wyverns, and then asked how he managed to tame such a ferocious beast. Jacob stood in front of the pet as he replied that he had been raising this guy since he was a baby, and that he was obedient, so they did not have to worry. Bill was next to the blonde when he assumed that he was a druid, to which the young man answered in the affirmative, adding that it was true, but he had very little experience. The protagonist looked ahead carefully as he thought about a druid with such a last name. Minky sleekly looked at his master as the boy wondered if he was really Chloe's ancestor. Jacob looked at the young master, who asked if he was married, to which the boy replied that he was not yet. Royce's mouth dropped open, looking straight ahead as he asked if he had any sisters or other relatives with the same last name. Sweat broke out on the blonde's face as he replied that he was an only child and that his last name was only used by him and his father. Royce's eyes sparkled as he realized that this was definitely his father's enemy, adding that of course, it was about the future. Jacob stood in front of the boy as he asked why he was asking, to which he was told that he was just curious. The protagonist looked at the blonde with a smirk as he thought about how cruel it would be to kill him, and how he should make sure that he could never have children. The guy in the cloak had his back turned as he said that for some reason he felt goosebumps. Bill turned to Jacob, telling him that if he was cold, he should go closer to the fire, and Jacob agreed with him, thanking him. The blonde looked away with interest. The children approached the bird, shouting about how big it was and how they had never seen one before. The scared boy held his hand out as he asked them not to get too close, warning them that he was very sensitive to strangers unless he was around. The twins were cuddling Minky, saying that he was very fluffy, just like a blanket with duck feathers. Jacob looked shocked as he said that it was dangerous. The protagonist stood behind the children as he called them rascals and said that they shouldn't touch other people's animals without asking. The bird looked at the protagonist in amazement. There was a dark aura behind the boy. Minky opened his beak, screaming. The blonde boy held his hand out, asking the master to be careful. The bird was lying on the snow. Royce was stroking its head, praising it. Jacob looked surprised when he said that Minky had never acted like that in front of him. The twins were lying next to him, talking about how warm and fluffy the bird was, and how they were going to sleep on it tonight. Minky was in front of the men when the blonde man asked who the children were. The sky was dark over the mountains when Bill answered that they were his nephews. The sun came out from behind the ridges. The red-haired man was standing near the wagon. Jacob was behind him when he said that he was very grateful to them for the shelter, and that he didn't even know how to thank them. The evil protagonist looked at Bill, ordering him to make him come with them, then Bill offered the boy to join them, since they were going in the same direction. The bird turned its head to the side when he asked about his pet, then the boy asked not to worry about it, explaining that it would follow them. The bearded man looked at the cart when the gentleman reminded him that it was time for them to move, then he replied that he was already on his way. Minky spread his wings. Bill held the reins in his hands. The cart was moving through the forest. The children and the druid were sitting together. The protagonist looked at the blonde, asking where he was going, then the boy replied that he needed to get to Mount Cash Tower. Royce looked thoughtful. The boy was sitting behind Bill when he asked why he needed to go there. Jacob closed his eyes, starting to answer. He looked ahead with delight when he explained that there might be something on that mountain that would make his dream come true. Sweat appeared on the young gentleman's face when he mentally repeated his words. The blonde clenched his fists in front of him when he told him that his dream was to tame a dragon. The druid imagined a rider on a lizard. The protagonist looked ahead with anger. Jacob shook his head as he exclaimed that dragons were the most powerful creatures on Earth, and that these legendary creatures were every druid's dream. The angry protagonist watched the blonde man as he said that once he tamed the lizard, there would be nothing more to fear in this world, and that this thought alone made his heart flutter. The red-haired man looked away in concern as he replied that he had chosen a rather dangerous dream that would be very difficult to make come true and that one could die in pursuit of it. Jacob smiled with his eyes closed as he said that that was why it was called a dream and that they would see it again. The druid sat in front of Royce as he said that one day he would tame the dragon, and the boy thought about maybe finishing him off then and there. The protagonist looked ahead with displeasure when he thought that he didn't know what kind of creature lived on Mount Cash Tower, but he was sure that it wasn't a lizard. The blonde looked at his hands as the protagonist thought that if for some reason there really was a dragon there, it would not leave the fool who decided to tame it alive, and that then Chloe's birth was out of the question. Royce turned his head to the side, thinking that in that case, there was a high probability that a thunder tiger lived on Mount Cash Tower. A white fanged beast was shown. The animal with a thick mane opened its mouth as the boy thought that if Jacob managed to tame it, it would become Chloe's berserker. The protagonist looked forward with determination as he thought that he would not let that happen, and that he needed to make the first move. The young master sat in front of the druid as he exclaimed that he had a very incredible dream, and the druid laughed and thanked him. Bill frowned and looked away when the protagonist added that he hoped it would come true, and the boy agreed, promising to take him for a ride on the dragon later. The red-haired man closed his eyes as he felt sorry for the boy. The carriage passed through the forest when he thought that he hoped his death would not be painful. Mountains were visible behind the trees. Jacob raised his bent arms up. Mount Cash Tower was in front of him when he exclaimed that it was a beautiful morning to meet a dragon. The blonde turned around when someone agreed with him. Royce's mouth opened wide when he said that it was probably a beautiful morning for a lizard too. The druid stood in front of the boy when he greeted him and asked if he had slept well, to which the protagonist answered in the affirmative and asked if he had seen the twins by chance. Jacob's mouth dropped open as he asked him again and said he hadn't seen them, then wondered if they hadn't slept in the carriage with him. The young gentleman turned to Bill, who had greeted everyone, and asked if he knew where the twins were. The red-haired man looked down, worried, as he replied he hadn't seen them. The protagonist looked away in displeasure, as he called them rascals and wondered where they had gone so early in the morning, assuming they were probably in trouble by now. Royce looked at the carriage as the fairy called him and told him she had found the twins, and the boy asked if it was true and where they were. Clarice peeked around the corner, laughing nervously. The protagonist looked away intently as someone shouted his name. The twins were dragging the beast when Julie asked him to see what kind of cat they found, then Kevin asked if cats could be that big, concluding that it was a dog. The protagonist looked shocked when he realized that it was not a cat and definitely not a dog. Jacob opened his mouth wide, looking ahead when he said that it couldn't be, and that it was a thunder tiger. The white beast was lying in the snow. Royce looked at it with concern. The twins stood in front of the master, saying that he was very cute and asking if they could take him with them, promising that they would raise him. The protagonist opened his mouth slightly, looking ahead when he asked to answer the question of where they found him in the first place. Julie pointed to the side when she answered that on the mountain, then Kevin added that he came up to him and wanted to play, and that they frolicked with him. The protagonist touched his head as he thought about how he planned to find this creature, but not in the same way. Jacob approached the animal as he said that it was indeed a living thunder tiger. Children appeared in front of the druid, shouting that he should not touch their nabi, so he asked them again. Sweat appeared on the young master's face as he realized that they had already named it. Royce looked away appraisingly. The tiger opened one eye. The beast opened both eyes. The protagonist stood looking at the animal. The protagonist leaned towards it and asked if it was awake, adding that its eyelids were trembling. The boy watched the tiger with a smirk as he said that its breathing was uneven and ragged, then asked if it was definitely unconscious. The white beast put its paws in front of it and growled. Angrily, Royce flexed both arms, calling it a name. The young gentleman punched the tiger in the face, asking who it was growling at. The beast rolled in the snow in front of the protagonist. The druid opened his mouth in shock when he asked if he had really punched the thunder tiger. Bill stood next to Jacob when he laughed, saying that his nephews were simply fearless. Julie and Kevin watched the animal, feeling sorry for it and offering to blow on its wound. The blonde turned to the red-haired man, asking him again and reminding him that they had already knocked out the thunder tiger several times. The protagonist touched his face with his hand when he thought that even if this was a unique creature, albeit a cub and, apparently, growing up without a mother, something was wrong with it. Suddenly, the protagonist's pupils narrowed. Royce turned around, looking back as he wondered what that powerful aura was, assuming it was the tiger's mother. Bill and Jacob looked in the same direction. Birds flew over the forest as someone asked what that sound was. A clawed paw appeared. A huge green monster turned its head to the side. The druid looked up in fear as he recognized him. The protagonist covered his mouth with his hand, asking him to be quiet. A magic circle appeared in front of the boy as he thought about how if they moved, they would attract attention, and that they needed to hide. A protective barrier appeared in front of the boys as the spatial attribute invisibility was applied. The protagonist put his hands out to the sides. There was only snow in front of the trees. The blonde opened his mouth, looking forward as he thought about how incredible it was, because this was spatial magic, and how a huge space had appeared there in a short time. Royce had his back turned as Jacob wondered how this kid could do something like this. The druid looked up, his mouth hanging open. The green monster appeared in front of the children. The monster looked away. Sweat broke out on the blonde's face as he realized that not only had he seen a thunder tiger in real life today, but also a drake, whom no one had seen in hundreds of years, and then wondered what was going on. Jacob looked down in horror as he realized that it was not a dragon that lived on Mount Cash Tower, but this monster. The green monster's face was shown up close. The druid had his back turned as he realized that the lizard was not there. The blonde looked away intently. The protagonist stared ahead intently as the boy thought about how this kid had sensed Drake's presence faster than anyone else, and how, moreover, he had managed to instantly create space. A transparent barrier was shown as Jacob wondered who he was and how he got his skills. The protagonist had his back to the blonde, who thought that only geniuses could have such abilities. The druid looked thoughtful as he suggested something. The boys behind the barrier looked straight ahead. Drake opened his mouth wide. Royce gritted his teeth as he cursed in his mind, wondering what that monster was doing there. The young master looked at the fairy, asking her if there was any way to defeat him. Clarice looked ahead as she explained that drakes were demonic dragons, and that they were creatures created from the blood of evil spirits. The green monster opened his mouth slightly as the fairy summed up that only a few of them had lizard blood in their veins, so fighting against him was pointless. The protagonist looked confused when he said that it would take at least several level 1s to defeat the creature, and that engaging it would mean instant death for them. The green monster was shown from above when the protagonist thought about it living deep in the mountains, and then wondered why it left its lair, and whether it was searching for something. Royce looked at the tiger when he wondered if it was chasing him. Drake turned to the side. The monster was shown from behind. The young gentleman closed his eyes when he thought that fortunately it had given up and left. There were clouds in the sky. The protagonist looked up worriedly. A flash of lightning occurred. Drake bared his sharp fangs. An electric discharge appeared above the dome. The protagonist raised his bent arm. A bright flash occurred in front of the boy. There was an ornament on his arm. Royce opened one eye. The green monster was right in front of him. The young master smiled tightly as he said that his magic had been destroyed. The boys began to run away from the monster, screaming loudly. The twins ran behind the protagonist, saying that it was following them and that they were scared. Then he told them to shut their mouths and run as fast as they could. Bill turned to Jacob and advised him to hurry before the monster tore him apart. The blonde was shown in profile as he thought that everything was clear about the man. But why were these children so fast? The backs of the children were shown as the druid thought that he knew they were unusual children. A scared Jacob turned around when he was asked to be careful. Drake opened his huge mouth. The blonde brought his hand to his mouth and cursed. The green monster suddenly turned its head to the side. Minky prepared his sharp claws. The bird wounded the lizard in the head. The protagonist looked back with a smile as he thought that this was great, and that this pet could thus buy them time. A fairy crawled out from under the protagonist's shirt, who reported that these monsters were moving slowly from side to side, and that they needed to run past the trees. The boy was followed by his companions as he ordered them to move towards the mountain. The boys ran past the trees. The bird distracted Drake. The orange eye of the monster flashed. The monster opened its mouth, sticking out its tongue. Minky was attacked in the head. The druid noticed the falling bird. Jacob looked away in horror, screaming. Bill looked after him. Royce gritted his teeth, looking away when he thought about how they definitely wouldn't be able to defeat Drake, who even a beast like the six-winged blade couldn't stand up to. The young master looked at the mountain ranges when he realized that they would survive if they ran in that direction. The protagonist stood silently with his back turned. He ran forward, gritting his teeth and cursing. The protagonist followed Jacob, exclaiming that if they survived today, he would get into trouble. The twins and Bill looked in one direction, asking the master to wait for them. The tiger watched the people running away. The cub turned its head, making a characteristic sound. The animal ran after the children. The blonde looked ahead worriedly when he asked the pet to wake up. The bird was lying on the snow. Drake bit Minky. Energy appeared between the druid's palms when he cursed. In front of him, the monster was killing his friend. A cloud of energy crashed into the monster. Drake tilted his head forward. His pupils narrowed sharply. The green monster waved its tail. Jacob brought his hand to his face. Someone grabbed his hood. The protagonist pulled the guy back, telling him to move away. The monster waved its tail in front of them. The protagonist began to cast a spell, using the skill change space. A crystal appeared between his hands. Streams of energy appeared around the stone when the skill rotation was realized. Royce directed magic at the monster. Drake's mouth opened in pain. Jacob crouched down next to his pet, asking him to wake up. The green monster chewed the crystal. The young master looked forward in shock as he asked how it was possible, and if it had destroyed his magic by simply chewing it. The protagonist held his hand out in front of him. Red energy appeared in front of the monster as the fall mind attribute was used. Symbols appeared near Drake's muzzle. The protagonist smiled, thinking that he had been caught and that he would now fall. The green monster opened its mouth wide, growling. Royce looked forward in amazement as he wondered if mind magic had no effect on him. Sweat appeared on Clarissa's face as she told him that Drake had nothing but animal instincts and that the mind attribute was useless against him. The young master looked upset as he cursed and asked how stupid the creature was. The monster stuck out its tongue, opening its mouth. The twins rushed past the protagonist. Julie swung her blade. Kevin closed his eyes, shaking his hand as he said that his skin was very hard. The girl held her swords in her hands, worried about her limbs. The green drake opened his mouth, baring his fangs as he growled. Royce looked ahead carefully as he thought about being affected by the twins' electric discharge attribute. The siblings turned around as they were ordered to attack him again. The young master pointed his hand forward as he exclaimed that the monster was becoming vulnerable and that they should use the electric discharge attribute and continue attacking. The twins rushed forward as they responded in agreement. The drake opened his mouth, raising his head. The protagonist smiled, clenching his fist as he decided that this was great, since his anti-magic properties were unable to protect his internal organs. Energy appeared in the protagonist's palms as he thought about how he had probably underestimated their abilities and how, even though they were young, they were dragons. Royce ran towards Drake as he decided that they would roast the thing today. Bill and Jacob were shown in profile. The blonde looked worried as he said that they were fighting this lizard and then asked who these kids were. The red-haired man closed his eyes as he laughed and answered that his nephews had some strength. The boys stood next to each other as the druid asked if they were really his nephews, to which he replied that he couldn't tell him everything or he would get beaten. Crystals flew off the boy. The monster was attacked. The green monster lowered its head to the snow. The protagonist looked forward happily as he exclaimed that they almost defeated it. The twins were crying, saying they were tired and that their legs and arms hurt. The protagonist stood in front of the children as he asked them to be patient for a little while longer, as he had one last blow left to deal. Kevin and Julie looked behind Royce. The brown monster appeared and growled. The young gentleman looked scared as he cursed and wondered if there was another drake out there. The green monster lay in the snow, whining. Julie looked at the protagonist and asked what they should do now. The protagonist gritted his teeth, looking ahead as he realized there was no way out. Jacob looked shocked as the boy thought about how he didn't want to show his true self to him, and that it would be better if he and Bill left this place. The twins stood behind Royce, who spoke to them. The children looked up carefully. 2 tigers appeared in the air. The brown drake opened his mouth slightly. The white beast attacked the lizard, growling. The tiger cub looked ahead in delight. The druid stared ahead when he realized that there were 2 more thunder beasts. The protagonist smiled widely when he exclaimed that this was great, and that the cub was in danger, so his parents came to his aid. The twins held weapons in their hands when they shouted that there were big silver cats. The green monster bowed its head. Chains appeared in front of the protagonist when he asked the monster where it was going. The shackles wrapped around Drake. The monster was in front of the children when Royce exclaimed that he couldn't let it go. The young master confidently looked ahead when he thought that he was finished. Royce used magic, asking where he was going. Magic chains wrapped around the dragon's neck. The heroes looked at the monster in admiration and the hero exclaimed that he couldn't let it go. The boy looked back and called out loudly for Bill. The fighter grabbed the weapon and ran, saying that he was already on his way. Someone was watching the battle from the side. The young man looked questioningly and clarified that they were talking about his children, nephews. He turned around abruptly and saw the danger. An enraged tiger jumped. The animal grabbed the dragon, biting it. The monster counterattacked the dragon, grabbing it by the body. He lifted and threw the tiger to the side. The animal fell hard to the ground. The tiger, bleeding, was preparing to attack again. The fierce dragon roared, letting out a loud sound. The tiger, opening its mouth, was bleeding. The creature swung its tail, roaring. The animal prepared to attack, baring its fangs. The tiger jumped out, attacking the monster. The dragon struck one of the 2 animals with a powerful blow of its tail. It flew away, hitting the nearest tree. Blood came out of its mouth from the blow. The second tiger watched the one lying on the ground. The white beast got angry, releasing energy discharges. He predictably attacked, jumping on the dragon. The tiger grabbed his shoulder with a death grip. The white beast bit the monster and knocked him to the ground. He held on tightly, roaring. The dragon tried unsuccessfully to throw him off his back. The other beast watched what was happening, sadly. He turned around, seeing something. The dragon fell dead, sticking out his tongue. The heroes exhaled. Julie raised her head up and said how hard it was for her. The hero knelt down and stated that it was over, and Kevin stuck his sword into the ground. Bill approached the hero and reported that the thunder tiger was approaching. The white beast was confidently heading towards the guys. The tiger cub happily jumped towards him. The animal purred, rubbing against the tiger. Royce watched as the beast basked against the other. Tiger looked at the boys attentively. The hero turned and wondered if he had really understood who they were. The tiger cub watched as the white beast went into the forest. He rushed after him. Royce stopped Tiger. He looked thoughtfully ahead. The wounded tiger turned back. He closed his eyes, illuminated by the yellow light. The beast jumped high into the depths of the forest. The little tiger looked after him, lost. Clarissa sat on Royce's shoulder and sadly said that this thunder tiger seemed ready to die, because she risked her life just to protect her own child, adding that she was a real leader. The heroes looked at the bright flash behind the forest. The fairy looked in surprise and said that this light. She did not understand what happened when the boy grabbed her by the hand, removing her from his shoulder. Royce went forward, telling Clarissa to look after the boys. She in response asked where he was going. The boy looked away and said that he was going to the mountain. The fairy was worried and called out to him, shouting that it could be dangerous there. Royce lowered his head and told her that he would be right back, not to worry. Clarisse let him go, telling him to be careful. The boy looked down questioningly. He saw Tiger Cub on the ground, looking upset. The hero put his hands on his waist and asked Beast if he wanted him to sit down, and Tiger looked at him hopefully. The hero, after a moment's thought, agreed to take him with him. He jumped on Beast and together they set off. Royce looked ahead in fear, thinking about how fast he was and wondering how Twin managed to catch him. Tiger Cub stopped abruptly, seeing something in front of him. In front of them lay the dead tigers and dragon. The boy was shocked and realized that Thunder Tiger was indeed dead. The little beast rushed towards them, not believing his eyes. The boy watched as he licked the dead tiger. The hero clenched his fists as he looked at this, thinking that he had lost his parents, just like he had in his past life. Royce stroked the sad beast. He looked at him with regret and continued to stroke him, soothing him. Under the tree lay 2 piles of gravestones. The hero watched as the little beast lay sadly next to them. Royce watched and realized that this was how the Trigon family met the Thunder Tiger. A beautiful sunset spread over the mountains. The boy thought about how Drake and the Thunder Tiger lived on the same mountain and therefore a battle for territory was inevitable. He remembered the picture of the dragon and the tigers lying and thought that even if they had not interfered, these 2 monsters would have destroyed each other anyway. The hero grabbed his chin and thought about how Jacob would have taken in the Thunder Tiger Cub after this. He stretched out his hand in front of him and began to cast a spell, realizing that he could not allow this. The boy sent magic to the beast from behind. He sent him a command to look at him. The tiger looked questioningly, turning around. He saw how the boy, enveloped in energy, stood in front of him, and behind him towered a huge, scary creature. The little tiger, frightened, pressed himself to the ground. The boy looked at him and thought that he had nothing to fear, and if he trusted him, he would take care of him. The hero extended his hand to him. He looked at the beast and offered him to follow him. The tiger, agreeing, put his paw on his palm. The boy sat on his knee and laughed. The hero was called and he turned around. His friends were standing there and Julie asked him what he was doing there. The guy, frightened, pointed at the boy and spoke, asking if he had just used obedience, a skill that only high-ranking druids possessed. The beast, not understanding, tilted his head to the right and he continued that although the tiger was still a baby, it was not easy to achieve complete obedience from a spirit beast. The guy, realizing, pointed his finger and shouted who he was. The boy looked at him sternly and wondered if he had really understood who they really were. The guy, pointing at him with his finger, finished saying that he was a high elf. The hero, opening his mouth, asked again without understanding him. The guy clung to him and took his hand, saying that it was a great honor for him to meet the keeper of the forest, and asked if he had hidden his ears with magic. The boy confusedly replied that something seemed to have happened. The hero opened his mouth and in an instant, realized that he should be grateful to him. He looked at the blissful smile of the young man and reasoned that he had misunderstood everything, which meant that his essence would remain a secret for him. The boy, putting one hand on his belt, coughed. He spread his arms out to the sides and said that everything was correct. He was the guardian of the forest, the high elf. Bill scratched his temple and drove away the question of what he had planned in his head. The guy looked at him and said that he had not recognized him earlier and asked to forgive him for such ignorance. The hero waved his hand and replied that everything was fine, it happens to everyone. Kevin covered his mouth with his hand and asked if elves always behaved so arrogantly. Julie spread her arms out to the sides and said that she did not know and that she thought Royce himself had never met them. The guy, looking at the twins, assumed that they were also elves then. The hero put his hand on his chest and replied that everything was correct. These were warrior elves who accompanied him. The twins reacted furiously, and Bill sighed in shame. He thought that it did not concern him. After all, it was not the first day with them. Royce looked up and turning to the man, said that he had a favor to ask of him. The tiger looked at him sweetly, and the boy offered to take care of this baby. The guy looked at him in surprise and clarified that he wanted to give him a Thunder Tiger cub to raise. The twins pounced on the boy, who covered his ears with his hands. They shouted that they did not agree, claiming that the tiger was theirs. Royce looked away in disappointment. Bill looked at him with complete seriousness. He grabbed these boys by the scruff of the neck. The warrior picked them up and carried them away. They shouted in disagreement and said that they hated the hero. Royce put his hand on his belt and asked the man if he would take the tiger for himself. The man looked at the boy with a lost expression and said that this cub would only obey him as a high elf. The hero looked at him and said that he had to use obedience out of compassion. Their journey would be difficult. He looked at the little beast and added that he was not sure that the cub would survive. The man looked ahead sadly and said that they all had a long journey ahead of them. The hero smiled and noted that he saw in him someone who would surely be able to take care of Tiger, asking him again to watch over him until he came one day. The man beat his chest and exclaimed that he agreed and could rely on him. He would take care of him as if he were his own child. The heroes looked at Tiger, and the boy thanked him, saying that he trusted him and told the little cub that from now on he should follow Jacob. Beast looked at Royce, pleading. The hero stroked him and said that he could not take him right now, he must listen to Jacob, adding that he would return for him soon. The tiger looked at him sadly. He walked closer to Jacob. The boy knelt down and asked that his name was Nabi, and said that he hoped they would get along. The boy, watching, crossed his arms and thought that this was enough, and since he had an agreement with this tiger, he would not be his enemy in the future. The boy, remembering, asked Jacob to feed him stones of the attribute of speed, and the boy asked him again about the stones. The hero smiled and said that very soon this baby would become big. The sun was setting behind the mountains. Jacob waved goodbye, leaving with the tiger. Royce put his hand to his chin and thought that it was difficult, but he was glad that everything worked out well, and if there were no dragons here, the situation could get much more complicated in the future, but for now he was happy with the current result. The hero, leaning his elbows on the table, told the twins that they needed to continue moving west. The boys, in response, crossed their arms and sulked at him. Kevin closed his eyes and screamed that he hated the hero. Julie, offended, turned her head away and said that he took them and gave them to Nabi, adding that they no longer play with him. The boy, smiling, pulled out 2 objects and asked if they wanted a treat. The twins, drooling, looked at his hands. The carriage with the horse drove off into the sunset, and the children asked for more. People were moving along the street. The twins, sitting on Bill's shoulders, were happy with what they saw. The carriage drove over the bridge into the port city of Lufthansa. They thought they had finally arrived. Kevin looked out the window and told the boy that there were so many people here. Julie pointed and showed that the cat girl was there, explaining that she had never seen one before. The fairy shook her finger and noted that this place was very different from the villages they had been to before, and that they would see many new things in this city. A sailing ship was in the harbor, and the story said that life was in full swing here all year round, and this place was the main port between the autumn and winter continents. Royce, leaning against the carriage, looked and thought that they were there, and that it had taken half a year to get from Mount Cash Tower to Lufthansa. He watched the streets and continued to say that they were almost halfway there, and that they wanted to go home soon. The hero's head was spinning from the twins' activity. Kevin was telling him to look there, and Julie noted that there were a lot of amazing things here. Royce raised his hands and shouted that he asked them not to stick to him and keep their distance. The children laughed that he was angry. Bill, turning around, told the hero that they were there. Royce held the twins by the heads, looking ahead questioningly, asking again if it was true. He went down to the pavement. The boy crossed his arms and, looking around, thought. He was standing at the door with the inscription that this was the Siren's shelter. The hero thoughtfully asked Bill that this was the place he had spoken of called the Olden. The warrior, scratching his head, replied that he had last been here 10 years ago and suggested that they go through first. They opened the door and went inside. A girl with a tray in her hands greeted them at the Siren's shelter. She ran up to Bill and asked if they wanted to spend the night or just have dinner. The warrior turned around, thoughtfully, and replied that they wanted to stay there for a while. Amanda looked at them in surprise and asked for a minute. She pointed her finger at the warrior and exclaimed his name, recognizing Bill. He asked again in surprise if she knew him. The girl put her hand on her chest and exclaimed that she was Amanda, asking if he had forgotten her. Bill asked again in surprise, exclaiming that it was that same little Amanda. The girl beat her chest, saying that she was already 24. The girl turned around and called Lucia to show who had arrived. Another girl entered and asked who it was that had made her so happy with her arrival. Lucia recognized Bill. The warrior spread his arms and, laughing, recognized the girl, saying that she had become so grown up and beautiful that it was time to marry her. Amanda asked him how she was. Bill replied that she had also become very beautiful. The boy watched this calmly, and thought that apparently Bill really did visit this place often. The warrior put his hands on his belt, looked around and asked where Harmon and Julia were, whether they had gone to the market. The girls lowered their heads and said that their parents had died 3 years ago when they were hit by a cart. Bill opened his mouth in surprise and asked about Harmon and Julia being dead. The warrior put his palm to his forehead and apologized for arriving too late. Lucia replied that everything was fine, and Amanda extended her hand and said that they had inherited this establishment, so they did not need anything and lived well. The warrior put his hands on their shoulders and said that they had had a hard time and that they were doing well. Lucia looked at the boys and asked who had arrived with him. It seemed that they were not his children. Bill leaned over and asked if it was obvious what kind of children he could have. The girls, not understanding, asked where his confidence was. The warrior coughed and replied that these children were his nephews. The sisters looked at Bill and Lucia said it was strange, and Amanda asked with disbelief how such beautiful children could be his relatives. He replied that they were very distant. Amanda sat down, looked at them and thought. She looked at the twins, imagining flowers growing around. The children pierced the girl's heart with an arrow. Amanda, lovingly, hugged them, screaming that they were cute, the twins laughed and said that it tickled. The hero was dissatisfied and watching thought that let her try to babysit and her opinion would change. The second girl knelt down and, having greeted the boy, asked if he was hungry. Royce turned around and said he was a little hungry. The sisters immediately ran to the kitchen. Amanda said they were hungry and that they would cook something tasty in a jiffy. The girl asked Lucia if there was any meat left that they bought. She answered that there was, and added that she would take care of the ingredients. Bill heard someone sigh. The boy spread his hands, exhaled, noted that too much cuteness quickly gets boring. The fireplace was burning in the bedroom upstairs. Royce jumped into bed, saying that he hadn't eaten so much in a long time. He sat on the bed and asked Bill what his relationship was with those aunts. It seemed like they had known each other for a long time. The warrior turned around and answered that their parents were his workmates and friends. The boy asked about the fact that they were also mercenaries. Bill smiled and said that they were funny guys, that they spent every day together, and one day fell in love. There was a sign with the name of the establishment on the street, and the warrior continued that soon they had a child. They quit their job as mercenaries and opened an inn, and it was because of them that he was a regular guest. Royce scratched his ear and said that it was time for him to go. Bill asked where. The hero looked at him puzzled and reminded him that didn't he need to find a boat to the autumn continent, because he still needed to buy elixirs. Bill lowered his head, upset, and said that now, because they had just arrived. The mercenary jumped up abruptly and, saying that it had to be done, so it had to be done and that he was leaving immediately, walked towards the exit. Royce looked at the fairy and ordered Clarissa to follow him. She replied that she would do it. The boy turned around. He saw the twins sleeping soundly on the bed. The hero smiled and thought that they were tired and in a sleeping state they were real angels. Royce raised his hands, yawning, said that he also needed to sleep. Suddenly the door opened and Amanda entered, saying that she brought them dessert. Lucia, standing behind her, asked her why she did not come in. They watched a picture where all the children were sleeping soundly. The girls, watching them, smiled and said how incredibly cute and beautiful they were. They stood in the doorway, continuing to be touched, wished them good night and sweet dreams. The light went out in the room where the children were sleeping soundly. People were sitting at the bar. Descending the stairs, the hero sighed. Grinning, the girl asked that he woke up, slept well, to which he answered approvingly. Looking at the twins, the protagonist heard that she would bring breakfast, let him sit down. Looking at the man, Royce asked if he had found a boat that would take them to the autumn continent, to which Bill replied that of course, they were leaving in 2 weeks. Smiling, the hero said that great, what about the elixirs? Putting his hand to his face, the dwarf said that, well, even though they were goods, getting them would be a bit problematic. Closing his eyes, the hero thought that he thought so, well, yes, being a dragon, the food should be appropriate, he needs to eat things that ordinary people may not see in their entire lives. The man ate meat, a thought appeared that yes, human food is much tastier, but it will not help them, newborns. Continents appeared, and the protagonist thought that they would get to the autumn continent in 2 months. It was necessary to make supplies for sailing. Raising his hand, the man said that he should not worry, he will definitely get everything. Frowning, he added that after all, they are in the port city, Lufthansa. Roy smiled and said okay, they would go together tomorrow. Suddenly a chicken fell on the table. Smiling, the girl said that the food was ready, to which the other added that they should eat slowly. The dwarf looked at the food in amazement, and asked who eats so much in the morning. The girl crossed her arms and said that breakfast was not for him first and foremost, but for the kids, and the other added that they should eat, to which the twins responded approvingly. Bill looked away and said that he hadn't said he wouldn't eat. Suddenly, his eyes widened in amazement, and he asked again. Looking at the girl, the dwarf said that it was cooked properly, to taste like her mother's, to which she replied that of course, she was her daughter. Smiling, Amanda added that Lucia had helped her, to which Lucia said that she was just standing nearby. Bill's eyes widened and he asked, by the way, she still sings well. Looking away, the hero asked again, to which the man replied that of course, she was the best at this in all of Lufthansa. The girl stretched out her hand in front of her. It was heard that when Lucia began to sing, a lot of people always gathered in the tavern. It was not for nothing that the tavern was called the Siren's Shelter. Closing his eyes, the man said that people crowded even on the street. The girls lowered their heads down. Suddenly, the hero hit him. Looking at him, Bill asked what was wrong, why? He looked at the girls in bewilderment. Amanda looked away and said that Lucia no longer sings, or rather, she can't. Frowning, the dwarf asked why, she has talent after all. Looking down, the girl sighed. The man turned his head to the side. People entered the room. Frowning, the protagonist asked what and who these thugs are. Sitting at the table, the guy said that again, and he was not tired of it, to which the young man replied that a local star had come, and Royce thought that a star. The men stood in front of the girls. Looking to the side, Bill asked where they thought they had come. The bandits turned around, hearing that from the road. The man took a step forward. The people looked at him in amazement. The guy lowered his head. Grinning, he said hello? Standing in front of the girl, the young man said that she Lucia looked at him in amazement. Handing over a bouquet, the guy said that she looked charming today. Frowning, the hero thought it was disgusting, it gave him goosebumps. Looking down, the girl said that she had already spoken last time. Stretching his hand forward, Carl asked her to be quiet. Smiling, he said that there was no need for unnecessary words, and today just one look at her calmed his heart. Lowering his head, the guy added that let him take his leave, have a wonderful day. The hero looked at him. The guy opened his eyes in bewilderment. The protagonist frowned. Carl grinned, looking at him. Gritting his teeth, Royce thought that he was mocking, looking down on him. Closing his eyes, he said that he wanted to sleep, let her hug him, to which Lucia asked that he was tired, to lull him. The man looked at them in bewilderment. Taking him in her arms, the girl said that they would go to the room. Grinning, the hero thought he was jealous. Gritting his teeth, Carl said that it was a curse. Turning around, he shouted that they were coming back, to which he was answered approvingly. Sticking out his tongue, the protagonist thought that he had picked on the wrong person, let him bite. Stretching his hand forward, Bill asked who this guy was. Closing her eyes, Amanda answered that it was Carl, the eldest son of the Vaunt family, to which he asked that Vaunt, speaking of the Vaunts, the head of the family is the same fighter. Stretching her arms out to the sides, the girl answered that yes, even though now Carl's father is a baron. The man opened his eyes wide and asked what nonsense, he became a baron. The man was sitting at the table. It was said that yes, the baron started out as the head of an underground organization. He was on one knee. The thought arose that, however, he was knighted for being able to unite the criminal world, thereby stabilizing the work of the port. Bill smiled and said that he was a bastard. He always talked about becoming a nobleman, and finally achieved his goal. Putting his hand to his face, he added that it looked like his son was in love with Lucia. Why didn't she tell her to be nicer to him? Amanda closed her eyes and replied that she shouldn't even try to talk about something like that again. Looking at her, the dwarf asked why. He was a nobleman after all, and he had manners, and she replied that Carl, this boy, was 14 years old, and Lucia was 22. Bill looked at her in amazement and asked again. Closing his eyes, he said that he was so young, but he was already acting like a man. It was not a pity to marry Lucia to such a brave man. Standing behind him, Amanda shouted, to which the dwarf replied that time flies, he had so much to do, he would probably go. The hero was sitting on the bed. Opening the doors, the man said that he had found out about all the shops that sold elixirs. Smiling, the protagonist replied that great, they were going right away. Looking at him, Julie asked where he was going, and Kevin added that he should take them with him, to which Royce replied that he and Bill were running away on business, and they should rest here. The twins began waving their hands, shouting that they wanted to go with him. The hero turned his head, hearing that they were going somewhere. Smiling, Lucia asked that they really wanted to continue walking around in their clothes, and Amanda added that here, let them change. Flowers appeared. The children changed into different clothes. Amanda exclaimed in amazement, and the girl added that it suited them. She closed her eyes and added that their clothes looked very light, so they hastily prepared new warmer ones for them. It was good that they fit, to which Julie thanked them. Looking away, the girl asked how he could dress his nephews in such clothes, he was a bad uncle, to which Bill replied that it was not about that. The thought came that they were dragons, the weather did not matter to them. Closing his eyes, the hero said that thank you, they would wear their clothes carefully, to which Lucia replied that you are welcome. The doors of the tavern opened slightly. Waving her hand, Amanda said that they would look after the twins, not to worry, to which the protagonist replied that they would be back soon. Walking forward, he asked that he was sure that they would be able to buy elixirs, to which the dwarf replied that of course, let him trust him. Smiling, Royce said that great, let's go, to which the man responded approvingly. The view of the village opened up. It was getting dark outside. Sitting on the ground, the hero said that no, there was not a single place here that sold elixirs. Raising his hand up, he added that this was a port city. Everything should be sold here, to which Bill replied that he should forgive him, he did not know that everything would turn out like this. Gritting his teeth, the protagonist thought that this was a problem. Would they really go down in history as newborn dragons who died of hunger? They looked in surprise, hearing what was happening here. People crowded into the street, they heard that there was a fight. Carl clenched his teeth tightly, to which the man asked if this was the kid who came to the siren's shelter, to which Royce replied that indeed, what was he doing there? Putting his hand on his side, the bandit said that didn't he warn him to leave Lucia alone? The guy clenched his fist tightly, hearing that he thought she would look at such a brat. Smiling, the man said that a real man was a different matter, he was right, to which they answered that he was right, Lucia was too good for this boy. Taking out his weapon, the hunter shouted that they were bastards, they knew who they were dealing with, but they did not mince words. Smiling, the man said that he understood. Looking away, he added that by raising his sword to him, he declared war on an entire clan. The fighter looked at him in amazement. The people grabbed their weapons. Frowning, Carl shouted that they were crazy. Stretching his hand forward, he added that they were clearly out of their minds, thinking that they would remain alive after his father found out about everything. The man put his hand to his face and said that he did not even know. Smiling, he added that well, he was a commoner, maybe a noble boy would tell him about everything. Bill folded his arms and shouted that it was enough. He added, frowning, that he didn't know what was going on here, but how could they not be ashamed to bare their swords in broad daylight? The guy looked at him and said that he had been to the siren's shelter. The bandit looked away and said that he should mind his own business and continue walking where he was going. The dwarf closed his eyes and said that it had been 10 years since he had left this place, and now no one would recognize old Bill. The man looked at him in amazement and asked, "Wait a minute, Bill, it can't be." Looking straight ahead, the dwarf heard that Bill Bloodaxe, to which he replied that it seemed that someone still remembered him. Looking away, Carl asked Bloodaxe who he was, to which the mercenary replied that he had probably heard of this man. He was the one who had once saved the Baron. The man gritted his teeth. It was said that even before the knighting his father led wars for the unification of the criminal world, he fell into a trap set by his enemies. At that moment the life of the Baron literally hung by a thread. Bill held him. It was said that the dwarf came to the enemy territory with only an axe, received 8 blows from the sword, but still managed to save the Baron. Carl opened his eyes in amazement, and asked that this man really saved his father's life. Taking his hand, the guy said that he did not think that they would meet him like this. He had heard a lot about him from his father. It was an honor to meet him, to which Bill replied that it was all so long ago. Looking away, he asked why make a mountain out of a molehill, to which the hero thought that he should show off. Looking at him, the man said that he did not think that he would meet a legendary person, about whom he had only heard rumors. Damon smiled and said that he was glad to meet him. He had a small business in the city. The protagonist suddenly looked at him in surprise. A dark glow appeared around the man. A thought arose about what kind of aura it was that lived around him. It confused him a little. Bowing, Damon said that it seemed that he knew the young master. He thought it was time for them to leave. Turning around, he wished him a good day. Bill's eyes widened, asking why he had just left an interesting man. Frowning, Royce thought that his suspicions were not in vain. The man walked forward, and he added that this man would soon do something terrible. A view of the estate opened up. Stretching his arms forward, the man addressed. Hugging him, William asked how many years and winters it had been, to which Bill replied that about 10 years had passed since their last meeting. Smiling, the Baron said that he was disappointed in him. He hoped that they would keep in touch. The dwarf closed his eyes and replied that he should forgive him for that. His life had been hectic. Raising his head up, he added that he never thought that he would really achieve everything. He did not expect to live to see this moment. Putting his hands on his hips, William replied that it was all thanks to him. He would not be standing here if he had not slept with him on that fateful day. Stretching his hand forward, the man said that he was such a bastard. Looking away, he added that by the way, he came to him for a reason, to which William replied that yes, Carl had already told him everything. He was looking for potions, right? Clenching his fist, he added that he shouldn't worry. He had already given the order to his men. In a few days he would have enough potion. Looking at him, the hero said that it seemed that he had some problems with other organizations. He was sure that he would be able to get the elixirs, to which the Baron asked what and who he was. Grinning, Bill replied that it was his nephew. His name was Royce. He was a little lacking in manners. He hoped for his understanding. Lowering his head, the man said that well, as he would say, in fact, the Damon clan had been causing him a lot of trouble lately. Looking at him, the dwarf replied that it was quite difficult for commoners to compete with representatives of the aristocracy. What had happened between them? The Baron frowned and replied that in general, there had been constant unexplained shipwrecks of merchant council ships that were under the protection of the Damon clan lately. Yes, it could be attributed to bad luck. The hero looked in amazement, hearing that however there were rumors that this monster was attacking ships. In this vein, people would think that they too would not be able to protect their clients, to which he thought that the monster. Damon smiled. It was heard that after what happened, Damon, whom he considered his ally, began to speak out against him. Looking down, Bill asked that maybe he should ask the Lord for help in sorting out the situation. After all, it was he who had given him the title of Baron. Sighing, William replied that he thought that my lord did not care who would run everything. The main thing was that the city worked without interruptions. After all, he himself was once a commoner. The dwarf closed his eyes when he heard that he was sure my lord would not mind if Damon decided to take his place, to which Bill replied that it was a real headache. The man extended his hand forward and said that they had not seen each other for a long time, so they could not just talk about some nonsense. He would take care of him tonight. They would have fun all night long, to which the dwarf replied that all night, great. Looking away, he added that he would have fun, but the hero waved his hand and thought that he should not look at him and go already. For the sake of a free elixir he could let him have fun. The man looked at him in amazement. Walking forward, Bill said that yes, they would drink until their noses bled, to which William replied that it was a great idea. Carl looked in bewilderment when he heard that he should look after Royce, be a good girl. He looked away. The hero looked at him angrily. Lowering his head, Carl thought that he should entertain this kid, he was just a child. Closing his eyes, he said that he should follow him, to which the protagonist asked where they were going. Looking to the side, the young man said that what did he think, his father told him to play with him, they were going to his room. Smiling, Royce said that great, let him lead him, see how the offspring of a noble family would entertain him, to which the guy replied that he was such a bastard. A view of the room opened up. Stretching his hand forward, the young man said that he should sit down wherever he felt comfortable, just don't touch his things without asking. He exclaimed in amazement, looking at the hero. Taking the soldier away, the guy said that he said not to touch anything, he would break it. The hero grinned and replied that he pretended to be an adult, but he was still a child, still playing with toys, to which Carl replied that he was talking. Putting the figurine on the shelf, he added that these knight figurines were released in a limited edition, so they should be handled with extreme care. The papers were lying on the table. The guy turned around, hearing that his lady Lucia, this necklace is as beautiful as her eyes, to which he shouted. He waved his hand sharply. The protagonist stepped forward, hearing that why was he touching everything without permission, to which he asked that this was the necklace. Royce opened the box. Looking at the glow, he exclaimed. The necklace was in the box. Taking it, the guy shouted that he should give it to her. Smiling, the hero said that his letter was disgusting, but the jewelry was chosen well, it would suit Lucia. The guy looked at him in surprise and asked if it was true. He grinned and said that it was good, he had difficulty getting the jewelry. Looking at it, the protagonist asked that even though it looked expensive, was it a problem for him to get something like that, to which the young man replied that this necklace was different from other expensive trinkets. Holding the box in his hands, he added that this jewelry was none other than the famous siren's tear. Royce lowered his head and said that's how it was. He stood still. Suddenly, the hero looked at him in surprise and asked what the siren's tear was. Standing in front of the guy, he added that the necklace was real, to which Carl replied that of course, it had been checked for authenticity by one of the best specialists. Frowning, the protagonist thought that it couldn't be, how could it have ended up in his possession? An image of a girl appeared. It was said that according to the plot, there was a legend about the Lord of the Sea, who loved his daughter very much. The man raised his hand up, the thought appeared that he had placed her last tear in the gem. A necklace appeared, it was said that which later became a decoration with the siren's tear. The underwater world appeared, the thought arose that the only important thing was that this necklace was the key to the underwater labyrinth of the sea monster. Looking straight ahead, the hero thought that the underwater labyrinth of the sea monster was an important place for raising the level of the main characters of the comic. He must get this key at any cost. Lowering his head, he turned. Raising his eyebrows, the protagonist asked that he could not give him the decoration. Gritting his teeth, the guy asked that he was sick. Stretching his hands forward, Royce said that he should give him the decoration, to which Carl shouted that what was wrong with him, let him not come near him. A view of the estate opened up, screams were heard. Frowning, the guy said that he should not even dream of it, this is a gift for Lady Lucia. Putting his hands on his side, the hero said that it did not work out that way. Stretching his hand forward, he asked, by the way, if Lucia does not accept the gift, what will he do with it? Looking at it, Carl answered that it is impossible. They say that girls are ready to die for expensive gifts. His guards said the same. Closing his eyes, the protagonist said that yes, such girls certainly exist, but he really thinks that Lucia is one of those who will accept such an expensive gift. Looking down, the young man answered that probably, to which Royce said that it would not do. Smiling, he added that she should sit down, he will tell him about a real relationship. Sitting on a chair, the guy said that he was leaving. Frowning, he added that first of all it is necessary to establish mutual understanding with the girl, and only then confess his feelings. Closing his eyes, the hero answered that it is true, and it is necessary to avoid sudden confessions and overwhelm the girl with gifts. The guy held out a bouquet. It was heard that he does not want to burden his beloved. Gritting his teeth, the young man said, damn. Closing his eyes, he shouted that he did all the things he shouldn't have done, to which the hero replied that if he needed relationship advice, he should choose the right person who knows, and not ask just anyone. Raising his eyebrows, he added that by the way, why he likes Lucia so much, there is a reason for that. Looking to the side, Carl replied that the first time he met her was 5 years ago. The girl stretched out her hand forward. It was heard that he saw her singing in the siren's shelter. At that moment his bleak future seemed to be illuminated by the rays of the sun. Lucia closed her eyes. It was said that her gestures, beautiful smile and singing made him instantly fall in love with her. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist said that in short, he fell in love with her when she sang. Frowning, the guy replied that it was not just singing. Lady Lucia's singing was like heavenly harmony. Royce closed his eyes and said that if she sang so well, why didn't she do it now? Gritting his teeth, Carl said that there had been an accident. The girl was standing on the stage. It was said that 4 years ago Lucia had a favorite singer who was giving a concert in the city. The girl ran forward. The thought came that naturally, Lucia persuaded her parents to go there. They went to the concert, but on the way there was an incident. The horses attacked the people. Lucia looked in amazement, hearing that carefully. A bright flash appeared. The girl was lying on the ground. Getting up, she called her mom and dad. The people were lying in blood. Lucia looked at them in fear. She lowered her head. It was said that Lucia's parents died under the wheels of a carriage. The girl looked at her hand. The thought came that Lucy herself could no longer sing because of the injuries she received. Frowning, the hero thought that that was it. Most likely she blamed herself for the death of her parents. That's why she refused to sing. Grinning, he added that if everything was done correctly. Looking to the side, the protagonist thought that he could do a good deed and get a siren's tear. Raising his hand up, Royce asked if he was really going to give this jewelry to Lucia. Knowing her history, he was completely crazy. The guy looked at him in bewilderment. He saw a necklace, heard that it was like giving a siren that can't sing such jewelry. Lucia will probably remember her terrible past as soon as she sees the gift. Carl looked in amazement and asked if it was true. He didn't even think about it. Closing his eyes, the hero said that he was something. He needed to be taught everything. Stretching his hand forward, he added that he had a suggestion. Smiling, the protagonist said let him listen. A view of the tavern opened up. Walking forward, Royce said that he was back, to which Amanda asked what and why he was alone. Where was his uncle? Standing in front of her, the hero said that he would stay for a drink with Uncle William, to which Amanda asked him if he was out of his mind. How could he send a child alone so late? Looking at her, the protagonist said that he was fine, by the way, and where was little sister Lucia? Closing her eyes, the girl asked that he missed her. She was in her room. Climbing the stairs, Royce said that thank you, he would go, to which Amanda replied that fine, let him chat with her there, she would soon bring some treats. Grinning, the hero thought, well, it's time to get started. Stretching his hand forward, he said that if he could make Lucia sing again, he would give him the necklace, to which the guy replied that but that was impossible. Frowning, the protagonist asked why. He wanted to see her sing again. Looking at him, the young man replied that yes, that was true. Standing in front of him, Royce asked what was some trinket more precious to him than his little sister Lucia, to which Carl replied that of course not, he would not mind giving away even the most precious thing he had, for the sake of her singing again. Smiling, the hero said that great, then we have a deal. Looking away, the guy thought. Wide-eyed, the protagonist asked what he still thought. He says that he is ready to give her the whole world, but in fact this is just the babble of an immature child. Frowning, the young man replied that fine, we have a deal, if he succeeds, the siren's tear is his. Shaking his hand, Royce said that the deal was made, they will shake hands, to which the guy replied that he should take it into account, he only has one chance. The hero knocked on the door. They opened slightly. Smiling, Lucia said that it was him when he returned. The protagonist closed his eyes and replied that he had just done so, then thought that it was going too far. Standing in front of her, he added that he was bored, and that she should play with him. Closing his eyes, the girl replied that it was fine, of course, she would play with him. She held out her hand and added that he should come in first. Royce looked around. Walking forward, he said that she had such a beautiful room. The girl grinned and replied that she thanked him, she hadn't tried too hard, and it was nice to hear that. There was a guitar in the corner of the room. The protagonist held out his hand and asked what it was. A musical instrument appeared, and it sounded like a bahun, a thing used to make music. Waving his arms, the protagonist said that it was music, he wanted to listen to it, and he should play it, to which she objected. Royce opened his eyes wide and asked politely. Looking at him, Lucia replied that it was fine, and she would play a little for him. They sat facing each other. The girl sighed heavily. She was holding a guitar in her hands. The hero looked at her in amazement. He exclaimed with wide eyes. The girl closed her eyes, thinking how beautiful it was. Sitting in front of her, the protagonist thought about how beautiful Lucia was in herself, and the sound coming from the instrument was mesmerizing. He grinned and added that it was no wonder Carl fell in love. The girl was holding the instrument in her hands. She closed her eyes and sighed. Suddenly, Royce began to clap. Looking at him, Lucia said that she did not do as well as she thought, since she had not played for so long. With wide eyes, the hero asked what she was talking about. It was simply a great game, to which she replied that it was true. What a relief. Stretching his hand out to the side, the protagonist said that he wanted to play too. Looking at him, Lucia asked what he was talking about Bayan. Royce closed his eyes and said yes, he wanted to learn to play as beautifully as she did. Walking forward, the girl said that it was true, let him wait a minute. Looking at her, the protagonist heard that she remembered exactly, it was somewhere here. Holding the instrument in her hands, Lucia said that she found it. Holding it out, she added, here, let him take it, to which the protagonist asked what it was. Royce smiled, hearing that the gift was the bahun she played as a child, it fits him perfectly in size. Looking at her, the hero said thank you, he will use it carefully, to which the girl replied that it was good, today is too late, so they will start practicing from tomorrow. Waving his hand, the protagonist wished good night, to which she responded in kind. Royce sat on the bed. With her arms outstretched, the fairy asked what was going on. He wanted to help Lucia forget about the trauma associated with music by creating new beautiful memories, to which the hero responded approvingly. Closing her eyes, Clarissa added that it was understandable. Wouldn't it be faster to use the attribute of reason to manipulate her memories? Looking down, the protagonist said no, it would be a temporary solution to the problem. Moreover, he didn't want her to remember everything one day and suffer. Raising the instrument up, he added that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, that was his motto in life. Smirking, Royce said that Lucia was kind to him, so he had to repay the same. Closing her eyes, the fairy replied that they were behind schedule again. Holding the instrument in her hands, the hero said no. Sitting on the bed, he added that she should trust him, it would not happen again. A view of the tavern opened up. The protagonist held the instrument in his hands. The girl looked at him in amazement. Royce grinned and asked, "Well, how is he doing?" "He's doing pretty well," to which Lucia replied, "Yes, he's great." He looked down and said, "They'll see, you have to do it like this." Yes, the thought occurred to him that this kid is a genius. The hero closed his eyes, and the girl thought that only a few days had passed, and he had already memorized all the chords. Today he played something that not even every adult can do. She added, wide-eyed, "Where did this boy even come from?" A building appeared, and he heard that he should teach him another melody. A blue sky appeared. There were announcements on the wall. It said that they were looking for participants to participate in the annual Cane's Night. The man tore the announcement down. Damon grinned and said that it was Cane's Night. They sing songs there, yes. The guy stretched his arms out in front of him and said, "Yes, that's right. It's one of the events at the annual festival, considered the most popular in terms of attendance." He added, his eyes wide open, "That's why the prize for winning the competition is so generous, and the participants start rehearsing long before the festival starts." Smiling, Damon asked, "I wonder." Standing behind him, the guy asked what he was talking about. Holding a piece of paper in his hands, the man said that the more people, the bigger the crowd. Looking to the side, he added that the bigger the crowd, the louder the screams will be. A view of the city opened up. Bill, walking forward, said that he was going to die. Looking to the side, he added that he must have gotten old already, and he didn't remember feeling so bad after a few days of heavy drinking. The man froze in surprise and said that it was that sound. Music was heard from the building, and someone asked that someone was playing the bahun. Opening the door, the dwarf asked if she had started singing again. Sitting on a chair, the hero asked why he was just returning, to which the man replied that he was not Lucia. Looking away, the protagonist said that he reeked of fumes. He had been drinking with William all night again last night. Sitting in front of him, the man replied that he did not want to let him go. Stretching his hand forward, he asked why he had a bahun. He had never seen him play a musical instrument. Looking at the instrument, Royce replied that Lucia had given it to him. Stretching his hand forward, the dwarf said that his playing did not look like a beginner's. He had played this instrument before, to which the hero replied that he had started learning it yesterday, and no, he had never encountered this instrument before. Bill's eyes widened and asked what he meant by the fact that he had learned to play like that in less than a week. The protagonist closed his eyes and said, "Yes, not bad, right?" to which the man thought he was an upstart. Sitting in front of him, Royce said that by the way, drinking was good of course, but he hadn't forgotten about his work, to which Bill replied that he didn't have to worry. They were scouring Lufthansa for elixirs. Smiling broadly, he added that thanks to William, they had already managed to find 20 of the low grade. Looking away, the hero asked, what were the low grade elixirs? Moreover, he had only been able to get 20. The dwarf lowered his head and said that it took a lot of effort to achieve this. It was almost impossible to get elixirs here lately. Frowning, the protagonist thought that it couldn't be that elixirs were rare in a port city. Sitting in front of the man, he said that by the way, is there a place in this city where magical creatures are grown? To which Bill replied that no, as far as he knows, there is no such place, and why is he asking? Looking straight ahead, Royce said that it felt like someone was deliberately buying elixirs in bulk. A crystal apple appeared. It was said that elixirs are usually used by people, or they are fed to magical creatures to enhance their abilities. The man held the apple in his hands. The thought appeared that because no one uses them in large quantities, there is no point in anyone buying all the elixirs at once. The monster stuck out his tongue. It was said that but if someone was intentionally breeding magical creatures, they would need to buy elixirs regularly. Frowning, Bill said that if, as he assumed, someone in the city was breeding monsters, it couldn't be that William didn't know, right? The hero crossed his arms and replied that it was very strange. How could someone breed creatures and still remain unnoticed? Suddenly, he looked in amazement and thought that it couldn't be. Stretching his hand forward, the protagonist asked if it would be possible to track the people who were buying elixirs, to which the man replied that it would take some time, but it wouldn't be a problem for William. Raising his finger, Royce said that he needed him to contact him and find out who was buying the most elixirs. Looking away, he added that as soon as he found the place where all the elixir was coming from, he should send Clarissa there to help him examine everything. Putting his hand to his face, the man said that he would do as he was told. But why would he do that? to which the hero replied that he was still not sure. Damon smiled, but it seemed to him that this Damon guy might be much crazier than he thought. Closing his eyes, Bill replied that okay, well, he would go upstairs first and lie down, to which the hero asked where he would go up. Standing in front of him, the man asked again, to which the protagonist replied that he should go right now. With his eyes wide open, the dwarf said that but he had just returned and had a hangover. Roy smirked and asked him that he had only let him relax for a while, and he thought that he could do anything. He wanted to go back to the good old days. Gritting his teeth, the man said that he was leaving. He opened the doors in front of him. People were celebrating in the street. Frowning, the hero asked who all these people were, to which Bill replied that today was the beginning of the festival. Looking straight ahead, he asked again, and the dwarf added that yes, now the city is known for its trade, but before this was a small fishing village. People looked at the ships. It was heard that back then people held a festival every year to pray for the safety and prosperity of travelers on the sea, a tradition that continues to this day. Smiling, the man said that the culmination of the festival is the Night of Canaan. Royce looked at him and asked what was that, to which Bill replied that people who loved and knew how to sing gathered from all over the city and competed for the title of the best singer. The girl closed her eyes, and it was heard that Lucia took first place every time. Looking away, the hero said what that meant. Bill looked at him in bewilderment, hearing that he had another job. Crossing his arms, the protagonist said that he should sign him up as a participant for Kane's night. The girl sat in front of the instrument. She looked down. Suddenly, someone turned to her from behind the door. Looking at the hero, Lucia asked that he had already finished practicing, to which Royce responded approvingly. Standing in front of her, he added that he had come to her with a request, to which the girl asked what was going on. Looking away, the hero said that the festival had started. Could she go with him there? Kevin's eyes widened as he said the festival sounded interesting, and Julie added that they should go too. Lucia closed her eyes and asked that they wanted to go to the festival. Well, yeah, it would probably be really interesting. Looking away, she added that but what if there were so many guests because of the festival, they couldn't leave the place empty. They looked at her in amazement when they heard that they were going. Amanda smiled and said that they would all go to the festival together. She closed her eyes and asked that their lords and the princess wanted to go there. Of course they should take them to the festival. Looking at her, Lucia asked if it was true, what should they do with the inn, to which the girl replied that the inn wouldn't fall apart with one day off. Smiling widely, she added that besides, she was sure that most of the tourists hadn't even reached the city yet, so they would allow themselves to rest today and get back to work tomorrow. The girl lowered her head and replied that it was fine. Well, they would get ready and leave. Raising her hands up, Amanda said that they would go ahead. As they were leaving the tavern, Julie asked if there would be a lot of goodies at the festival, to which Lucia replied that of course, her sister would buy them everything they wanted, and Kevin added that they would go quickly. Grinning, the hero thought that it was great, everything was going according to plan. Lucia looked to the side, the thought occurred to her that they would move on to the next part. A view of the city opened up. The girl looked to the side. The fairy looked around. She abruptly jumped into the barrel. Raising her hand, Clarissa thought. Looking at the buildings, she asked if this was the building Bill had spoken of. The man raised his finger up and said that the merchants had sold most of the elixirs to the warehouses on the western part of the port. He didn't know what Mr. Royce had planned, but he thought she should explore that place. Flying up, the fairy said that great, whatever they were hiding, she was a loyal servant of Mr. Royce, she would find out everything. She flew towards the building. The men were sitting at the table. The fairy caught on the web. The man yawned and said that he was tired of it, and how long should they sit in this damp place? Frowning, the bandit replied that he was so tired of whining, he should shut up and play. The boss said he would contact them before the festival ended. Suddenly he looked in amazement. The fairy was sitting behind the barrel. An idea appeared. What was that sound? A monster. With wide eyes, the guy asked what and why he was raging again, to which the man replied that it was his turn to go to him. Taking the box in his hands, he asked how much this creature eats. Suddenly the rat rushed forward. It hit the man's leg. He fell to the floor. The man gritted his teeth and said that he was a useless idiot. He couldn't even do this properly. Clarissa's eyes widened, thinking that these were elixirs. Boxes appeared, and she added that all these boxes were filled with them. The fairy frowned, thinking that this would not do. She had to find out why they needed all this. She flew to the elixirs. Clarissa hid among them. Turning around, the guy thought, damn it, it was his fault that there were rodents here. Did he ever clean up himself? As he went down to the basement, he said that he was doing the same job as him, but he was acting like he was the boss here. Frowning, the fairy thought that these stairs led to the basement. I wonder where they would lead. The man went down to the river. The guy put the box on the ground. He turned around. Sounds were heard from the tunnel. The guy clenched his teeth in fear. He quickly ran to the stairs. The elixirs were in the box. Suddenly, the fairy jumped out of them and asked what he had left. Looking straight ahead, she froze. Frowning, Clarissa shouted what it was. A huge monster was looking at the box. A man in a dragon mask growled. People were moving along the street. Grinning, the twins shouted that the festival was great. Covering one eye, Amanda asked what was cool. Really, it was not for nothing that it was called the best festival on the winter continent, they agreed. Looking straight ahead, the hero thought that well, yes, the scale of the festival is impressive. Even in his past life he had never visited anything like this. He thinks it can compare with the festival in Everland. He looked in amazement, hearing that here. Holding food in his hands, the protagonist asked what it was, to which Lucia replied that it was frozen fruit that can only be tried at the festival. She thinks he will like it. Royce's eyes widened and he thought that this tasted exactly like Tankaloo. Looking away, the girl asked him if it was tasty, since it was the first time he had tried something like this, to which he replied that it was, indeed, very tasty. Turning around, the hero said that it was the sound of a bahan. He added, his eyes widened, that he thought someone was playing the bahan, to which Lucia replied that they were probably selecting participants for Kane's night. Taking her hand, the protagonist said that he thought it would be fun, that they would go and see it, rather, to which she responded approvingly. The man was playing on stage. He closed his eyes. Frowning, Royce asked if everyone who had gathered played so badly, to which Lucia replied that, well, this is a qualifying tournament. Only real talents will pass the selection and perform on stage. Grinning, the hero said that he thought she played 100 times better than all of them. The girl lowered her head down. Looking at her, the protagonist said that this will not do, let her go with him, to which she asked again. Rushing forward, Royce said, come on, hurry up, and the girl asked to wait. Looking to the side, the man asked who he was. For the qualifying round you need to sign up in advance. Looking at him, the hero replied that they should have signed up. Let him check carefully, Royce and Lucia. The man looked in amazement and asked that Lucia, the one from the siren's shelter. The girl froze, listening to the fact that seriously, it was really her. She lowered her head, hearing that, but she had stopped singing. He had heard about it too. They said that after the accident, she could not sing. Lucia leaned against the wall. Suddenly, her eyes widened. The hero was holding her hand. Smiling, he said that she should not worry, he would sing, and she would play the instrument. Looking at him, Lucia asked again. The protagonist extended his hand to her. Looking down, the girl objected. Frowning, the man asked that they were soon. If they needed time to prepare, they could let the next participant go first. Standing on the stage, Royce greeted the villagers, and then introduced himself and said that he came to them from the siren's shelter. Looking away, the hero said that they had to listen to the playing and singing of people who were completely far from art. He felt very sorry for them. Stretching his hand out to the side, he added that, first of all, he should invite Lucia to the stage, who would be helping him today. The girl came out on stage. The crowd applauded with admiration. Lowering her head, Lucia exclaimed. Looking at the hero, she said that she thought she couldn't handle it. Stretching his hands forward, the protagonist said that he should give her his hand, to which she asked what for. A glow appeared around them. The girl opened her eyes in amazement. Holding the hero's hand, Lucia thought that it became much easier for her when she took his hand. Winking, Royce said that she shouldn't worry, they would succeed, okay. The girl sighed and replied that she was grateful for the kind words. Sitting down on a chair, she said that well, he could start singing, and she would tune in, to which the hero responded approvingly. The hero raised his hand forward and shouted that they had probably been waiting for a long time, and that he would sing a song for them right now. The guy raised his eyebrows and asked that this boy would sing, and not Lucia, to which the girl replied that that was true, he was certainly cute, but she doubted his singing abilities. The protagonist sighed. Raising his hand up, he began to sing. Smiling, the guy said that his voice was beautiful, and the girl replied that she had never heard such an angelic voice before. Closing his eyes, the hero said that none of this mattered, nothing mattered. Extending his hand forward, he added that he wanted to live with her for 500 years, and that was why she was rejecting him. Tears appeared in the man's eyes and he said that it was so sad, and the guy added that he was sad, but at the same time his chest was filled with feelings. The girl looked at him in amazement. Turning his head, the protagonist gave the command. Lucia began to play the instrument. Royce stretched his hand forward and sang that he wanted to live as well as others. He closed his eyes and added that none of it mattered, nothing mattered. The crowd began to cry, and it was heard that he wanted to live 10,000 years, no more, no less. The hero raised his hand up. The man froze in amazement. The people froze in shock. The boy opened his eyes in surprise. The protagonist smiled, looking at them. He bowed, hearing their joyful exclamations. Royce waved his hand, thanking them, and then thought that the people of this world had learned what trout was. The girl stood next to him. Lucia looked down, hearing that she thanked everyone. A view of the building opened up. Sitting on a chair, the hero said how hard it was. It turns out that singing is not easy at all. Amanda grinned and said that he was doing well today. Where did he learn to sing so well? To which the protagonist replied that everyone could not take their eyes off him, and the twins added that he was the best. Climbing the stairs, Lucia said that she was a bit tired, she would go rest, to which the girl responded approvingly. Gritting her teeth, she turned to her. Lucia was lying on the bed. Standing behind the door, the man said that he was coming in. Amanda looked at her sadly. Sitting on the bed, she asked how her day was. Grinning, the girl added that she liked it. Lying on the bed, Lucia answered that yes, she liked it. Closing her eyes, Amanda said how great it was, she was so happy to see her on stage after so long. Looking away, the girl asked that she did not hate her, to which she asked again. Lowering her head, Lucia said that it was because of her, their parents. Having hit her, Amanda asked what she was saying. Frowning, she shouted that how many times did she have to repeat it, that it was not her fault. Her parents made the choice themselves, protecting their loved one. Looking at her, Lucia heard that she was the most precious person to her, so she should not dare to say such things. The sisters hugged tightly. Closing her eyes, Amanda said that she would not force her to sing, but if she went on stage little by little, like today, maybe one day she would return there. The girl clenched her teeth, hearing that she knew how beautiful her singing was. The hero stood at the entrance to the room. Closing his eyes, he said that he was great. Walking forward, the protagonist added that the first part of the plan was a success. Standing in front of the room, he exclaimed. Lying on the floor, the fairy turned. Holding her in his arms, Royce asked what was the matter, what happened, to which she answered, what was there. Frowning, Clarissa added that it was in the warehouses. Holding her in his arms, the hero shouted that she should come to her senses. Frowning, he exclaimed. A view of the warehouse opened up. The man kicked the door down. Looking at him, the guy asked and the man added that who he was. Putting his hand on his side, Bill said that he was wondering where all the elixirs had gone, and they were hidden here, to which the bandit asked what he meant. The dwarf abruptly lifted him up. His eyes lit up and he said that he came here knowing what they were doing here. It would be better for him not to resist, to which the man asked what the. Taking a step forward, the man said that he should let him go. Smiling, Damon said that he did not know what he was doing here, but he thought it was better for them to talk to clear up the misunderstandings. Bill threw the man against the wall and said that usually it was bastards who wanted to talk to him. He extended his hand to the side and added that he would make an exception and start the conversation by telling him what he needed all these elixirs for. Bill gritted his teeth and asked if he was up to something. Damon looked at him and said he didn't know what he was talking about. He pointed to the boxes and said that all these elixirs were legally purchased for export to the Autumn continent. He thought he had received the wrong information. Standing in front of him, the dwarf asked if that was true, so he didn't mind if he studied the warehouse, to which the man replied that he wanted to do whatever he wanted. Bill rushed forward. He kicked down the door to the basement. Standing by the river, the man asked what was here. Damon looked at him and said that this was where they built fishing boats when Luftanhagen was a small village. Looking straight ahead, he added that they were currently using the place to transport things, to which the dwarf replied that he thought it was a great place to hide something. Clutching the weapon in his hands, he added, for example. Throwing the hammer forward, the man shouted that it was over there. The hammer flew into the tunnel. The dwarf opened his eyes in amazement. Looking straight ahead, he asked why there was no reaction. Closing his eyes, Damon replied that he had said that there was nothing there, to which Bill said that it couldn't be. Rushing forward, he added that he had to go there and see for himself. Standing behind him, Damon said that he was much more persistent than he seemed. Leaning against the wall, Bill said that there really was nothing, to which the man said that he would repeat again that there was nothing there. The Count smiled and said that if he continued to cause him trouble, he would not stand idly by. Closing his eyes, the dwarf thought. They were standing near the warehouse. Standing in front of Bill, the hero asked him what he was doing. Waving his hand, he added that his sister was looking for him. Frowning, Bill said that he went to the basement, but there was nothing there, to which the protagonist replied that apparently they already suspected something, he would solve the problem, so he should not worry. Taking a step forward, he said that he was the uncle he saw, Uncle Damon, yes, to which the man asked what in him. Royce smiled and introduced himself, and then said that he lives in the Siren shelter with his uncle. The man looked surprised and said that this was the boy he was talking about, he was at Kane's night. Damon closed his eyes and asked him that he was the boy who performed at the festival with Lucia. Yes, he sang very well, to which the hero replied that it was true. Smiling broadly, he added that it probably wasn't easy to convince Lucia to go on stage, he was a good boy. The protagonist asked again in surprise, hearing that he wanted to give him advice. The man frowned and said that if you accuse someone without evidence, you can accidentally die, as happened with Lucia's parents. Swinging his weapon, the dwarf asked what he had just said. Smiling, Royce said that his uncle was very simple, so he often acted indiscriminately, he would try to convince him. Looking at him, the Count replied that it was good that he understood everything. A horn appeared, the thought appeared that it was the same. Looking at the man, the hero said that he had a question, to which he asked what it was. Frowning, the protagonist asked what the horn was behind him. Wide-eyed, Damon asked why he was asking. Smiling, Royce replied that it looked nice and wanted one for himself. Turning around, the Count said that it wasn't something that could be gotten that easily. Well, the doors to the warehouse slammed shut. Looking at the hero, the dwarf asked what they were going to do. Did he think he should tell William? To which the hero replied no. Looking down, he said that if William took action, a war would break out in the city, innocent people could die. Raising his hand, the protagonist added that, moreover, Lucia was on the verge of returning to her old life, to which the man asked again. Walking forward, Royce said that he had originally planned to take more time to gradually bring her back on stage, but now they would have to speed up the plan. Smiling widely, he added that this would be the loudest festival in history. The man hit the wall. Frowning, Damon asked how such a calm creature suddenly became furious. Moreover, Bill, what were they doing here? To which the bandit replied that he himself did not understand anything. Swinging a dagger, he added that it was true, they had one excuse for everything. Suddenly, the man plunged a knife into the bandit. He fell to the ground. Standing by the wall, Damon said that he would have to change his plans, to which the guy said that but he had not tamed him yet. Looking at his reflection, the Count replied that he did not have time to wait any longer. Bill clearly sensed something, so they needed to hurry. The guy looked in amazement, hearing that they would free him just in time for the Night of Cain. Taking a step forward, the man said that the holiday promised to be interesting. A view of the starry sky opened up. People walked forward. Looking away, the dwarf said that he had searched everywhere but had not seen any sea monster. Was Damon really planning to do something tonight? To which the protagonist replied that that was true. Apparently he had decided that he could not put it off any longer. Looking down, he added that he had been stepped on, and his target was William. It seemed Damon was planning to release the monster at the festival and then destroy it, thereby causing the love of the townspeople and the government. This was the best time to impress the Lord. Looking down, Bill replied that to do this, he had to subjugate the monster to his will, so Damon was a druid, to which the protagonist said that no, he was not a druid. He did not feel the attribute of intelligence emanating from him. Looking straight ahead, Royce said that he did have a nice thing, however. A horn appeared. It was said that according to legend, it was an instrument made from the horn of a sea dragon. The monster swam out of the water. The thought came that they say that if you tame a sea monster with it, you can control it. The horn was hanging on the man's clothes. It was said that he did not know where Damon got this treasure from, but it was enough to control the sea monster. Smiling, the hero said that if they managed to take the horn from him, it would significantly speed up their departure to the Autumn continent, to which the man thought that it could not be, that the treasure was his original goal. Stretching his hand forward, the protagonist said that in any case, he was sure that Damon would take action today. Let him go to the harbor and monitor the situation, to which the man asked what only he was, and where he was going. Grinning, Royce replied that he had some business. He was walking in the middle of a busy street. Looking straight ahead, the hero exclaimed. The guy was standing by the window. It was heard that it was the same. Frowning, the protagonist asked what he was doing here. Standing in front of him, Carl replied that he just wanted to wish Lady Lucia good luck, as she had returned to the stage after a long time. The young man frowned, hearing that he was not completely empty-headed, did not know that he sometimes had good ideas, to which he asked again. Smiling, Royce said that today he had just the right job for him. He wanted him to bring a lot of people to the festival. Looking at him, the guy asked what and what was that for, to which the hero replied that he should not ask anything, but just do it. It would not be difficult for him, right? Stretching his hand forward, Carl shouted that of course, the family members alone would be enough to fill the entire square, to which the protagonist replied that he was in a great mood. Well, see you later. He looked surprised, hearing that for sure. Winking, Royce said that he should prepare a bouquet of flowers on the way back. He needed to gain points in Lucia's heart. Looking to the side, the guy asked what to score points. A view of the starry sky opened up. People were walking at the festival. Looking straight ahead, the girl said that there were so many people here, much more than on Cain's night, to which the hero thought that it seemed that Carl had overdone it. Suddenly, Lucia froze. Closing her eyes, the girl shouted that thank you all very much. Gritting her teeth, Lucia thought that she never thought such a day would ever come again. Lowering her head, she added that if it weren't for Royce, she could not have imagined such a thing even in her dreams. Raising her hand up, the man shouted that so, the next ones are invited to the stage. Smiling, he added that those who the whole city is talking about, Royce and Lucia, should greet them with thunderous applause. The girl looked at him in fear. She looked away, hearing the appeal. The hero took her hand. Frowning, he said that it was enough, there was no need to try to avoid painful memories anymore. The girl looked at him in amazement. Raising his eyebrows, the protagonist asked what her parents would say if they knew that she had stopped singing because of guilt. Wide-eyed, Lucia asked how he knew. Royce began to walk up to the stage. Turning around, the hero said that he should think about what her parents would really want. Gritting her teeth, Lucia asked again. The protagonist stood on the stage. Frowning, the guy asked that he would sing alone today, to which the woman added what about Lucia, where is she? Royce began to play the instrument. Closing his eyes, he sang that on a cold winter night, he fell asleep, wrapped in a warm blanket, and in his dream he walked through a field strewn with white snow. It sparkled like precious stones. People looked at him in amazement when they heard that he was walking and snow was falling from the sky. The snow was mixed with rain. The young man said, his eyes wide, that this was a song of a baby's dream. His parents often sang it to him as a child, to which the girl replied that on Cain's night they sang a song that no one knew, and today they sang the one that everyone knew. Standing in the crowd, Lucia heard that it was so nice to hear a song performed by him. His voice was enchanting. Closing his eyes, the hero sang that in the dark forest he heard a terrible sound. A monster with white fur was chasing him. He was scared. Mom, Dad. Standing still, the girl heard that they should save him. The girl was sitting on the bed with her parents. Lucia opened her mouth and thought that this was what her parents would have wanted. She began to climb onto the stage. The hero grinned, looking at her. Looking straight ahead, the girl sang that she looked at her beautiful baby sleeping under the blanket. She began to cry and continued that her baby was crying. He was having a bad dream. The girl stood on the table. It was heard that everything was fine. They were nearby. Dad would chop the monster with an axe. The parents smiled, and the girl sang that everything was fine. They were nearby. Mom was hugging her tightly. Amanda opened her eyes wide and turned. Looking to the side, she asked that the song that her parents often sang in childhood, and why did he need it? Smiling, the protagonist answered that he would like to sing it for someone. Putting her hands to her face, the girl thought that it turns out that he asked for this. Royce, thank him. Lucia, holding the instrument in her hands, sang that their beloved baby, they will always be close until the sun shines and the snow melts. The hero raised his hand up. They were standing on the stage. The guy slightly opened his mouth. Carl raised his hands up and shouted. A cry was heard from the crowd that the siren had come back. Tears were running down the girl's cheeks. Standing in front of the audience, she thanked them. Looking away, the protagonist said that he had figured out one thing. Raising his eyebrows, he added that it was time to move on to the next one. The main thing was not to spoil the atmosphere of the holiday. The man was sailing on a boat. He stood still. Damon looked surprised, hearing where he was running. Smiling, Bill asked what he was hiding, something tasty, like a rat. The man closed his eyes and replied that he was so similar to his friends. Lucia's parents did the same. Looking up, the dwarf asked what he was talking about, why he suddenly started talking about his friends. The count smiled and replied that they, like him, were watching him until they died in an accident. Stretching his hand forward, Bill asked if that incident was really his doing, to which the man replied that who knows, he can't speak for others. Smiling, he added that however, he really doesn't like those who get in his way. He agrees with him. Swinging his weapon, the man shouted that he was a bastard. The dwarf struck. The count blocked his attack. Looking straight at him, he asked that he really thought that in a fight with William, he would not use any opportunity. The man waved his hands. They stood in front of each other. Grabbing his weapon, Damon said that he should not worry about the daughters of his friends from the siren. Smiling widely, he added that he would take good care of them. Swinging his weapon, the dwarf shouted for him to die. Looking to the side, he added that he was out of the way. Holding the horn in his hands, the man said that well, it's time to start the festival. Standing behind him, the man said that he seemed to have the wrong address. Grinning, the hero said that the festival was in that direction. Looking at him, the man replied that if he walked alone late at night, he would be punished. Descending to the ground, the protagonist said that thank you very much for worrying about him, but in their family, everyone trusts each other. Taking a step forward, he added that by the way, he was not going to overdo it. Winking, Royce said that however, it seemed that he was the one who made little sister Lucia suffer. For this he would not forgive him. Smiling, the man said that he was too arrogant, he would not spare him just because he was a child. Looking at him, the hero replied that that was great, because he himself was not going to give him a head start just because he was an old man. The man abruptly grabbed his weapon. A glow appeared in front of him. Scratching his ear, the protagonist heard that the attribute of reason, which means he is a mage, to which he replied that he is such a talkative person, maybe he is already attacking. Swinging, he added that either he should start. The count parried his blow. He flew into the wall. Standing in front of him, Royce asked that he managed to block the blow. Gritting his teeth, Bill asked what they were doing during the fight. It was heard that he was much better than Bill. Standing still, the hero exclaimed. The huge monster looked at him. It opened its mouth wide. The protagonist jumped up. Jumping to the side, he said that he scared him. If he had not reacted, then it would have been the end for him. Suddenly, Royce looked to the side in amazement. The beast rushed forward. It wrapped itself around the man. Smiling, Damon said that he was not bad, but this was the end. The hero gritted his teeth, hearing that a little earlier than he planned, but there was no choice, he needed to deal with it. Suddenly, the man began to blow into the horn. The protagonist gritted his teeth tightly. He froze in front of the monster. Kicking his foot, the count asked that the stupid fish was not going to attack. The monster's eyes lit up brightly. Roy smirked, thinking that he had not managed to tame it completely. Looking straight ahead, he added that in that case, he would direct its attack in the opposite direction. Suddenly, the hero used the attribute of the mind influence. The monster looked at him in confusion. Stretching his hand forward, the protagonist shouted that he should grab it. Looking up, Damon shouted that he did not. He began to blow into the horn. Raising his head up, the creature exclaimed. He swung his tail sharply. Royce jumped up. Standing on the box, he thought that he was not high enough level to overcome the effect of the sea god. Looking straight ahead, the hero added that but at the same time, he cannot let the monster enter the city. But he is not able to defeat it. What to do? Ships appeared. Wide-eyed, the protagonist shouted that for sure, this could work. Looking at the monster, he turned. Roy smiled and offered to fight properly. Suddenly he jumped up. The hero fell into the water. Bill looked at him and exclaimed. The monster started swimming after him. Smiling, the man shouted that he was an idiot. He decided to fight a sea monster in its natural habitat. What a recklessness. The monster swam after the hero. The protagonist grinned, looking at him. Suddenly Royce's eyes widened. The monster opened its mouth wide. It clenched its jaws. A glow appeared from the creature's mouth. The paw moved its tooth. The hero parted the monster's mouth. Smiling, he said that when he found himself in the water, he could transform into a dragon and not be afraid that someone would get hurt. Clenching his fist, the protagonist said that in him. Swinging, he shouted that his mouth reeked. The monster began to fall to the bottom. Smiling, Royce asked that he thought that the whole world belonged to him, right? Gritting his teeth, he added that but today he met the true king. The hero struck the monster. He began to strike many times. Gritting his teeth, the monster screamed. The protagonist grabbed it and asked what went where. Smiling, he added that all the fun was just beginning. He regretted that he was summoned. A glow appeared around him and Royce said that they would play some more. Gritting his teeth, Bill asked what all that was. Looking to the side, he added that how was the master, even though he was a dragon, but to fight in the water. The man looked at the water in bewilderment. A huge whirlpool appeared. A typhoon arose from the water. Gritting his teeth, Bill asked what it was. The monster flew up. Frowning, the count asked what a sea monster was. Why was it in the sky? He froze, looking at it. The man began to run away quickly. Suddenly, he tripped over a stone. Damon fell to the ground. Turning around, he screamed loudly. The monster fell right on him. The horn flew up. He fell to the floor. The monster lay on the ground. Standing in the smoke, the dwarf froze. Suddenly, a splash appeared from the water. The dragon flew up. The hero grinned, looking straight ahead. Shaking his head, he said that how good it was, at least he got rid of stress, to which the dwarf replied that it was for the sake of getting rid of stress to do such a thing. The man lay on the ground. He stretched out his hand forward. The count's hand trembled and he said that it was his horn. Suddenly the hero snatched it. Smiling, the protagonist asked why he still didn't give up. Holding the horn in his hands, he added that he shouldn't worry, he would take care of this treasure. Suddenly Royce began to blow into it. Bill closed his eyes and asked why he played the bahun so well, but he couldn't handle it, to which the hero replied that it wasn't quite that. Cracks appeared on the horn. They looked down in amazement. Grinning, the protagonist asked that it would still be good if they glued the horn together. Suddenly it crunched in his hands. Kneeling, Royce shouted that no, his chance to get home faster. The hero opened his eyes in amazement. The monster looked at him furiously. Turning around, the protagonist said that they had problems. Rushing forward, he shouted that they were running. Frowning, Bill asked what was wrong with him, to which Royce replied that he had lost control due to his broken horn. Turning around, he added that if this continued, the monster slammed its tail onto the ground. The protagonist frowned and said that it was a curse. The bright light of the festival had caught his attention. The man held out his hand and said that he couldn't let him go there. There were too many people there now, to which the protagonist replied that it was crap. Looking away, he said that he should get the twins, to which the fairy responded approvingly. Royce's eyes widened and he and Bill shouted that they would try to stop him. They rushed forward on command. People were walking down an alley. Looking away, the girl asked if the alley was dangerous at night, to which the guy replied that it was dangerous, because it was nearby. Turning around, he added that he couldn't believe that she was telling the truth, and then asked what that sound was. Suddenly the monster screamed furiously. Falling to the floor, the young man screamed what was this, to which the girl replied, what is he doing, run quickly, let him get up. The monster opened its mouth wide. The hammer flew forward rapidly. It was approaching the creature. Gritting his teeth, Bill called him to himself. The monster's eyes lit up. Suddenly, he rushed towards the dwarf. Frowning, the man screamed. Looking straight ahead, the hero used the attribute of space, the spatial shield. The monster looked at the glow in amazement. It began to wave its head from side to side. Looking at it, the protagonist said, great, he successfully imprisoned the monster, now it was necessary to calm it down. Closing his eyes, he used the attribute of reason. The monster opened its mouth wide and screamed. It hit its head on the barrier. Royce gritted his teeth and said that it wasn't working, and then thought that the spatial shield couldn't handle it. He couldn't use two attributes at the same time, it was too heavy. The man looked away at the address. William rushed forward. He asked with wide eyes what the hell this was, where did this monster come from? To which Bill replied that Damon had brought it. It looked like it was trying to cause chaos during the festival. Frowning, the man asked where the damn bastard was now, to which the dwarf replied that it seemed like he had taken advantage of the situation to escape. Now it was important to return the monster to where it came from. Standing on the roof, the hero shouted how long they were going to coup there. He added with wide eyes that they should try to do something, at least. Looking away, the man said okay, they would, to which the Baron responded approvingly. Looking at the protagonist, the twins said that they would help him, to which he replied that great, let them distract the monster while Bill made preparations. Rushing forward, Julie shouted that he should leave it to them. They swung towards the monster. Royce looked down and said that it would hold the monster for a while. Bill looked at it and shouted that everything was ready. The monster looked at him in amazement. Suddenly it waved its tail. The monster swam forward rapidly. The dwarf looked away and shouted that they should pull. The monster clenched its teeth. Suddenly it was tied with ropes. William grabbed the rope and shouted that they should not let go and hold on. The hero jumped up sharply. Gritting his teeth, he used the control method. A glow appeared from his hands. The protagonist used the spatial compression skill. The monster opened its mouth and wheezed. Royce touched it with his hand. Grinning, he said that it had suffered a lot, he would help it return home. A red glow appeared around them. Suddenly, the monster opened its eyes. He started licking the hero, to which he replied that it was okay, good boy. The protagonist looked away. Swinging his sword, William shouted for him to die. Suddenly, Royce stopped him. Stretching his hand forward, the man asked what was wrong, to which the hero replied that there was no need for that. Looking straight ahead, he added that the monster was not guilty of anything, Damon was controlling it. Lying on the monster, the twins laughed, to which the man said that but leaving him like that would be dangerous. Grinning, the hero said that he would figure it out, no need to worry. The monster swam on the water. Sitting in front of it, the protagonist asked that he understood him, let him go back to where he was brought from, never approach cities where people live. Waving their hand, the twins said good luck, let him never listen to evil uncles. Royce lowered his head and said well, now they should get ready too, to which they asked what was what. Turning around, the hero replied that they had done all they had to, it was time to go. The man was sailing on a boat. Frowning, he said that damn, he would not give up so easily. Damon's eyes widened and he shouted that he would take revenge on everyone who dared to stop him, even if it meant burning the entire city to the ground. The oar flew up, they heard what it was. The monster was looking at him. The earl clenched his teeth and cried out. Suddenly, he flew up. Looking at the monster's mouth, the man shouted. The monster ate him. He swam underwater. His clothes floated in the sea. They began to rise up. The girl was descending the stairs. She closed her eyes and said that there were 4 more performers before their turn. Looking around, Lucia asked where Royce had gone, she hadn't seen him for a long time. She looked at him in amazement when she heard him address her. Hugging her, Amanda said that she hadn't expected anything else from her, that she was such a good girl. Closing her eyes, she added that she was sure that their mom and dad would be proud of her. The guy closed his eyes and cleared his throat. Looking at him, the girl asked what he was doing there, to which Carl replied that it was because a bouquet of flowers was visible behind his back. The girl grinned, looking at him. Stretching her hand forward, Amanda said that Carl had something for her. Hitting him on the back, she added that come on, it is customary to give flowers at such events. Closing his eyes, the guy said that he congratulated her on her successful return to the stage. The girl looked at him in surprise, hearing that Siren Lucia. She closed her eyes and thanked him. Standing in front of her, the young man grinned. Standing around the corner, the hero said that everyone was doing well. Looking away, he added that he was sure that everyone would be happy without him. Several days passed. Raising his hand, the guy shouted that the ship was leaving soon, asking all passengers to come on board. Looking straight ahead, Amanda shouted for them not to leave. Closing her eyes, she added that they definitely had to leave this place. Let them stay and live with them, to which the twins laughed. The girl looked angrily, hearing that he was also leaving, to which she replied that he could do what he wanted. Standing behind the hero, Lucia turned. Looking at him, she asked that they would come again. The protagonist looked away and mumbled. Taking his hand, Amanda shouted that they had to come. Looking straight ahead, Royce said that if it worked out, they would definitely drop by. The girl hugged him tightly. Closing her eyes, she said that they should try to come. Taking her hand, the hero responded approvingly. Carl looked at him angrily. Smiling broadly, the protagonist asked why he came. Lucia's hands were so gentle when she hugged him, to which the guy said that he was a bastard. Royce looked at the glow in amazement. Looking at the amulet, he said that it was a siren's tear. Looking to the side, the young man said that he keeps his promises. After all, he helped Lucia get back on stage. Holding the ring in his hands, the hero asked what it was, to which he was told that if he suddenly returned to their city, then he should use the ring. Smiling, the guy said that the ring was engraved with his family's coat of arms, so he could count on their help. Standing in front of him, the protagonist asked what it meant. The ring was some kind of pass to the city, to which Carl replied that he hoped he would stop by for a visit, and not forever. Waving his hand, Royce said that he should just not do stupid things and follow his advice, to which the guy shouted at him to shut up and not interfere in his affairs. The hero looked at him in bewilderment. Looking straight ahead, the young man said that, in general, thanks for everything. Standing behind him, the hero said that he was a bastard. Grinning, he added that he was a nice guy. Walking forward, William asked that he was already leaving, to which Bill asked again how the repairs were going. Looking straight ahead, the Baron replied that the damage was minor. Fortunately, there were no casualties. They were very lucky. Looking to the side, he added that, by the way, it seemed that that boy was not at all simple. The hero rushed towards the monster. It was heard that the way he defeated the monster was beyond the capabilities of most people. Bill closed his eyes and replied that he did not understand what he was talking about, to which William said that yes, his distant relative. Shaking his hand, he added that he should believe him. He would never think anything bad about his nephew, let him believe him. To which the dwarf replied that thank you, he was in his debt. The ship began to sail away. Waving her hand, the girl wished him a good journey. Raising her hand up, Lucia shouted that they should definitely come to them. Looking at them, the hero shouted that good luck, they had a great time with them. The ship's sails fluttered in the wind. It cut through the water. Julie, her eyes wide open, asked what and where they were going, to which the protagonist asked again that they were asking only now. The ship sailed forward. They heard that they were heading to the port city of Dormant, which is on the autumn continent, then they would cross the continent by land. Turning around, Royce asked how long it would take to get to Dormant. Frowning, he added what he was doing there. Why wasn't he answering? The man's face turned blue. Looking at him, the hero asked him if he was seasick, to which the dwarf replied that he thought he was going to die. Suddenly, his eyes widened. Standing next to him, the protagonist said that this idiot was so weak. Frowning, he added that he was nothing but trouble. Royce touched him. Opening his eyes wide, he used the attribute of the mind sleep. The man rolled his eyes. Grinning, the hero said that he would sleep for a few hours, and after he woke up, he would feel much better. They would go and check the room, to which the girl responded approvingly. Bill was fast asleep. He was lying on the bow of the ship. Smiling, the man said that this big guy must be at least level 3, the boy had put him to sleep so easily. Looking away, he added that he really was. The old man raised his eyebrows and said that the trip promised to be interesting.